Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If Guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei Was Bit Mature. Now before starting, please give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. You start to die the moment you are born. Well, not literally, as that's not how biology works, and until cells start to die, the organism it makes up is considered healthy and living. Fauna and flora both fall under this category, but regardless, they are in a sense dying as well. All life ceases to exist at one point or time, which is why the world as humans perceive it is two-dimensional, because we cannot see the third dimension from a higher state. As they are given such a limited lifespan, one is advised to enjoy it while it lasts. Because while time never stops, humans can only live for so long. Sometimes, though, it can get really difficult to enjoy life. The idea of bending time as a physical dimension is ludicrous, however theorizing about it makes it seem plausible, feasible even. Supposedly time is the fourth dimension, however it isn't simple as that due to dimensional science being nuanced, making it hard to categorize time to a particular order of dimensions by means of a precise number. That, or something along those lines. Whatever, Issei sighed. It's not like he was going to take physics in university or anything like that. Maybe, probably, hopefully, unless it's required of course, and until then hayadasen. And exhale through the nose. A mound of messy brown hair lifted up from the arms that their head was resting on. With the face finally visible, it is obvious that the messy brown hair belongs to a boy. With an almost pale tan complexion and half-open empty nut-colored eyes, he wasn't much to look at. He wasn't chubby or skinny, the boy looked completely average and seemed uninteresting enough to blend in any crowd of one's choosing. Hi, Sensei, the teacher in question grimaced. He really didn't want to call on the student that clearly didn't want to be disturbed. However, to keep his job at the prestigious private school that he worked at, he would have to follow procedure. If it were up to him, he would leave the student to do whatever he pleases. The teacher cannot teach a student who doesn't wish to learn or put in any effort. He wasn't arrogant enough to fool himself into believing that the subject he was teaching was foolproof and interesting to everyone. It was history for crying out loud, which had little enthusiasts as it is. Not only that, but it was US history to top it all off. It didn't even concern the country that they were in, they were on the opposite side of the globe after all. The remaining silence broke the teacher from his thoughts. Looking at the student, if he cared at all about the time wasted, he didn't show it. It seemed as if the student had everlasting patience. The teacher's eyes resting on the student's half-lids, he cleared his throat. Mr. Hayadu, what can you tell us about how the final push the Allied powers made on Germany prior to the surrender of the Nazis? Looking at the whiteboard behind the teacher for guidance, the now named Issei Hayadu formed a conclusion in his head and said out loud, well, after America decided to help out Europe, they joined the rest of the Allied powers to flank the Nazi Germany from the west, while the Soviet Union came from the east. It was a war on two fronts. The last major battle of the Second World War was called Issei's left eye shifted right, while the rest of his body remained rigid. The Battle of Okinawa. Issei had the eyes of the entire class on him, including the teacher and the two students that sat behind him. God, he wished the dress code allowed for a hood, it would make being invisible that much easier. Although, even if Kyo allowed for such wear, perhaps being the only one having their hood up would make him stand out more than he intended. The class was silent, and Issei's eyelids remained at half height even though he felt a little bit anxious inside. Was his performance adequate? Did his teacher notice him look at the whiteboard? Did it even matter? No, that's stupid. There's no way he could be punished for utilizing his resources. If he was to be reprimanded, then it would be for sleeping in class, not staring at a whiteboard. Oh well, another detention on Issei then. It wasn't like he had things to do anyways. The bell rang, signaling the end of class and the beginning of passing period. Issei almost gave a sigh in relief, but didn't move his body from the slouched position it had on the chair, with his hands spread face down on top of his desk. The teacher narrowed his eyes and pushed up his glasses. Class dismissed. Remember our homework due next class is a 3-page essay on But You Know Roosevelt. Issei, stay after class. The rest of the class packed their bags and started to head out. Matsuda and Mohama patted both sides of his shoulder from behind him. We'll see you after school, Issei. Issei paid them no visible attention, except his right eye following them as they left the door of the classroom. His eye turned back straight to the teacher, awaiting a follow-up statement or perhaps an explanation. Silence prevailed once again, and finally the teacher sighed once more. He took his glasses off his face and cleaned it with his cloth before putting it back on. The glare of the light reflected off his now clean glasses. Mr. Hayadu. No, Issei. Are you aware of your current situation? Issei didn't seem to react and simply responded, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, Sensei. The teacher sighed again and rested his face in his right hand, covering Issei's view of his face. I'm too old for this shit. Issei, you're failing my class. You refused to do the classwork that we did today, and I don't have high hopes for you on the quiz this following class. I'm not too sure what else to tell you. How are you doing in other classes? Issei looked down on his desk, finding the classwork in question. It was a paper stuck underneath his palms, completely stark white and blank, with the only signs of usage being the wrinkles that his arms no doubt made when he slept on it. Yep, this was definitely the classwork in question. He looked back up at the teacher's expression unimpressed. Issei realized. He forgot this teacher was new. He probably had been trying to fill out for this position for a few years, with this one finally being the one in which his application was accepted. He hadn't taught in this school long enough to be acclimated with the standards of the school, and more importantly, he wasn't quite acquainted with disappointment, specifically disappointment in Issei. It always started like this for the first month until it turned to acceptance and then indifference. People see the high ranking of the school and assume since the scores are good, then the students have to be avid learners by result. It wasn't the case with most of the school, and it certainly wasn't the case for him. The school was more concerned about the new rumors and gossip than actual productivity. They maintained their image of pristineness with high scores that increased the bell curve, while the rest of the students sustained above-average marks with relative ease. That's okay. It wasn't a lie. His marks were quite literally okay, above passing margin and right around average, but nowhere near the top of the class. He always tanked the first few weeks and brought up his grade right before the end of the cycle. He aced all his quizzes and turned in all the homework that he completed during the time his insomnia prevented him from sleeping. It really would seem as if he genuinely put in effort if it wasn't so blatantly obvious that he didn't. Some teachers even tried to throw him a bone when he was failing, but after realizing that he didn't need it, simply let him do his thing. This teacher, however, had no clue at all what was going on and had no idea on Issei's counterproductive habits. The teacher would probably say that he wanted to know what's going on and ask why and what can he do to help out. He would say that he cared, and perhaps he did, and his underlying motivation wasn't his paycheck. It didn't matter in the end. Care or not, it all remained obsolete. The teacher started at Issei, and Issei started back at him. Once the teacher realized he wasn't going to get any further explanation, he sighed for the final time today and relented. "I'll see you next class, Hayao-san." Issei took it as his cue to leave and stood up, grabbed his bag, and headed out the door in silence. Once Issei was out the door, the teacher slumped down on his desk. The other teachers told him about Issei, and predictably he said he would try to help, and they just shrugged and told him that he would find out for himself. Now he understood their plight. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. Issei slept in all his other classes, while Matsuda and Mohama leered at the attractive girls in the class from behind them. There was a reason they chose to sit all the way in the back, even behind Issei. It didn't matter, they always took down notes and wrote down the assigned homework in case Issei needed to catch up or be informed of what was due. The last bell of the day rang, this one being longer than the rest to indicate its significance. Issei walked out of the class with the rest of the students. He wasn't the first one out or the last. That title goes to his friends who purposely stalled behind long enough that they could see the backs of the girls when they walked out. Issei waited patiently on the concrete bench of the courtyard for his friends to finish whatever they were doing before they would come out to drag along Issei to their daily routine after school. After school is when all the extracurricular activities occurred, since there were no more official in-school classes happening at the particular time. Issei was broken out of his thoughts by two figures approaching him. "Hey, Issei." A tall, lengthy boy with glasses waved at him. Issei fought the urge to smile. Mohama always knew how to light his day up, one of the main reasons why they were best friends. Matsuda was still his friend, but he was more of Mohama's friend than he was Issei's. Issei didn't wave back or go to dap, handshake, or hug his best friend, as it would be out of character. He never displayed that type of physical affection to Mohama, and Mohama understood and didn't seem to mind. Issei knew if Mohama actually had any problems with him, then he would just address them immediately. Mohama was blunt and honest like that and hated beating around the bush. He always just got to the point, and that was something Issei really liked about him. Matsuda showed Issei the same treatment Issei gave Mohama and simply said Issei, while nodding his head. Mohama, being his usual buoyant self, took charge of the conversation. "Issei, we're going to go peek at the kendo club. You coming or not?" Issei simply agreed every time he was asked, and Mohama knew him well enough to know that if Issei didn't want to be here, he would simply leave. However, he still extended goodwill and voiced his question, just in case. In fact, this time, Issei actually didn't seem to be in the mood. "Nah, you guys go ahead. I'm going to go home and talk to my mom." It wasn't exactly a lie. He always talked to his mom when he came home. What son didn't? However, it wasn't anything urgent, but Issei never said it was, just implied it. Mohama narrowed his eyes behind the shades of his glasses. He knew that Issei wasn't exactly being the most helpful in his explanation, but he knew that he wasn't lying. Issei never lied to him. He just wasn't exactly giving the whole story, but Mohama didn't say anything. Turning serious for a second, he patted Issei on the shoulder and said, "All right. If you need anything, you can call us. We'll always be here for you. We'll see you on Monday then." What was left unsaid was that Mohama really meant me when he said us. Matsuda and Issei had both exchanged contact information, but no conversations ever occurred between them and their messages remained dry. It was more of a formality than anything, and when Mohama was sick during school, it was ever more so apparent that Issei didn't really value conversing with Matsuda, and Matsuda didn't push the issue. It was extremely awkward to Matsuda, but it didn't seem like it bothered Issei at all. Mohama's hand resting on Issei's shoulder for a few seconds, it became obvious that Issei wasn't going to give any verbal or visual confirmation, but Mohama knew that Issei had heard him. Mohama's infectious smile came back, and he removed his hand from Issei's shoulder and put his arm over Matsuda's neck. Alright, well, Matsuda and I are going to go by ourselves then. You don't know what you're missing out on, Issei. I heard from someone that 40, 24, 26s attend today's meeting. He said the 6 digits so reverently like it was a well-guarded secret that or a URL on an hentai. Oppai wait. Wanasama would definitely notice if I wasn't here today and would certainly miss me. Come on, Matsuda, sighed Issei. Mohama slung his arm over Matsuda's shoulder and tugged him in, turning them both around to walk in the opposite direction as Mohama's hand waved behind him. Issei continued to look at their disappearing figures as they walked away. The edge of his lips curled up as he remembered what Mohama told him. Not quite yet a smile, but it was forming into one fairly quickly. Mohama was always there for him and was never annoying or intrusive. He was a really good friend, and it was quite a shame that he only had Issei and Matsuda there for him. Issei knew of Mohama's dream of getting a girlfriend, eventually settling down with her, and spoiling their children. Issei sighed. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like his best friend's dream was going to happen anytime soon, as not even the skankiest of whores were attracted to Mohama's perverseness. It wasn't like Mohama was unaware of his current predicament though. He was a lot smarter and more perceptive than his appearance gave off and knew when to get serious when necessary. Mohama was simply enjoying high school like the rest of the students at Kyo Academy, and who was Issei to blame him for just wanting to have some fun? As he heard high-pitched cries of pain in the distance, his lips finally formed a nostalgic smile. He knew it wasn't any damsel in distress or anything like that. It wasn't anyone important, just Mohama. Oh, and probably Matsuda as well. Issei knew exactly what they were doing, as they did the same routine every day. After school each day, Mohama and Matsuda would go look at the female students of the kendo club through a peephole embedded into the side of the building. Issei usually goes along with them, because he doesn't have anything better to do and he didn't want to leave Mohama alone with Matsuda. The peephole was extremely small, probably a tear in the wall from a drill or something of those sorts. It was only large enough to fit one eye, so Matsuda and Mohama took turns peeping through the hole, while the other person stands watch, tries to be inconspicuous, and warns the other if someone is coming. Matsuda tried to get Issei to stand watch, as a third person is practically useless, but Issei couldn't be arsed to put in that much effort just so his friends can sate their horny desires. Mohama didn't care enough to ask Issei, and both of them knew that if he did, Issei would say yes. It didn't matter too much to Issei anyways, but he would just prefer not to. The person that stood guard didn't matter anyways. They never reacted in time and were always caught by another girl or the kendo club and then subsequently beaten into a pulp. Issei wasn't an exception, even though he didn't actually look, and simply took the punishment in silence. Today wasn't any different, with the only exception being the absence of Issei and Issei not being able to see what happened in person. Issei never participated in the actual peeking, but was still placed in with the rest of the group, with their group name deemed the perverted trio by the populace of Kyo Academy. Issei didn't bother to correct them and simply chilled on the ground next to Mohama and Matsuda. Issei turned around and started walking home quietly. He was alone since the rest of the students were already home or were watching Matsuda and Mohama get beat. Once he reached the door of his home, he stopped in his steps and pulled out the house keys from his pocket. Unlocking the door, Issei turned the doorknob, opened it, and walked inside. He set his belongings on the kitchen table and walked to the refrigerator. Issei, is that you? A feminine voice came from the other side of the house and he heard footsteps approaching him. The footsteps progressively got louder while Issei's upper body was inside the refrigerator, looking for something. Issei found what he was looking for, the tofu and scallion. He was going to make a simple miso soup as his appetite wasn't there during lunch and now he was hungry. He grabbed them and set them on the stove counter along with the other ingredients and closed the refrigerator door. The footsteps were now silent and he heard "Oh, Issei" from behind him and was suddenly hugged at the stomach from behind him. A female's was pressed against his back, but he already knew who it was without needing to turn it around. After all, there was only one female that Issei knew, his mother. "I was so worried about you. How was school? Did you do well in your class? Find any girls? Tell me about your day." Issei told her the same thing he did every time. "I'm okay, Mom. It was a rather uneventful day. I just did what I normally do. My grades are fine." He chose to ignore the question about girls. He knew his mother cared about him dearly, but he didn't want her to worry about him. She already had enough on her plate. Well, not really, but regardless, she didn't need to worry. He never told her about his detentions, and always said he was hanging out with Mohama on the weekends, with Mohama confirming his cover-up story. She was the only person Issei ever lied to, and his teachers respected his wishes enough to align with whatever lie he told her this time. Unlike Issei, they never lied to her, they just withheld information about his sleeping in class and his failings. They always said he was doing well in their class, which wasn't exactly a lie. Even failing would be considered well for Issei since his grade never dropped low enough that he couldn't bring it back up, and he proceeded to do exactly that later on in the cycle. Issei felt his mother's hair tickling him as she rose her head from against his back and her cascade of hair left his forearms. She let go of him and said, "Okay, if you're so sure, I'll be with your father in our room then. Tell me if you need anything." He heard her footsteps leave as she walked away and Issei didn't move until her footsteps went quiet again. His mouth was in a sad smile as he moved once again, cooking his miso soup. The house was in silence, with the only noise being that of Issei stirring the pot of bouillon. Once the soup was finished cooking, he poured it out in a bowl and started slowly eating. The food went down his throat as he swallowed, and paid it no mind. It wasn't bland in practicality, but it certainly was in metaphor. His tongue registered the taste, but his mind ignored it. Food was food. Issei considered himself an above-average chef, but that wasn't to say much as the average wasn't really anything special to go by. Soon, without realizing it, the bowl of miso soup became empty, and even though Issei felt full after the first bite, he continued to haphazardly stuff the rest of it down his throat. It was a bad habit that Issei got used to doing at this point, since his appetite was sporadic and fluctuated all the time, but he never wasted any food. Issei slowly stood up to walk towards the sink and started washing his dishes. Once he finished, Issei left them out to dry and headed upstairs to get to his room. He entered his room and closed the door behind him. He looked at his computer to see if he wanted to play games or watch any videos, but he decided that he wasn't in the mood for recreation and just laid down on his bed. Issei closed his eyes, but couldn't go to sleep even though he was extremely tired. Nevertheless, he held his pose and laid still, hoping to finally drift off to sleep, but after the 30-minute mark, Issei realized that it was futile. He got up to his desk to start doing homework. He finished his math and science homework, but as he looked at his literature homework, he realized that he could just breeze through this one. He quickly glanced at the prompt and just wrote down whatever bullshit Issei was thinking about writing today. He made sure to add some fancy words and put in random book titles that were covered the previous school year and related them to the ones they were currently studying. It wasn't anything special, but it would pass him, and that's all he cared about. He nodded to sleep in his chair on top of his essay paper and drifted to the realm of Morpheus. He awoke sometime later and checked his clock. 7 a.m. The first bell rang at 7:30 and it took him 20 minutes to walk to school. He looked down at his paper and saw that it was unfinished. Oh, well, he would just do it in first period. He went to the bathroom to brush his teeth and take a cold shower. Once he finished, he realized he slept in his school uniform, so he simply grabbed a new pair and would wash this pair today. He grabbed a couple of snacks from his kitchen in case he got hungry during lunch and headed out, grabbing his backpack that was still left on the kitchen table from yesterday. He locked the door behind him and started walking. As he arrived at the courtyard, he was greeted by 2 waves. Unfortunately, both were from the same person. Mohama was waving both his hands at Issei for some reason. Issei simply attributed it to just being Mohama things and walked towards his best friend. Matsuda was right beside Mohama as well, just lackadaisically tending off to the side. Matsuda had one of his hands in his pocket, and lazily waved his other hand at Issei before dropping it back down to his side, getting his meaning across without saying a word. Mohama gave Issei a troublemaker's smile. Issei, buddy, you missed yesterday. There was this one girl with really big oppai at kendo yesterday. Not as massive as Raya-senpai or Aikna-san's, but it was still very impressive. It alleviated the pain of my bruised jaw just thinking about how good of a day it was. Rias Gremory and Akino Hanjima were considered the 2 most attractive females that attended Kyo Academy. The saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but it was an understatement to say that most people in Kyo Academy had a crush on them. Or at least, that was all in accordance to what Mohama says, since Issei had never seen either of the 2 before. Matsuda shared a similar sentiment, so there's a high chance that Mohama's statistics at least somewhat true. But then again, their standards aren't really the highest, with only Eikakuryu being the only girl in the school so repulsive that even they are in fear of her. With Issei's uncaring expression showing his indifference, Mohama finished, whatever man, I won't bore you with the details. Did you talk to your mom? Mohama wasn't talking in a serious tone, but not really his usual joyful tone either. It was something in between and had an undertone of offered assistance if need be. Yeah, was all that Mohama got, and if he was displeased with the lack of a response, he didn't show it. Alright, let's head to class. What's our first period again? Mohama said, ready to start the day. Taking his schedule out of his backpack to look at it, he looked at the name of his first class. Oh, it's just chemistry. You know, Issei, we share this class with Mohama started once he saw what the name of the class was. Issei stopped listening as Mohama started listing off names of girls and their measurements that he couldn't give a single shit about. This was going to be a long day. The rest of the day followed in ordinance with the rest of Issei's time at Kyo Academy, utter boredom. Issei spaced out for the rest of the day and suddenly found himself right next to Mohama and Matsuda, sprawled on the ground adjacent to them. Issei didn't even look at their prone forms, got up, and proceeded to walk home in the opposite direction, paying no heed to his 2 friends that he just left behind. Everyone in Kyo was pointing at his closest friends and laughing except one girl that was walking in front of him. She had a petite figure and was significantly shorter than him, which was pretty surprising considering he was only 5'9", which would make her about 5'0" or 5'12". She had long black hair that covered his view of her face, considering she was looking down at an open book held in her hands. Noticing her obliviousness to not only the situation but her surroundings, Issei simply moved a little to the right and continued on passing by, her lack of awareness irrelevant. He felt the sensation of being watched and heard hurried quiet footsteps behind him. His arm was grabbed from behind Aino. Matt, he turned around just in time to see the girl from earlier fall forward onto him, surprised by his swift turn and stop in motion, but he balanced her with both of his hands on her shoulders at arm's length away. He held a firm grip on her, but her knees caved in and she started to collapse to the ground. Luckily, he moved his hands from her shoulders to grab her arm and pull her back up so she could stand straight. This girl was very clumsy, it seemed. Even though she was saved from the impact of the fall, her bag and her books were not. The bag hit the ground with a thud and additional books and writing utensils fell out of it. The strap was already loosened and it looked like it would take some time to pick up her belongings. He let go of the girl's arms and hoped that she wouldn't fall down the moment that he left contact. Arigato, sorry about that. My name is Yuma. Her voice was soft and calm, and while she didn't stutter, she seemed really shy and introverted. Issei didn't respond and instead was looking behind her, seeing Mohama looking at them with an unreadable expression in his eyes. The glare of the sun reflecting off the lens of his glasses didn't help to guess what he's thinking either. Realizing the girl was still talking to him, he watched her mouth move, but her words went in his ear and out the other, and he simply looked down on the ground beside her. She followed his gaze and exclaimed, "Oh, my stuff." She bent down to pick it up while Issei just looked down at her, waiting patiently for her to finish. It seemed like she was taking her time. Whether that was on purpose or not, Issei had no idea. After a minute, she was finished and stood back up. Issei took that as his cue to leave and turned around to walk home again. Wait, he heard from behind him again and turned to look at the same girl calling out to him. "I didn't get your name," she remarked. Issei fought the urge to reply, "That's because I didn't tell you it," and simply said, "Hayaudu." Issei Hayaudu. "Oh, nice to meet you, Issei Hayaudu. I'm sort of new to this town. Can you show me around Hayaudu?" And Issei noted her Kyo Academy uniform and knew that he had never seen her before. Then again, he never really paid attention to anyone around him, so he really had no idea if that was actually true information or not. "I can't today. I'm going home to talk to my mom." "Didn't you say you had somewhere to be?" Issei didn't actually know if she did, as he didn't pick up a single tidbit of what she was babbling out to him earlier, but it seemed like either he guessed right or she didn't remember what she said either. "Oh, that's right. Well, see you tomorrow, Issei." She waved at him as she went in the direction of the courtyard. "I didn't say yes," Issei murmured as her figure disappeared into the school grounds. He watched her leave as well, and it seemed Mohama was as well, keeping his glasses on her leaving figure. After the last trace of her was gone, he walked towards Issei and asked who was that. Issei responded, "I don't know. Some girl, I think." It wasn't like Issei never had a girl talk to him in his life before. He never dated anyone, but a conversation with a girl wasn't anything too out of the ordinary. Mohama continued to look at him with a serious expression on his face. "Violet eyes," he simply said. Seeing Issei's silence as a sign to continue, he elaborated. "That's not a normal eye color, especially not here in Japan. Violet irises are so rare they aren't even considered an ophthalmological pigment. Only about 2% of people in the world have green eyes, which is the actual rarest eye color. Violet eyes, however, are only known to show up as a genetic mutation in albinos, and only 1 in 20,000 people in every country have albinism. That doesn't even count for the fact that violet eyes are a rarity even for albinos. Additionally, that's the worldwide statistic, not Japan, which would without a doubt be an even lower percentage." Was all that Issei said. His response could mean literally anything, but Mohama seemed to understand, or at least have an idea what was going on through Issei's head, or perhaps what wasn't. "You weren't watching, but as you walked past her, she immediately closed her book and turned around to talk to you. Just be careful, Issei." Mohama finished and turned around to walk in his own direction. Issei duly noted what Mohama said and turned around to walk home himself. Once he stepped into his house, he heard a worried Issei, "You came home late today. Did anything happen?" Issei smiled. His mother truly did care for him and her love was obvious. "No, Mom, nothing happened. It was just the same old day." She seemed to calm down after hearing that. "Oh, okay. Did you talk to any girls?" "No," Issei replied instantly. "Perhaps too instant." She raised her eyebrow at him. He went to affirm what he said earlier by distracting her about what she noticed. He lightly hugged her and kissed her cheek. "Don't worry about me, Akasan. I'm okay." He didn't see her face because it was covered by his, but he knew she was smiling. His mother always smiled when he showed physical affection back to her. She was a tactile person like that. He let go of her, and sure enough she had a huge smile on her face. "Okay, Issei, I'll let it go this time. You better tell me tomorrow if that girl talks to you again though." She pointed her finger at him and feigned anger but quickly smiled as she dropped her finger in her stern display. He broke eye contact with her as he turned around to walk upstairs to his room. He dropped his backpack on the floor, took off his shoes and flopped on top of his bed. His mother was very protective of him and loved him dearly. She knew her limits though and didn't smother him with love, and he was extremely thankful for that. She never called him dear, honey, baby, my sweet, my little flower, my child, or any other hypocorisms. He appreciated it more than she knew. He always found any types of those nicknames patronizing or condescending, especially if they came from a parent. To give your offspring a name and not use it is extremely insulting, considering that the name written down on the birth certificate wasn't chosen by the child in the relationship. Suffice to say, Issei worried about her every day, and she was his main motivation to keep moving forward. He never showed it or expressed it in any way, but Issei cared for his mother immensely. Not as much as she cared for him, but that wasn't really a good comparison. His mother was the nicest person he knew and he didn't deserve her as a mother. Neither did his father for that matter. If soulmates existed, then his mother was convinced that his father was hers. However, Issei wasn't so sure if the feeling was that strong the other way around. The love in his family was mutual, but both Issei and his mother knew that his father just wanted a family that would love him. The fact that it happened this way stayed consistent, but love isn't an ideal weak enough to be constricted by fate. Whatever, it happened this way, so there was no point in talking about what could have or couldn't have been. His father loved him and he loved his father, that was for sure, but he interacted with his father about the same as he interacted with his classmates besides Matsuda and Mohama. His father didn't seem to mind too much, since both Issei knew that his father loved him and his father knew that Issei loved him back. His mother, on the other hand, Issei didn't know what he would do without her. Not in actuality, it wouldn't be that difficult to live on his own, he was at the age after all, but rather in practicality. He wasn't sure the exact severity of his feelings during the event that he would lose her, but Issei knew that he would be devastated. Issei closed his eyes in forlornness. Maybe he would get a girlfriend, just so his mom can rest easily. Or maybe just tell her that he did. It wasn't the first time that he would have lied to her. Issei cringed, the reminder of his dishonesty to his mother disgusting him. His mother made him apply to Kyoto Academy not for him to have the best possible education or because it would look on his resume. No, she did it because she knew it held predominantly female attendees, and by increasing the percentage of the other gender being around Issei, they would talk to him and the other way around. To her credit, it worked to a certain extent. He did have to interact with more females, but his feelings toward them never changed. Issei wasn't searching for any romantic relationships, and while his hormones were off the chart due to his pubescent mind, he had enough resemblance of self-control to have a modicum of responsibility, and proceeded to never act on said feelings. His constant no's didn't stop his mother from asking about them every day, and Issei was actually a little bit curious to see what would happen if he said yes. Would she be happy? Would she be sad? Would she tease him about it? Would she give him relationship advice or play matchmaker? Issei didn't know if he wanted to find out, and it was a bit of a shame that the only time it would actually be the truth was today. Just thinking about it just made him tire out, and Issei fell asleep on his bed quickly after. Issei opened his eyes, becoming aware of his surroundings. Not sure when he fell to sleep, Issei reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Flipping the lid open, he looked at the top right of the screen and saw the time. It was 5:30 a.m. There was still an hour and a half more until he had to walk to school. Groaning in exasperation, Issei reluctantly sat up in his bed and turned on his computer. He supposed he could play a couple of flash games to spend the time. It was not long after that Issei realized that watching paint dry would provide more entertainment, indicative by Issei slouching against the back of his chair as he stretched his fingers to loosely press the WASD buttons on the keyboard. Issei's fingers slowed to a stop as they lazily rested on his keyboard, and his character sprite did their little idle animation, jumping from side to side. Issei brought his hands up off his keyboard and started rubbing his eyes. Turning off the computer, Issei took an early cold shower and put on some casual clothes. Brushing his teeth, he decided to omit shoes from his outfit as he stepped outside the house. It was still dark outside, the sun hadn't risen yet, and the soles of Issei's feet shivered against the cold concrete of the sidewalk. Issei put his hands behind his head, leaving the armpit area of his shirt exposed with his elbows sticking out in the air. The shine of the street lamp was the only source of light on the street, and Issei was naturally drawn to it. Issei walked towards it and rested his back on the pole of the light post. Issei's pants had no pockets, so Issei was palming his phone this entire time, but only now did he flip it open to check the time. 5:45 a.m. Issei pondered closing his phone again, but decided to check his messages with Mohama. Even as best friends, they didn't exactly send each other that many texts. It was more of Mohama just asking Issei if he wanted to hang out and Issei replying sure since he had nothing better to do. For the first time in their relationship, Issei strongly considered starting up conversation with Mohama, but he wasn't sure what exactly to say. Thinking to himself for a few minutes, Issei sent a simple "you up" to Mohama. Surprisingly, he got an instant response not 2 minutes later actually. "Yeah. Been up all night thinking. Couldn't sleep." Issei texted back thinking about what. Usually Issei wouldn't bother asking, but he was bored and texting didn't require too much effort. Hopefully, Mohama would keep it PG-13 and not talk about S for once. "That girl from yesterday. I can't seem to shake the feeling that I know her from somewhere." Hoping to give his friend some consolation and maybe some sleep, Issei simply wrote, "Don't worry about it. If you saw her or didn't see her, I don't think it matters. It's just a girl." Issei's thumb was next to the enter button, but decided not to press it and erased his last sentence before sending the message. He didn't want Mohama to go on another tirade about how she wasn't just any girl or some other thoughts lathered in perverseness. "If you say so. It's been a while since I've done an all-nighter. I feel like I'm in middle school again, back during the time before I perfected the art of procrastination. What about you?" Issei wrote back about the same time Mohama sent a follow-up, however his message was delivered a few seconds later. "NVM. Insomnia." Issei smiled. It wasn't like Mohama to forget about Issei, he practically knew the man inside out. It wasn't really that much of an accomplishment, since Issei wasn't that hard to read, but whatever. Semantics. Issei looked down at his phone and saw Mohama's message back. Yeah, I figured. Mohama left it at that, and for that Issei was appreciative. Issei wasn't looking for sympathy or pity or anything of those sorts. It just is what it is, and nothing short of a miracle can change that. Well, that and pills, but those were a temporary solution. Issei removed himself from the position of leaning back on the pole. He stood up straight and started to walk home. It got a bit warmer outside, and Issei could see the sun rising in the sky, illuminating the morning a little. Issei unlocked his door, headed inside, and exchanged his casual wear for the newly washed school uniform folded neatly on his bed. He could wash his own things perfectly fine, and he didn't want his mom to do anything unnecessary, but he took it anyways and put it on. He'd talk to his mom later on today about it, hopefully remembering to say thank you before politely declining any future assistance. Issei put on his shoes and checked the time. 6:45 a.m. Oh well, he would just walk to school a little early today and perhaps sleep on the benches. Issei got more snacks from the cabinet. He actually ate the ones from yesterday at lunch, surprisingly. It was especially surprising, since Issei didn't recall any of yesterday at school, but no one else could have eaten them, so it had to have been him. Issei exited his house and calmly locked the door behind him. As he walked, he pondered on what to say to Mohama. He seemed really worried for Issei, and Issei wanted to show his appreciation. Mohama had always been there for him, and it was time for Issei to be there for Mohama if he needed it. He thought of ways to cheer up Mohama, but all of them revolved around the opposite gender. Running his fingers through his hair, Issei remembered the times that Mohama and him hung out without Matsuda being there to make it awkward. They went to the movies, and it was actually quite fun, but it was pricey, and Issei fell asleep more than a few times. He supposed he would have to ask Mohama if he wanted to go to the arcade this weekend. Today was Friday after all the worries could wait until after school. As he was stuck in his thoughts, Issei almost didn't notice the girl standing in front of him. It was the black-haired girl from yesterday, and it seemed that she was more attentive today. Hey, there, Issei. It's a good morning, isn't it? How are you doing? Issei paused in his steps to assess just what was right in front of him. The girl from yesterday was in front of him, slightly leaning down with one hand behind her back and the other one in front of her mouth with her index finger on her bottom lip. She pulled off an innocent look, and her leaning forward gave Issei a view at her that was pushing out. She seemed oblivious to her posture being possibly interpreted as suggestive and merely glanced at him with wide eyes. Additionally, she didn't seem to notice her as practically ready to bust out of her shirt and pop the buttons that held it in place. Issei continued on looking at her eyes, however, only noticing her because it was quite literally 80% of his current view. Her eyes were the same purple hue as yesterday, and it was quite fascinating. It was a solid color and had a subtle shine to it, not glowing but definitely noticeable. It reminded him of kaleidoscopes, but since it was only one color, it was more like amethysts. It was too natural to be some sort of colored contacts. Issei, the girl repeated, obviously not aware of Issei's usual lack of response. Whatever. While Issei was introverted, that didn't mean that he was socially awkward. Talking wasn't something that he enjoyed. It wasn't like he was afraid of it. He just refrained from doing it most of the time as it required energy and attention. Speaking of introverts, the girl in front of him didn't seem as shy as yesterday. If anything, she seemed really energetic and cooperative today. Sorry, what was the question again? I must have missed it. My apologies. He didn't actually miss it, but he was just trying to stall enough time. Oh, don't worry. I don't mind repeating it. It was. Issei. A much louder noise came from behind Issei, and he turned around to see Mohama running directly at him. Once he caught up to them, he stopped and put his hands on his knees in a slouching manner, catching his breath. Finishing hyperventilating, Mohama rubbed his hand behind his neck in a sheepish manner and said sorry about making such a ruckus. I was just going to talk to Issei about something important before I noticed him talking to such a hot babe. Issei, you never told me you had a girlfriend. Whatever, it's fine. Just leave us behind like that. I'll exact my revenge on you someday. Mark my words, Issei, I will have my revenge. His right hand was clenched up in a fist, and he raised it up in a comedic manner while narrowing his eyebrows and gritting his teeth. Actually, Issei's not my boyfriend. The girl tried to correct Mohama but didn't get a chance to finish as Mohama interrupted her yet again. Oh, so you're single then? Oh well, how about that? You have the most beautiful purple eyes. And Issei stopped listening as he saw the glare of light of Mohama's glasses. He realized what Mohama was doing and inconspicuously walked at a fast pace to class. He would have to thank Mohama later on today when they were at the arcade. The first class of today was math, and Issei came in early so he could sleep on his assigned desk in the back. He put his backpack down underneath the desk and went to sleep. Not long after, people started to file in as the bell rang. He heard 2 bags be dropped down onto the floor next to him. Good. That meant Mohama and Matsuda were both here today. Audible footsteps were heard as someone breathed next to his ear. She seems perfectly normal. Perhaps a little too normal. A bit too naive and a little on the innocent side, but other than that she seems fine. If anything, it's probably a fake facade she is pulling off, but on the other hand she could be not quite all that there mentally, or it could be some sort of coping mechanism. She's definitely sheltered though. She doesn't exhibit any resemblance of any modern high school teenager's behavior as far as I can tell. I know you don't care too much, but STLLL. Be careful, okay? Remember, nothing good comes out of courtesy. Mohama backed away from Issei's ear, knowing he heard him since he wasn't actually asleep. Issei had a couple of mannerisms when he was actually asleep and there were none currently shown, so Mohama knew he was awake. Issei heard Mohama's footsteps back away from him and then sit down in his chair. The bell rang again and he heard his teacher's voice. Okay class, today we have a new student. Murmurs of who it was and interested whispers went around the classroom. He then heard a female voice. Hello everyone, my name is Yuma. I'm new to this school, but I look forward to acclimating myself with you guys. I look forward to this school year. He could practically see her smile after hearing her voice. Definitely energetic. There was the sound of clapping, and after it died down he heard his teacher's voice again. That was very well spoken, Ms. Amano. I look forward to getting to know you as well, and I'm sure so does the rest of our school. If Matsuda, Mohama, and the rest of the class cheers were anything to go by, that was probably a true statement. His teacher spoke once more. Okay, Ms. Amano. You can choose whatever desk you want to sit at. Wherever you want, you can sit wherever. A moment of silence as there was a pause. Then he continued. Okay. Welcome to Kyo Academy, Ms. Amano. Silence again, except for the sound of footsteps that got louder and louder before it stopped. He then heard someone sit down near the desk in front of him. It didn't take a genius to guess who that person was. Hello again, Issei. It looks like we just keep meeting each other. Issei didn't respond to her, deciding to continue to keep up his image of lethargy. Mohama said, he's sleeping, don't disturb him. Thank God for best friends. Oh, sorry about that, then, she said back in an innocent voice. He zoned out for the rest of the class, but eventually heard the bell ring and his teacher said class dismissed. Issei, stay after class please. He heard the footsteps of students getting up and leave and there was a small pause until the teacher said you can talk to him later, Ms. Amano. Go to your next period. Oh, okay then. See you later. Issei continued to have his head down on his desk after hearing her leave. The sound of high heels approached him and his shoulder was shook by small hands. Wake up, Mr. Hayaru, a feminine voice said. It was his math teacher, but to keep up appearances, he groggily lifted his head up, opened his eyes halfway, and groggily stuttered out Hi, senpai, while having a newly awoke look on his face. The teacher walked back over to her desk and sat down. Glad for you to join us in the world of living, Mr. Hayaru. He didn't react to her joke at all. It was in dry taste and cringeworthy, and Issei didn't even grace the teacher with a reaction of cringe. His math teacher continued. Mr. Hayaru, it seems that Ms. Amano has chosen to acquaint herself with you, and she appeared to already know your name before she came into class today. You are to show her around the school to represent Kyo Academy. You aren't exactly my first choice of an example student, but Ms. Amano seemed to take a liking to you, so it will have to do for now. Think of it as a learning exercise. It will help you get out of your chair and stop sleeping all the time. Dismissed. Issei got up out of his chair and walked to his next period. Of course he wasn't going to actually listen to his teacher. It wasn't a real assignment after all and well ordered. He knew that his teacher didn't bother enough to care about if he did or did not follow through with her instructions. She seemed way more interested in that Yuma girl anyways. The rest of his day went by smoothly, boring as it still passed on like every other day. During his second passing period he texted Mohama, wanna go to the arcade today, just the two of us, it's on me. Already knowing he would say yes, especially since he offered to pay, Issei called his mom to notify her of his plans today. It rang for a few seconds before the ringing stopped, indicating that the call had been picked up. Yes, how can I help you? It's me, Mom. Oh my God, Issei, is that you? Almost never call me. Do you need help? Is there a problem? I can pick you up anytime you want. Issei audibly chuckled and said, No, Mom. Everything is fine. I would just like to tell you that I'm going to be home late today. I'm going to be hanging out with Mohama after school today. It's not weekend tutorials or detentions or anything like that. We're just going to the arcade. Oh okay. You made me worry. I didn't know what to think since I haven't gotten a U in so long. I don't know why you care so much about detentions or tutorials anyways. You know I don't care what grades you get. Just remember to get home safely to me. Okay, Issei, say hi to Mohama for me, would you, Issei? Issei chuckled again. I know, Mom. I know. I'll tell Mohama hi for you. See you tonight. Love you. He folded the lid of the phone down, ending the call. I know, Issei repeated to himself somberly. He knew that in the end, his mom wouldn't care if he failed high school, she would still love him for what he was. Still, not only did he not want to bother his parents for the rest of his life, if there was even a single moment of hesitation from his mom caused by thinking about how he's doing, Issei wanted to avoid that at all costs. Yes, it was much safer this way, she didn't need to know. The school day finished, and while he waited outside for Mohama and Matsuda, he was greeted by the girl from yesterday and today pestering him again. Hey, Issei, she loudly exclaimed as she waved at him not 10 feet away from him. Other people hearing her, looked at them and started whispering to each other. Issei silently cursed obscenities at the girl under his breath for drawing unneeded attention to himself. He ignored the other people and closed the distance between him and the girl, stopping just a few feet away. Issei, do you think you can show me around the town today? We don't have school for another 3 days and I've been looking forward to this all week. First name basis, alright then. Looking straight at the girl, Issei attempted to get out of the situation. Sorry, Ms. Amano. I'm going to hang out with Mohama today. Issei knew for a fact that his phone hadn't vibrated at all since this morning, but he hoped that Mohama somehow saw his message and just chose not to respond for some reason. Where the hell was Mohama? Having a sad look on her face, Yuma relented. Oh, okay. I'll just wait here with you then until Mohama shows up. By the way, you can call me Yuma, you know. We're out of school, so there's no need to be formal, Issei. Issei didn't say anything back to her, and instead sat on the bench waiting for Mohama to save him. There was no headrest for the concrete bench unfortunately, and sitting up straight hurt Issei's back. For a minute, Issei considered just laying down horizontally on the rectangular bench, but decided on just putting his elbows on his knees and his face in his palms and proceeded to close his eyes. 5 minutes later, with no sign of Mohama showing up, Yuma sat down on the opposite side of the bench, and as 5 minutes turned into 10, she slowly scooted closer and closer to Issei, eventually coming to a point where she was close enough to rest her head on his shoulder. It had to be a really uncomfortable position, but she didn't seem to mind, and Issei just paid no attention to her, letting her do whatever she pleased. After an additional excruciating 2-minute wait, Issei got up off the bench and stood up. Yuma had to catch her balance with her hands gripping the concrete bench, as the sudden loss of a certain shoulder rest surprised her. Issei silently went into the direction of his house and walked home. Wait, Issei, Yuma called from behind him. Issei paused in his steps but didn't turn around. Mohama doesn't seem to be coming. Does that mean you're going to show me around the town now? Weighing his options, Issei finally turned around to face Yuma, who had, in the span of the time where his back was turned, closed the distance between them again. A whole minute passed by in silence as Issei struggled to find an answer to her question, and then a deep rumbling sound followed. Yuma embarrassingly laughed. Sorry, that was my stomach. I didn't eat lunch today because I didn't bring my own, and I was trying to be polite to the other girls. She looked down on the ground and Issei could see a blush forming on her cheeks. She waited a few seconds before adding, I want to go eat somewhere, Issei, but I don't know where all the good places to eat here are. Then she waited a few more seconds and added, can you show me? Those pauses were definitely on purpose. It seemed like she was waiting on something or perhaps someone. Issei looked at her, and surprising both himself and her, he said, sure. I already told my mom I'd come home late today. Both of their eyes widened. He did not mean to say that. Whatever, it is what it is, roll with it. Oh my god, thank you, Issei. Yuma's arms wrapped around his right and she hugged his arm while he just stood still. She tugged him in the direction of the shopping district, and not really wanting to let her fall flat on the ground, he let her drag him. Once they arrived at the district, Yuma started pointing fingers at shops and asking Issei questions. Issei started listing the names of the establishments and what kind of food they specialized in. She finally got around to asking him the main question, which is the best place to go. Issei couldn't give her the straightforward answer that she was looking for. Best is subjective. I don't actually frequent restaurants a lot. I normally cook at home. It's been a while since I've actually dined, and my only memories of the taste are when I was a child. Hardly anything substantial enough to go off of. Yuma leaned forward again, but instead of putting her finger on her lip in a thoughtful expression, she put her hand over her mouth and giggled. Wow, Issei, you're boring. Like, really boring. Wait, did you say that you cook at home? So you're that kind of guy. You're a grown man, aren't you, Issei? Her voice got predominantly deeper, and it didn't go unnoticed by Issei. It seemed like she was straying farther and farther away from the helpless persona that she displayed not 2 days ago. Her voice was a little more sultry, but still had that bubbly undertone to it. She just seemed more aware than she originally let on. Issei narrowed his eyes, but didn't call her out on it though, and simply said, if that's how you want to interpret it, then go ahead. Well, Issei. She stretched the I and the S syllables of his name, and it definitely made his name sound a lot more important than it really was. Where do you want to go? Issei was about to repeat the same thing he told her earlier, but as he opened his mouth to talk, he was interrupted by a middle-aged man from right next to them. Good evening, is this your boyfriend, ma'am? Issei looked at him and expected Yuma to correct the man like she did Mohama, but she proved him wrong by saying it is in fact. You just interrupted our conversation. She stared at the man who interrupted them. He had salt and pepper hair and rectangular glasses on an aged face. Yuma didn't look angry, but seemed rather vaguely amused. The man's face morphed into an apologetic expression, but finished by saying, apologies, ma'am. It wasn't my intention. I was just trying to inform you that we are the finest cuisine in all of Kyoto. Lovers come here all the time to celebrate their anniversaries or dates. Yuma looked back at Issei and at her lips. Issei had literally 0 yen on him and wasn't about to pay, but Yuma brought out some yen from her purse that seemed way too much for a teenager to have, took the correct amount of money out, and put the rest back in her purse. Apology accepted. Well, my boyfriend and I are going to head in now. Hopefully this restaurant is as good as you make it out to be, for your sake. They headed inside and were quickly seated to a table by a waitress. Looking at the menu, Yuma ordered a dish for herself, and after noticing Issei not ordering his own, told the waiter that he'd have the same as her. As they waited for their dinner, Yuma was looking longingly at the liquor bar on the other side of the restaurant. Not out of curiosity, but she looked like she was borderline craving it, an alcoholic. Looking back at him, she sipped water out of her glass and smiled at him while doing so. After a few seconds, she lifted her lips off the glass and said, "Tell me about yourself, Issei. Wasn't he supposedly the one to show her around? Issei thought about how much to tell her. In the end, he decided, nothing at all. There's not much to be said about me. I'm just a normal guy trying to get by. Yuma laughed, not giggled, laughed and gave him a smirk instead of a smile. I like you, Hayato Issei. What Issei said wasn't exactly humorous, but perhaps she was laughing at an inside joke or some sort of dramatic irony. It didn't bother Issei too much, but it did make him feel like she knew a bit more about him than he did himself. The rest of the dinner proved to be uneventful as Yuma kept on asking random questions about Issei. The only reason the conversation kept going on was due to the unimportance of the questions, because Issei wouldn't tell her any substantial information, regardless of how hard she was going to pry. Day turned to dusk and then dawn outside, and while Yuma had long ago finished her food, Issei's had gone cold. He asked a waiter for a takeout box, and after the waiter wrapped the box up in a plastic bag, stood up and started to head out. He thanked the employee at the front and walked out of the restaurant with Yuma hurrying to follow him. They passed the man from before and watched him turn his wrist over to check his watch, before proceeding to head inside the restaurant. Yuma continued to follow him as he walked home and interlaced her arm with his. All of a sudden, Issei stopped at the light post, not wanting Yuma to know his actual address. She stopped alongside with him and entwined their arms and stepped back. She continued, "Come here, my boyfriend," and leaned forward, raising a leg in the air behind her, supporting her upper body by placing both hands on Issei's. She stood on her tippy toes as she pulled his shirt so he was at her head level and gave him a quick peck on the lips. His lips were unmoving, so it was kind of hard to go for anything more than a peck anyways. Still holding onto his shirt, she asked him, "Can you do me a favor, darling?" "It depends on what it is," Issei responded back. She leaned by his cheek and put her mouth next to his ear and whispered, "Can you die for me? Can you die for me?" Issei's irises widened out of sheer shock, and wanting to momentarily gain some distance, Issei immediately shoved her off his. She was actually surprisingly heavy, or at least, a lot heavier than she looked. Issei wasn't strong by any means and never willingly worked if it wasn't for a grade, but still, though, he should easily be able to push her with relative ease considering she was a small 5'12" girl. Thinking back on their first encounter, he did actually remember her weighing about the same, but for some reason his memory didn't associate that characteristic with her profile. She actually weighed about as much as Mohama did, and while his best friend was skinny, he was still 5'8", which was not really something to ignore. Issei estimated her to be approximately 140 pounds, since Mohama weighed 130 and she was a bit heavier. Yuma's eyes widened for a second, probably not expecting Issei to take the initiative, but she quickly caught her balance and her feet skid on the ground she was standing on. In all of his effort, Yuma was pushed back only about a foot away, and that's when she was caught off guard. After the pathetic attempt to gain distance, Issei started to back up while keeping his eye on her. Getting over her surprise, Yuma regained the seductive look from before and put her index finger on her chin and looked up in a mocking expression full of thought. "What did I say?" she asked with feigned innocence, before her face morphed back into the grin she had on from before. "Issei, you continue to surprise me. What's the matter? I didn't think you could get more serious than you usually are. It didn't seem possible for a man like you." She started laughing. "No, that's not right," cackling at Issei like a deranged lunatic. Not seeing the humor in it, Issei narrowed his eyes and thought of a proper response. How does one deal with someone who just blatantly asks another if they could die in such a casual manner, like it was nobody's business? Leaving the situation would be his first priority, but Issei wasn't really much of a runner. Cowardice or not, he had to make sure that he would get back home safely to his mother. She would kill him if he suddenly just died on her. "Wait, Issei, you're all quiet now. Not that that's anything new, but that dumb look on your face makes this day so much more worth it." Yuma turned around in a circle and her clothes shred from her body as black feathery wings protruded from her back. Her body shined a purplish underglow with the outer black tint covering her arms, legs, and genitalia as the light expanded until it engulfed her entire body. Once it had died down, Yuma was dressed in a black leather two-piece outfit with gloves that almost reached her shoulder and black combat boots that went up to her thighs. Additionally, she gained about a half a foot, Issei noticed. Well, if her wings were anything to go off of, that probably eliminated running. Issei's options seemed few and far in between, but he tried not to show it. Whether it looked like that in person is hard to say, considering he didn't have a mirror on him at the moment. "You've mistaken my indifference of our date as seriousness. In fact, it was more leaning towards boredom than apathy, if anything. Regardless, you have my full attention now." As Issei went further and further on, Yuma seemed to get more and more amused, until finally she started laughing out loud once he had finished. It was a much more pleasant sound to listen to than the cackling from earlier. "Never change, Issei. Never change. Even now, you still somehow make me long to see you at your lowest point. When all hope is lost and there's nowhere to go, my mind just aches not being able to understand what makes you tick. Even when you'll die, you'll still probably never give me the satisfaction of watching you crumble. Oh, what a sight it would be to see the strong hero bow down to Lil Almi. Still, you never manage to infuriate me or disappoint me. You impress me until the very end, Issei, and you've yet to prove me otherwise. It's a shame that you have to die. You would have made for an interesting boyfriend." Issei considered putting up a fighting stance, but that would no doubt fail. He really didn't have any prior experience in fighting, nor did he know any legitimate poses that would be productive instead of making him look like a clueless amateur. His fists were clenched at his side, trying not to look confrontational, but the suspense was killing him faster than Yuma ever could. His bangs were shadowing his face right now as he looked down on the ground, but he realized that's probably what Yuma wanted to see. Him caving under the pressure. Issei finally looked back at Yuma with what was hopefully a calm look on his face as he opened his palms in a desperate attempt to relax himself. And why do I have to die again? Forgive me if I'm a bit confused over here. Could you at least explain what you're talking about before you kill me? Damn it, that was awful. His voice didn't quiver, but his wording allowed her to be able to hold his curiosity over him. It wouldn't surprise him if she just killed him right now just to spite him, letting him die an unsatisfied death without any real answers. Oh, well, you'd have to ask God. He's the one that caused all this to happen. She raised her shoulders and shrugged while chortling. It's quite ironic. Out of all the people to be gifted with such unluckiness, you were probably the only one who wouldn't use it after awakening. Killing you right now is such a waste of time, seeing as you really wouldn't pose much of a threat due to your seemingly endless disregard and lack of motivation, but nevertheless orders are orders. What the hell was she talking about unluckiness and awakening, and what was this that she is referring to? It made no sense in the context he was given. Perhaps he was gifted with some sort of power, but trying to summon it with anything besides sheer will would certainly get him killed the moment he attempted to do anything. He could try to do an act of faith and hopefully be able to clutch something out, but there was really no sustenance to act on such little knowledge. She could be lying to him after all. He would have no clue on how to separate lies and deceit from the truth, given that he wasn't the one who held all the answers. Wait, God is real for some reason that is harder for me to wrap my head around than all of this new information. Rainer threw her head back in laughter. Yes, but not in the way that you think. I bet you're thinking right now, shit, I regret not praying enough before. Perhaps I could have prevented this. Maybe I can still pray to him right now and somehow get out of this situation. Please, God, please save me. Her hands were clasped together and she bringed it up to her shoulder, turning her head in the same direction her hands moved. Great, he was getting mocked. Fantastic. In fact, he did think that for a brief second, before he realizing that sounded retarded and the chances of it working were most likely close to null. Yuma looked more like a fallen angel of some sorts than anything holy, so perhaps he could threaten her with God's divine wrath or karma. But if she had truly fallen from grace, she would probably just taunt him about God while proceeding to choke him to death. There wasn't a high probability of her actually fearing God in any way. She seemed way too confident for that to be true, and she basically pretty much just laughed at his name. He could ask all the obvious questions, like how did she get her powers? How strong was she? Are there other people out there like her? Who did she work for? What did she mean by God not being in the way he imagined? Why him? However, she obviously left out a lot of details on purpose, choosing to be vague by opting for the usage of proprietary pronouns. It didn't look like either God or her were going to help him anytime soon. Issei considered flattery, distracting her, propositioning to do anything she wanted, and many other things, but at the end of the day, he would still wound up dead. The only question left was, why haven't you killed me before? You could have easily killed me when we met, or any time before now. And why haven't you killed me at this moment yet? He needed to know if she knew where his house was, if his mother was safe or not. The best-case scenario would be if she would somehow be coerced into telling him everything he needed to know and then letting him go. Never mind, that wasn't the best-case scenario. It was too unrealistic to even be considered a scenario. He'd be okay with dying, knowing that his mother would be safe. Thankfully, he wasn't stupid enough to ask her to leave his mother alone as a dying wish of some sort, invoking her cruel nature by allowing her to proceed to murder his mother soon after. Well, a couple of reasons actually. First, I had to make sure that you really were the one. When I was told that the person I was looking for was you, I was sure there had to be a mix-up of some sorts. There was no way the person I'm staring at right now is the one that needed to die. Additionally, I kept you around since you gave me a good time, and I'm allowing you this last bit of conversation before killing you, for bring out my curious side. You deserve it for humoring me so much. I went through all this trouble of getting you alone, and I really deserve a break. I set a deadline for myself, but it was more personal than anything. You see, it's the weekend and the bar is open. I think I'm well overdue for a couple of drinks. But that's merely just unnecessary details. She waved him off with her gloved hand. I believe the answer you are looking for is actually pretty straightforward. She paused and looked down, letting her bangs fall over her face, before looking back up with a purple glint in her eyes. I was ordered to. Well, that was much more information than he had been hoping to get, but it still raised more questions than answers. For one, he was alone many more times than just walking home with her right now. She could have pulled him in a hallway or found someplace where no one was looking, and probably even killed him when he was walking to and from school. She could have even killed him when he walked out his house barefoot that one time this morning. It was pretty obvious that she wasn't anyone super important, considering that she was the one sent to kill him, and the requirement for that seemed null. He just didn't know how high or low she was on the tier list of fodder though. She talked about the weekend, but the bar is always open throughout the week. Perhaps she had a job or worked a shift or something. No, that was definitely a stretch. All he had to work on was his interpretation on her wording, and he really didn't have any concrete evidence that she was telling him the truth. Damn, well, I enjoyed our time while it lasted. Nevertheless, I have things to attend to. Farewell, Hayatu Issei. She extended her right arm forward, and a pinkish spear of energy formed horizontally in the air in front of her. Not the blinding white color he associated with angels, but then again Issei had no idea if that was an accurate assessment or not. She clenched her fingers around it as she held it, twirled it around in her fingers, slowly walking towards Issei. Nowhere to go. She accelerated her pace and suddenly thrust her spear forward at him when she got close enough. He managed to dodge the spear by moving to the side and twisting his body out a little. The thrust was actually really tame in comparison to a faster speed that Issei was sure she could put out. She was toying with him. The spear of energy disappeared from her hand, and in the corner of the eye he saw another one form in her left as she thrust it in his and managed to puncture one of his intestines. Catching his footing, Issei gripped the upper of the spear in an attempt to stop its path further in his stomach. It hurt like hell, and he felt his hand get third-degree burns as he was forced on one knee. There was a cylindrical shape of burnt black skin on his palm and his fingers from where he grabbed the spear. It was increasingly getting blacker and blacker as it spread across his hand from the original place where it burnt it to a crisp. Yuma cackled again as she held the middle of the spear firmly with one hand, preventing him from pulling it out. Valiant attempt, Issei-kun. Good try, but not good enough. Issei had dripping out of his mouth and he was breathing heavily. Damn you, Yuma, he managed to let out in the middle of his breaths. She started laughing with her melodic voice again. You're still calling me by that name for your information, Issei darling. It's actually Yuma grabbed Issei's back with her free hand, and with her other hand, she pushed her end of the spear into his stomach with more force than he was pushing back. She leaned closer into his ear and finished, Rainier, as she made the last push with increased effort, and it pierced through his stomach and came out the other side. Issei's body fell into her spear and into her arms as she cradled him on her. She then took her hand away from his back and let the spear go, allowing Issei's body to fall on the ground with a thud. The arm Issei used to try to wrench the spear out fell limply to his side on the concrete floor beside him. The now self-proclaimed Rainier left the spear of energy stuck inside Issei's body as she just watched him as he laid down. A breeze of air blew on his prone body laying on the ground, and his bangs fluttered in the wind before resting back on top of his face. Rainier looked at Issei's body with a serene look on her face and softly let out a good night, my sweet prince. Sorry it had to be this way, Issei. Rainier turned and walked away, but unbeknownst to her, Issei was still alive but was hurting him to breathe. Issei brought his unburnt hand and gripped the spear of energy, trying to shatter it into pieces since there seemed to be no infrastructure to its formation but rather just a conduit of energy channeled into a shape. It didn't appear to work, and Issei's hand fell tiredly on top of his, feeling his aching heartbeat beating slower and slower. Issei heard a sound similar to when the first spear disappeared from Rainier's hand and struggled to open his eyes. He could barely see the outline of the spear dissipating from his body as it thinned out into air. He didn't know if it was due to a time limit of some sort, an intervention from Rainier, or him somehow contributing to its disappearance, but he was thankful for it for a few seconds. The cold breeze blew painfully on his exposed and he coughed up. Never mind, give him back the spear. He closed his eyes once more and tried to embrace death, repeating to himself that his mother was safe even though he knew that there was a high chance that it was a lie and she really wasn't. Still alive, I see. That's good. I can still use you. A beautiful silky voice reached his ears. Go away, Rainier, Issei thought to himself because he wasn't able to say it out loud. Let me rest in peace, he thought before realizing that her voice was a bit different than Rainier's. While Rainier had a melodic tone to her voice, this person sounded a bit more ecstatic and of a higher pitch. Issei struggled to open his eyes one last time and faintly saw an extremely beautiful woman with crimson locks of hair that suited her gorgeous blue eyes well. Damn, I'm starting to hallucinate now. It's strange that my subconscious formed a girl though. I'd more or less expect to see my mother instead rather than an accumulation of my perception of beauty. Oh well, time to hit the all bucket. Issei's eyes closed for the last time, and the last thing he heard before he was whisked away to the realm of the dead was a woman saying live for me. While he felt his consciousness slipping away from him. Yo, partner. Issei immediately shot up his upper from laying down. What was that? It was a deep manly voice with the bassiest sound Issei had ever heard. It was surprisingly relaxing, but it just caught Issei completely off guard. Issei breathed heavily and could feel sweat dripping down his forehead from all the stress. He remembered visions of fire and right now felt like his whole body was on it. He couldn't even recall if it was a dream or a nightmare, and struggling to produce a recollection of it just hurt his brain trying to think about it. Issei let out a deep breath and instinctively uncovered his blanket, before realizing he was in bed at home. In his room, last night's events came flashing back towards him. Going to dinner with Yuma, no Rainier, gorgeous feathery onyx wings, purple and pink energy, and something about red hair. Issei got up out of his bed and headed to the bathroom. Putting his sweaty palms on the marble sink, he raised his head to look at the mirror. His eyes looked even more dead than usual and he looked like shit. Issei washed his face with cold water and, still feeling dirty, turned off the faucet and went into the shower to let the water run as he just stood there under the shower head and took it in introspection. His wet hair was now dripping down on his shoulders as Issei looked up at the ceiling. He could feel the hairs on his head tickling his body and the nape of his neck. Perhaps he should get a haircut. Whatever, it didn't matter anyways. There was no one Issei wanted to look good for, and it didn't bother him when it normally rested on top of his head messily. It was only in the shower and during the rain did Issei realize just how long his hair truly was. It almost reached his shoulders, but Issei corrected his thoughts after feeling it a little bit more. It wasn't really long but rather just uncut. His bangs were resting on the top of his face, held down by the running water, and his sideburns tickled his ear. Issei poured soap on top of his head a little too excessively, and just let it wash down his hair and the sides of his body. Issei slouched forward and put his palms on the wall of the shower as his lower back rested on the ends of the opposite wall. What was he going to do? Was he just to go about his daily life and hope that he never saw Rainier again? How was he still alive? Was it all just a figment of his imagination? If so, were the things he said aloud to no one in particular heard by other people? Issei thought of all the possible avenues he could take to find out. If he could somehow the takeout box from last night, or perhaps go to the restaurant and ask the staff if they remembered him and a purple-eyed girl from yesterday, that would confirm what happened last night did indeed happen. Issei stood straight up and proceeded to scrub the dirt off his body. Damn it, he didn't get a good look to see if his body was layered in the dust of concrete, and it was too late now since the water washed it all away. His body no longer felt on fire, but it finally started to register the aches, but he wasn't sure if that was from sleeping in a weird position or if it was somehow proof that last night's events were actually real. Issei turned off the shower and dried his hair with a towel, before using it to dry the rest of his body. He opened the sliding door of his shower, and instinctively reached for his old clothes since he forgot to get some new ones to wear. He patted the wooden bench where he usually left his clothes, but he just felt wood until finally he came into contact with some sort of cotton material. He immediately opened up his eyes, tiredness aside, and pulled back his sliding door like it was a shower curtain. On the wooden bench he only saw one pair of his white boxers that clearly had been in use from yesterday. Did he get out of bed and walk to the shower with only his boxers on? Issei closed his eyes and furrowed his brows, massaging the sides of his head with his fingers to hopefully coax out some information from his amygdala. He turned up with a blank, damn useless brain. He would check for sweat on the underwear, but Kyo pretty much stayed cool for the entirety of the year, and he didn't recall sweating during his death yesterday. That's a thought. Perhaps he was in some sort of afterlife currently, with everything being exactly the same. A more pronounced thought popped into his head, one that made more sense. Didn't Rainier say that God was real? By that logic, he could assume that Satan was also real by contrast. This was hell. It had to be. There was no way that heaven would put him back in such a boring-ass life. He had to have been punished of some sort by somebody or someone. That was the only possible explanation for his current predicament. No. Issei shook his head. He still didn't know if Rainier was telling the truth, if it was even real to begin with, and even if it were real and she was telling the truth, the assumption that Satan was real as well didn't have to be true. After all, Rainier did say that God wasn't in the way that he imagined, Issei remembered. Damn, he was too old for this shit. Bringing his arms back up from the place of leaning forward on the wooden bench, Issei stood up straight and slid the door to his shower back closed, seeing the condensation of water molecules forming on the glass panel. Issei looked back to the mirror, and he saw that he still looked like shit, with the only exception being his spiky drying hair and the bags under his eyes being more noticeable. He didn't have a resting face per se, it was more like a permanent appearance of someone on suicide watch. Sighing, Issei grabbed the towel again and flattened down his hair as best as he could, not with the intention of being presentable but rather trying to not draw attention to himself from an irregular hairstyle. His hair wasn't being complaint and pushed back up defiantly, but at least it was the messiness that Issei was usually accustomed to, if not a little bit messier. Whatever, he would go back to normal in about an hour or so. Issei slouched again and looked down on the floor, with his hand supporting himself by gripping the marble sink in the same position he was in before, but was interrupted by his alarm going off from the other side of his room. Gripping the marble, Issei raised his head back up to look at his face. His eyes were fully open, but he still managed to look more dead than he probably looked when Rainier killed him. He looked like shit, and as a result, could be considered shit-faced. Issei brought his body back up off the sink and headed nakedly back into his room, with his boxers in tow. He dropped his boxers back on the floor, reminding himself to wash it later since he couldn't let it stay in the drying machine the entire day and he didn't have time to wait for the washing cycle to stop spinning. Unable to find the school uniform he had on yesterday or the day before, Issei opened his closet and took a new pair off a hanger. He was actually able to find his same socks and shoes in front of his bed. Strange, he never ever put them there before. Lifting his shirt back up to check on Issei quickly found out that his stomach looked perfectly normal, with no signs of burnage anywhere. Welp, whatever. He supposed he would have to check on the restaurant today after school. Wait, what? Issei immediately patted his pockets before realizing that his phone was not on his person. Mom, he called out, realizing his door was open and she could probably hear him. After a few seconds of no response, Issei went to go turn on his computer to find out what day it was before he heard a faint yes back. Issei quickly put on new socks, leaving his old ones on the floor, slid on his shoes and tied a knot as he exited his room, making sure to gently close the door behind him. Issei walked to his parents' room and stopped right outside the closed door. He pondered entering the room for a second, but decided on just waiting outside talking to his mother. "Mom, what day of the week is it?" He had to know. "It's Monday, Issei. Weren't you paying attention the past 3 days honestly?" She chastised him. 3 days. 3 whole days. Issei opened his mouth to ask her what happened in the past several days, but decided differently and closed his mouth. "Sorry Mom, I forgot. I'm going to school now. Bye, love you." Where was his backpack? Oh yeah, he didn't bring it to school on Friday since all his core classes except math were on Thursday. That meant that he needed to bring it again today, so he went back into his room to look for it, eventually finding it laying down on the side of his bed, a place where he actually put things. Issei turned off the lights in his room and closed his door behind him as he headed downstairs. Grabbing his wallet instead of snacks, Issei was going to come prepared in case he decided on eating at the restaurant after school today. If he got robbed, he got robbed. He only had 1,000 yen on him. It really wasn't anything substantial, but he had been mugged for less in the past. Additionally, if the restaurant staff were feeling uncooperative, perhaps sliding a couple yen would jog their memory a little bit. But that would have to wait until after school. He just had to survive until then, perhaps literally if his memory of Rainer served him right. Closing the house door behind him, Issei realized that he had no way of locking it. Patting his pockets for the keys, he realized that he had left them in his backpack. He was going to knock on the door when he came home from the arcade on Friday last night since he already informed his mom he was coming back late. Or perhaps, a few nights ago would be a more accurate wording. He still couldn't wrap his head around the fact that it had been 3 days since he last remembered being conscious. Opening up his backpack, he finally found the keys that he was looking for. Thanking God. Going to strap his backpack back up, Issei caught the sight of a piece of paper in the corner of his eye. He forgot to finish his homework, it seemed. Reaching in his pocket once more to check his phone for the time, Issei grimaced as he was quickly reminded that he had no idea of where it was and just started walking. Hopefully he wasn't too late to class. Once Issei arrived at the courtyard, he was greeted with the sight of absolutely no one. It was empty of personnel, students and staff alike. Issei could practically hear the sound of crickets in the distance, taunting his isolated figure as he proceeded to walk to his first period to see if that was the right class at this time. Once he arrived in front of his physics class, his eyes carefully glanced over the room. Issei knew he shared this class with Rainer after catching a glimpse of her schedule when it dropped on the floor in front of him during the afternoon that they first met. She was nowhere in sight, it had seemed. "Ah, Mr. Hayato, you're 30 minutes late. Join me at lunch and we can see if I can catch you up and ignore your tardiness." Glancing up at his physics professor, he still saw the same professor that taught one of his least favorite subjects. He was just as annoying as Issei remembered him. Everything was normal, it seemed. Issei calmly walked over to the back of the class, where his desk was, while the other students were pointing at him behind his back and started whispering to each other. Once Issei sat down, his physics professor continued his lesson from before, and while Issei didn't sleep on his desk like he normally did, his eyes were fully open. He wasn't paying attention to a single bit of information that his physics teacher was droning on about. Issei was daydreaming about all the directions that today could go. Was he even prepared for the reality of the situation? The truth might hurt more than Issei was ready for. Issei was listing off in his head all the symptoms of hallucination and even considered simulation theory for a bit. God damn it. Ironically, Issei was currently thinking more about physics than the other students in the actual class right now. The bell rang and Issei left along with the rest of the class, but was grabbed on the shoulder by someone. Issei widened his eyes and turned around, about to hit whoever touched him, but stopped once he realized it was just his physics teacher. "Remember to see me during lunch, Hayato-san." As the teacher saw Issei's threatened face with sweat trickling down his brow, he switched his tone to a more serious one. "Issei, are you okay?" His professor addressed him in a much more unprofessional manner. Issei quietly panted as he tried to relax himself. His physics teacher had a free period, so he was free to talk to Issei. If only Issei had a free period as well, but catching up on the work from class could wait until Issei's lunch break. "Hi, senpai, do you perhaps know if Amino-san was sick today?" His teacher narrowed his eyes in a worried expression and Issei thought for a second that he said something wrong. "I'm sorry, Issei." Who? Issei repeated again, hoping to clarify to his teacher who seemed like he had no clue what Issei was talking about. "Amino-san, Amano Yuma, a new girl that started at the academy on Friday. Long black-haired girl with purple eyes. About this tall." Issei gestured with his hand to a height around his upper, the same place that she rested her head on. Rainer hadn't actually attended his physics class, since they both had it on B-Day and Friday was a day. But the school should have still notified his teacher about the roster change. The city of Kyoto wasn't that big, with Kyoto Academy being on an even smaller scale. A new student drew attention, evident by all the students interested in her on Friday. Surely his physics teacher knew about her or had heard all the gossip going on in the academy. Issei had even heard some rumors about Issei being Yuma's boyfriend. The thought made his stomach curl. In the same place Rainer stabbed him and Issei held his stomach fondly in his hand, promising it that he would eat more often now. He'd learned his lesson. I'm sorry, Issei, there's no one named Yuma Amano attending Kyo Academy. Especially not somebody with purple eyes. Trust me, I would know. I would have seen or heard about someone with purple eyes at this point. Issei's eyes widened and his physics teacher brought his other hand on Issei's other shoulder. After Issei didn't respond, he started lightly shaking Issei to get his attention. Issei's blank eyes were wide open, with his mouth slightly open. His physics teacher kept shaking him with gradually increasing force. Issei's faraway look went away and his mouth closed, so his physics teacher stopped shaking Issei but still kept both his hands on Issei's shoulders. "Oh, sorry sensei. I'm fine, don't worry." His physics teacher didn't look like he believed a single word coming out of Issei's mouth, but that didn't matter to Issei. He opened his mouth again to ask if he could see his physics teacher's class roster but was interrupted by the bell, signaling the end of passing period and the start of the second period. "Are you sure you're okay?" His physics teacher looked straight at Issei, trying to find any signs of deceit in his eyes. Issei relaxed back to normal, well, normal for Issei at least. "Hi, sensei, I am okay." The teacher looked back with an incredulous look, but took one of his hands off Issei's shoulder and patted his other shoulder before taking that hand off as well. Of course, it had to be his physics teacher who saw him like this. Oh well, he seemed genuinely worried for Issei's well-being, so it wasn't like he was going to spit in his teacher's face. "Alright, if you say so. Take today off, Issei. I'll mark you down as a present. Do you want me to write you a note to the nurse, or do you feel good enough to attend your next class?" Issei thought about leaving school today on the premise of being sick so he can walk to the restaurant sooner, but decided that it could wait while he came to terms with the situation. Preferably next class. The teacher went back to his desk and scribbled something down on a sticky note. He stood back up and outstretched his hand to give the note to Issei here. Issei took it in his hand and palmed it. "Arigato, sensei." Issei turned around and as he headed to his next period, Issei groaned. It was English. For some reason, Kyo required people to learn a secondary and third language to graduate high school, and Kyo Academy took their learning very seriously. Or rather, the teachers did, until they didn't, that is. Issei chose to take Italian and English since his only other options were Chinese and German. Mohama took English and German, and in classic Mohama fashion, childishly said Heil Hitler whenever he could in the worst imitation of a German accent Issei had ever heard. Oh, well, at least English was shared with Mohama, so this class should be a bit more bearable. Entering the class a few minutes after the bell had already rung, Issei's English teacher, who was Japanese mind you, said, "Issei, so glad for you to join us. Do you have a note for me in all English?" Issei's eyebrow twitched. His English teacher demanded all talking in class to be said in English. You ask questions in English, answer in English, converse in English. It was frustrating as hell. Oh, that and his teacher still had a very heavy Japanese accent, and while Issei had no idea of how English truly sounded from a native speaker, he doubted his English teacher was coming off very clear. Every single word coming out of his mouth sounded wrong, even down to the pronunciation. You'd think it would be really important for a foreign language teacher to know how to talk at least decently well so he can set an example to their students. Thankfully, there was no participation grade, so Issei didn't need to respond in English unless it was for an assignment or he was called on to answer a question. Issei silently walked forward and handed the note his physics teacher gave him to his English teacher. Sadly, it seemed like his teacher wanted to be difficult today, and after looking at the note, turned it around and said to Issei, "Okay, Issei, I'll accept your tardiness if you read this to the class in English." Issei looked at his physics teacher's chicken scrawl on the note. He definitely wasn't going to face the class when he was about to embarrass himself, and said to his teacher in a slightly louder voice, "This note excuses Issei Hayatu from tardiness. I needed to talk to him after class. Please allow him to come to class a few minutes late." God damn it, he sounded like a moron. Sleeping and not paying attention in class clearly didn't help his English speaking skills, but then again Issei didn't value it as something to actually learn. The usage of it in real life seemed practically non-existent since Kyo wasn't a tourist-friendly city, and since it was so small, everyone knew each other and practically their zodiac sign as well. It seemed like it was more of a formality if anything. Issei couldn't imagine university professors being asked to speak in a language they aren't fluent in while teaching 4 young adults. Issei looked back up at his teacher, silently hoping that he wouldn't have to read his physics teacher's name out loud in English. He wasn't planning on butchering it out a name in a language that it wasn't written in today. Thankfully, his teacher seemed adequately satisfied and looked back at his students, saying, "Excellent job, Issei. Let's clap for him." The class half-heartedly started clapping for him as Issei awkwardly smiled and walked to his desk in the back. Once he put his bag down, he decided that he was in fact going to sleep today. Issei immediately put his head down in his arms, saying to himself, "This shit." Once the class bell rang, Issei was the first to head out for once, and realized he had forgotten to check to see if Mohama was here today. No, he was definitely absent, Issei murmured to himself. He would have definitely heard Mohama's contagious laughter during his screw-up at the beginning of class if he were truly here. Sitting in their usual spot at lunch, Issei calmly just sat there in contemplation since he chose not to bring food today. Issei heard a voice behind him saying Issei. He didn't even need to look in the direction of the voice to know who it was. It's just Matsuda. Matsuda sat down next to him. "Hey, Issei." He had to make sure though. Matsuda seemed surprised to hear Issei suddenly talk to him, and it wasn't in a greeting tone, it held an underlying question. Hi, Issei. Issei looked directly at Matsuda. Is Mohama sick today? I didn't see him in our English class. It wasn't like Mohama to skip classes, but it wasn't out of the question. Issei needed to know. No, I haven't seen him at all today. Ah, so that's what it's like. Don't worry, Issei. I'm still here today though. Yep, definitely hell. The rest of the day passed by quickly. Issei had no means of contacting Mohama to ask him if he was okay, since he had no phone. He would have to go to his house later on today, it seemed. During his last period of the day, Issei's U.S. history teacher looked happy that Issei was awake during class. He had better not get used to it. When the last bell sounded, Issei started walking to the restaurant from 3 nights ago. Even if he wasn't preoccupied, there was no way Issei was going to be alone with Matsuda as Matsuda looked through the kendo club's peephole. Finally arriving at the restaurant, Issei saw the same salt and pepper-haired man from yesterday outside the entrance greeting any possible customers. Good afternoon, sir. May I interest you in trying out our new okonomiyaki? Our chef is cooking up something new today. Did he not remember Issei? It had only been 3 days, and while the smile on the man's face was definitely just for display, his ingenuity didn't seem to extend to his memory. Oh, no. I was just wondering if you remembered seeing me or my girlfriend on Friday. We saw you there as you were the one who introduced us to the restaurant. The man looked confused and said, I don't believe I've ever seen you in my life, mister. He left a pause and Issei filled in. Issei. Hayado Issei. Mr. Hayado. The man finished. Still trying to get more information out of the man, Issei prodded. Then, perhaps you remember my girlfriend. Black hair, purple eyes, about this tall. Issei gestured with his hand and gave the man the exact same description that he gave his physics teacher. No, I don't believe I remember a girl matching that description either. Is there anything else I can do for you, Hayado-san? Perhaps I can still interest you with our okonomiyaki. Issei thanked him. That's okay, sir. I was going to go inside anyways. Thanks for your help and cooperation. Sorry you couldn't help me out. The man handed Issei the menu, saying don't worry about it. It's my pleasure and I should be the one saying sorry. I hope you have a good time tonight, Mr. Hayado. He gestured inside with his hand, saying please, follow our waiter as he situates you. You will get seated shortly. Issei went inside and saw the waiter waiting patiently for new customers to come inside with his hands behind his back. Good evening, sir. Please follow me. It was the same waiter that bagged his takeout box on Friday. That was good. It meant that Issei could get done with his business here and leave without paying for anything. Issei followed procedure and acted normal as he sat down in a chair tucked under the table and opened his menu, pretending to look at it. The waiter turned around and was about to leave, but Issei called out for him. Excuse me, sir. The waiter turned around and looked at Issei, with the menu placed back down on the table. Yes, sir. Did you call for me? Issei affirmed. Hi, that was me. I was just wondering if you remembered me or a girl on Friday night. She has black hair and purple eyes, about this tall. Issei gestured with his hands for what was hopefully the last time today. Seeing the waiter's confused look, Issei elaborated with the names of the dishes they ordered along with the approximate time they dined in. Sorry, sir. I still don't remember you or the girl you described. Sighing, Issei thanked the waiter before heading back outside. Issei walked towards Mohama's house. The restaurant was a dead end. He supposed he could ask the chef if he remembered cooking that particular dish twice in a row. That would confirm that he and Rainier did in fact eat there on Friday. But the chef had most likely cooked that dish a million times and perhaps a few more on Saturday, Sunday, or perhaps even today. Additionally, after getting stared at 3 times in a row like he was crazy, Issei was getting sick of the same confused look he was getting. He didn't have high hopes for the rest of the restaurant staff somehow remembering something that happened only 3 days ago when 2 people already hadn't. Asking Mohama about Rainier was a much better lead, considering he was the one that explicitly warned Issei about her in the first place. Ringing on the doorbell and knocking on the door, for additional effect, Issei waited for someone to open the door and greet him. Issei heard a distant voice from somewhere inside the house coming. Issei heard the door be unlocked before it was opened by someone. Yes, oh, it's just you, Issei. Come inside. Mohama's mother led him inside and seated him at the kitchen table. What can I do for you today, Issei? I assume it's something important since you never really come to our house. Issei smiled back at Mohama's mother. She was a very nice woman, who knew Issei and his mother since Issei and Mohama were kids. Issei hadn't visited her house since he and Mohama were young, but he still remembered the address and had fond memories of hanging out with Mohama in this house. But this was no time for reminiscing about nostalgic thoughts. Indeed it is. I'll get straight to the point. Can I talk to your son? It's urgent business. Mohama's mom's expression turned quickly from welcoming to extremely worried. I thought you knew where he was. Mohama hasn't come home in 3 days. I was going to call your mother to ask her about it tonight if he didn't come home today. Issei's eyes widened. This was bad. Can I borrow your phone, please? She brought a flip phone out from her pocket and handed it to him. Issei took it in his sweaty palms immediately. He quickly dialed Mohama's number, pressing a bit too hard on the keys, but he didn't care about that in the moment. It rang for a few seconds. That's good. It didn't go immediately to voicemail. After putting it up towards his ear, he couldn't hear any ringing from inside the house. Straining his ears, Issei listened closer and could hear a faint ringtone from somewhere outside the house. Thank God the window was open, allowing him to hear outside. Thank you for your hospitality, but I gotta go now. Don't worry, ma'am, I will find your son. Issei promised Mohama's mom as he gave her back her phone before quickly heading outside, almost slamming the door behind him as he heard "Okay. Be careful," Issei from behind him. Now outside, the ringtone was much louder and clearer. It was a song by a female pop model that Mohama was obsessed with, so the ringtone lasted longer since it belonged to a song. Mohama told Issei that he was in love with her voice and swore that he would have her hand in marriage the moment he graduated high school. The thought of Mohama made Issei frown. The things he would do to see his best friend smile one last time. Issei continued to follow the sound of the pop idol, her voice progressively becoming louder and louder the closer he got, and it led him to a clearing and some trees behind Mohama's house. Issei looked for the source of the noise around him, but couldn't find anything. Still hearing it, Issei was sure it was here as the loud voice indicated its proximity, but he didn't know where it was. Issei checked in all directions around him until he finally looked up, eyes widening in shock. In front of him was a black-haired woman dressed in black leather S&M clothing in the air, held steady by the soft beating of black feathered wings. Looking at her face, Issei saw her mesmerizing purple eyes that went beautifully along with her smirk. She held a closed flip phone in her outstretched hand that was playing audio, Mohama's ringtone. She shook it tauntingly at Issei and she finally spoke with her silky voice as the ringtone died out, the pop singer's voice getting cut off by the 40-second time limit. "Hello, darling. Did you miss me? Hello, darling. Did you miss me?" Issei couldn't believe his eyes. He was definitely not prepared for reality. Assuming the worst, Mohama was most likely dead. This was bad. No, this was terrible. "Tim, what did you do to Mohama?" His emotions were getting the better of him. It wasn't going to be long before Issei completely lost his composure. "Issei, I'm disappointed. You did all this work to find me again, and now that I'm finally here, you didn't even greet me properly. Ask me about the weather, ask me how my day was, do something." Issei ignored her taunts as he tried to find a way out of this. He got hit with a feeling of deja vu, except this time he promised not only his mom but Mohama's as well. He should really stop making promises he obviously can't seem to keep. That didn't even count the fact that she directly contributed to Mohama's sudden disappearance. Clenching his fists in rage, Issei looked down so she couldn't see his angry reaction that surely adorned his face currently. "Rainer," he said softly. Rainer could barely hear him, his voice as quiet as the breeze of wind softly blowing during the cold night. She was curious though, wasn't he just angry? Fingernails digging into his palm, almost to the point of drawing, Issei continued. "Build me up, break me down, taunt me, torture me, kill me, make me suffer." But why needing to see Rainer's response for himself, Issei slowly brought his face back up to meet her eyesight. With extremely faintly glowing green eyes, Issei raised his voice. "Why did you have to bring Mohama into this? He didn't do anything to you. You already had unrestricted access to me whenever you wanted. So, why?" If Rainer was trying to provoke a reaction out of Issei, she was doing a damn good job. She started laughing at Issei, covering her mouth with her free hand, trying not to let her voice escape but failing miserably. She treated Mohama like a toy meant to be thrown away to the side once his use was done. She treated Issei in the exact same way, but he didn't mind it as much as he did when it happened to other people. Especially not his best friend. I won't lie, he was getting on my nerves a little. He was just always in the way of things. So, I simply took him out. Rainer shrugged her shoulders like it wasn't a big deal. This problem that Issei was getting into was slowly increasing in magnitude. When it was just him dying, Issei could rest easily knowing that no one else was in danger. He didn't share the same sentiment when other people were included in the equation. Unless Mohama was also gifted, which Issei highly doubted, the only reason he had to die was just due to association. Association with Issei. His stomach became queasy and Issei felt the need to hurl out of sheer guilt. Life was so much easier before all this happened, just excruciatingly dull. "This isn't an endgame, Rainer. Your business is just with me, isn't it? Leave everyone else out of this." Damn it. He was doing exactly the same thing he stopped himself from doing earlier. The more and more Issei kept on mentioning other people, the more Rainer had to hold over him, and even worse, it was people. Not money or any other expendables that can be disposed of without care. Rainer's hand rose off her mouth as she started laughing uncontrollably. "On the contrary, Issei dear, this is the most fun I've had in years. If I knew it was this easy to get you all hot and bothered, I would have saved myself the trouble and killed your friend right from the start. Perhaps even in front of you. That would definitely be a sight to see." She ate her lips with her tongue, her lips moistening with just the thought of Issei's reaction. Although, there would be no real satisfaction in doing that, no chase to be held. Issei growled through his gritted teeth, visibly shaking as Rainer continued to attack all his vulnerable spots. Issei desperately tried to stop himself from doing anything he would regret, but grinding his teeth closed didn't seem to stop his mouth from opening. "What was Mohama to you?" Issei refrained from using the word who. He knew Mohama wasn't anyone to Rainer, evident by the fact that she was laughing at his demise. She wasn't even laughing at his expense, she was laughing at his death, causing Issei to lose his shit. Mohama's demise meant nothing to her. Collateral. She expertly worded it so that it would weave through Issei's defenses. Her casual bluntness permeated through all of Issei's walls that he had built up, knocking them all down with one simple word. Rainer actually surprised Issei by stopping her laughter and settling for a mere smirk instead. Opening her hands up in front of her in a surrendering motion, she relented. Fine, I'll stop. That's not a good look on you anyways. I'm a sadist, not a heartless. I'd much rather have you getting angry at me for the pain I inflicted upon your body, not some random idiot. Rainer tossed the flip phone at Issei with an underhand throw, apparently giving Issei back Mohama's phone. Issei rose one hand up in the air and caught it in between his palm. Pocketing it, Issei's expression turned impassive as he had one other question on his mind that he needed answered. How long? Rainer smiled at him, clearly knowing what Issei meant, but playing along like she was clueless. She put her hand over her ear and leaned forward to Issei in a motion of being unable to hear. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Issei, I didn't quite catch your meaning. She removed her hand from her ear and stood back up straight. You're going to have to be a bit more clear than that. She smirked at his impatient face, clearly enjoying wasting Issei's time. How long did you have Mohama's phone? When did you take it off his body? The last time Issei knew Mohama had his phone was when he texted Issei back during the time he was leaning against the lamppost. Unless Rainer possessed some sort of telepathy or she tortured the information from Mohama, the subject of their texting on Friday morning seemed too specific for Rainer to impersonate. He needed a time frame when she acquired Mohama's phone. It was almost certain that she had read the previous texts, and Issei guessed that Rainer knew Mohama warned him about her. But for how long she had that information, Issei had no idea. When I took him out, obviously. Rainer gestured with her open palm, smiling at Issei's unimpressed look. It was sometime during passing period on Friday, I believe. I forgot which one though. It's been a while since I've actually had to attend school. That was most likely right after their math class ended, when Issei heard Mohama walking out of the classroom for what he didn't know would be the last time. Wait, she said she took him out. If there was even a sliver of hope, where is he now? It had been almost 4 days since Issei had last seen Mohama, and there wasn't a high chance he survived, but if Issei somehow got out of this, he was going to bring Mohama's body back home to his mother, dead or alive. Hell if I know. The last time I recall seeing him was when I stuffed his unconscious body in a locker. He wasn't in good shape, bleeding from his ears and mouth, bruised face with a black eye, probably a lot of fractured bones including his ribcage. It's been 4 days. I'm sure your friend is long gone at this point, and if he isn't, well, let's just say he won't be in good condition anytime soon. Issei already knew that. She didn't need to remind him. He wasn't a pessimist, but he knew there wasn't any reasonable chance that his life would even come close to coming back to normal. To think it had gone to shit in only 3 days was a somber thought. I'm curious though. How did you manage to come back alive? I swear I stabbed you through the stomach with a spear. Not many can come back from that, I'd hope. Perhaps there is more to you than I originally thought. That would be a nice surprise. Rainer didn't mention her serenity as she put him down. He didn't need to know about that. For Rainer it had been 3 days, and she spent the entirety of it drinking away all resemblance of regret. Alcohol was one hell of a drug. If you're still able to remember your problems, it meant you're still sober and haven't drank enough. For Issei though, it had only been one. He didn't have time to get over what happened, and it was very much still a fresh wound. Issei didn't know what he was thinking, and his curiosity got the better of him. His need to know about what was clearly not his business was half-witted and fatal. He dipped his toes in something that had repercussions he wasn't prepared to deal with. All because of some damn curiosity. Issei didn't have an answer for the question that had been bugging his own mind as well. He supposed he could lie to her, but she would have immediately called his bluff. There was simply no other way this conversation could go. He was going to die. Alone. Again. Letting down both Mohama and his mother, not to mention Issei's own. Take me to him, Issei said. It was a filler sentence. Issei didn't actually believe for a second that she would somehow fly him over to see his friend, but there was simply nothing else to say. On the off chance that she did take him to Mohama, Issei was going to carry him back to his mother before dying at the hands of Rainer. She started cackling again at him. On a second thought, maybe Issei should have just kept his mouth shut and just embraced death silently. Instead, he had to listen to what Rainer was about to say, or what she disappeared from the air with a whoosh and reappeared in front of Issei. Issei's eyes widened as she picked him up by his face with one hand and levitated them both 5 feet in the air. She smiled at him, his cheeks cupped in her hand. Do I need to remind you of the difference of power between us two, Issei? It doesn't matter if you think you're tough. It doesn't matter if you're actually tough. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a man. It doesn't matter that you never cease to impress me, and even if I decide to keep you around for fun, at the end of the day. Rainer leaned in close to whisper into Issei's ear. You're not strong enough to make demands like that, Issei. She moved her hand down from his cheeks to grip his neck before throwing him down on the ground. Issei fell from the air and impacted the ground of the clearing, back first into the soil. A satisfying crunch sound emitted from the result of Issei coming in contact with the earth. A small crater was formed around his body, and there was a clear indication where the grass began and where it stopped. Damn, it was hopeless. The power it had to have taken for Rainer to create a crater was nothing short of depressing to think about. The only reason he was still alive was because they were only 5 feet in the air and the fact that Rainer had only used one hand. Issei felt his consciousness slip away again and his eyelids closed over defeated eyes. Struggling to open his eyes to stay awake for a chance of survival, Issei found himself laying down on what appeared to be some sort of igneous rock formation. He was in the same position he was in a second ago, but he seemed to be in another place, an alternate dimension of some sorts or perhaps another world. It was extremely hot, and Issei was sweating. Judging by the leftover debris of lava bubbling in the background, he should by all means be dying of hypothermia via heat, but for some reason Issei only felt a mild warmth. It was rather homely. "Yo, partner, not gonna lie, I'm a bit disappointed. I called you, and you didn't respond. The next time you ignore me, I won't be as chivalrous." The same deep manly voice from this morning rang in his eardrums. Get in line, Issei thought in his head. It wasn't the first person he let down today, but he got the feeling that the voice was definitely someone he didn't want to disappoint. Issei was feeling extremely confrontational at the moment, but the voice served to relax him as it motivated him to get up off the ground. His whole body ached, but he was able to move his spine, which shouldn't be physically possible. Issei stumbled around getting on his feet and tried to catch his footing by gripping onto something, but the platform he was on had no rock formations tall enough for him to lean on. Issei fell towards the floor, and in an attempt to cut his nose to spite his face, Issei put his hands forward and bent his knees during his descent. The rocks were not even close to being smooth, and Issei felt the knees of his school uniform threatening to rip apart under the pressure of the rocks. The palm of his right hand cut along the sharp edges of the rocks, and the soot of the rocks got into his cut, contaminating it. Issei panted as he felt the sweat on his forehead drip down onto the tip of his nose. "Wow, you're kind of pathetic, partner." The voice was ridiculing him, but Issei didn't feel insulted. "So I've heard," Issei mumbled out between breaths. Holding his breath, Issei brought his knees up and placed his feet on the ground where his knees used to be. He brought his hand to his knees and gripped it, putting his weight on it in an effort to stand up. Finally able to stand up straight, Issei tried his best not to fall again as he tried again to catch his breath, which escaped him once more. It was at this moment that Issei realized the back of his school uniform had a very big hole of some sorts, probably from when Rainer threw him to the ground, and he felt hot air blow down his back and sting against something. Issei proceeded to rip his shirt off, the use of it completely tattered as it had expended its purpose. The moment his hand left his shirt, it immediately incinerated in the air. That wasn't because of him, was it? Issei ran his sweaty index finger against the crux of his back, coming in contact with a diagonal cut running from his side to the middle of his neck and shoulder. "That, I couldn't heal, so I had to cauterize it for you." His eyes glanced around the place he was in, scanning for the source of the voice, while turning his head about. "Where am I?" Issei asked the voice, hoping that it felt hospitable at the moment. He heard a deep chuckle and realized the voice was coming from behind him. Issei turned around to see a giant red dragon perched upon a dormant volcano. He was a very majestic shade of red, with lavish crimson scales that complemented his radiant emerald eyes. The dragon's mouth raised up to align with the scales on his cheek that was moving upward. It was a very strange maneuver which Issei could only attribute to the dragon smiling. "I'm glad you approve, partner." The dragon somehow read his thoughts. "Not exactly. I'm not able to read your thoughts per se, but rather I can hear them. You could say that we are one as of right now. Our souls are conglomerated as my soul is intertwined with yours." Issei's mind felt like it was about to explode. "So, where am I?" He repeated the question from earlier, still trying to figure out the answer to the question he found more important. The dragon's mouth curved up again, apparently not caring that Issei ignored his earlier statement. "You are in my inner world, Zengai no Metsu." Ruins of demolition, Issei repeated to himself in his head. The name reeked of power and intimidation. "I'm not going to thank you for healing me." The dragon let out a deep belly laugh. "Don't worry, you don't need to say it out loud. I can hear your thoughts." Remember, the dragon brought the claw of his finger up to tap the side of his head. "You're welcome, by the way. Damn him for always being right." "That's not very nice of you to say, partner." The dragon chastised him. "Call me by my name," Issei told the dragon. "Partner is such a lousy moniker to call me by. I'd rather you just call me child instead." "My name is Issei," Issei elaborated. "Is it now?" the dragon drawled sarcastically. It still seemed like he was still humored though, his audible amusement escaping his mouth. "That was good." "Indeed it is." "May I have yours?" Issei asked the dragon, not wanting to address him by the same pronoun he had called him in his head for the past 3 minutes. "You're an interesting host, Issei." The dragon turned serious for the first time in their conversation. "I am known as Detention. And you are the Sekiryute, Red Dragon Emperor." What a presumptuous title. Issei remembered what Detention said earlier and asked him, "What did you mean by our souls being intertwined?" "I don't believe," I stuttered. "It's more like we are stuck together until death allows us to part." Issei looked up to Detention and watched him fly over to Issei, crushing the volcano with his claws that gripped it previously. The world transformed into a throne room of a palace of some sorts. The room was a beautiful crimson red, with emerald gems scattered throughout the interior. Issei was standing upon a red carpet that led to and from the throne. There were pillars of flames on each side of the room in the place where sconces would be in a medieval setting. The throne was the most impressive part of the room though. With smooth ruby and emerald outlines, the throne was huge in diameter. It looked more of a glorified love seat than anything. Detention descended from the air down on the throne and laid down on it like a cat would. D-Drag yawned in his palm and Issei felt himself levitate from the air. His body was suddenly thrust in the direction of D-Drag's now outstretched hand. Once he was close enough, D-Drag opened his palm up and Issei was placed on in the middle of it. D-Drag brought it closer to his face, Issei and him now seeing eye to eye. Issei, I tire of life. I was once the feared heavenly dragon of destruction. Devils and angels alike, fallen or otherwise, bowed down to my strength. Gods feared me, there seemed no limit to the depths I could reach. My life had peaked. The scenery then changed from the throne room to complete darkness and Issei could no longer see D-Drag. D-Drag, Issei called out, wondering where he had gone. Then, the black background morphed to somewhere in the air and Issei could feel his body become something akin to an astral projection of some sorts. Issei's vision was showered in flames of crimson and it remained that way for half a minute. The flames died down in front of him, so he knew that it came from behind him and promptly turned in the opposite direction to see its source. In front of him was D-Drag, who looked much more menacing than Issei had ever seen him. The look in his face could only be described as a product of ferocity. Don't worry Issei, I'm still here. Issei heard D-Drag's voice coming from all around him, soothing his nerves as he watched D-Drag charge on. You're looking at the last memory I had when I was in my physical body. You're seeing through the eyes of my first host, Yuma. He was only a child when he saw the most devastating fight held in over 1,000 years. Issei looked down on the ground and saw a boy who couldn't be above the age of 8. He was looking very interestingly at the battle that commenced above him. Your consciousness has been inputted into the middle of the air that Yuma is looking at. Issei looked at what D-Drag was charging at and saw a silver-chromed dragon blow snow-white mist at D-Drag's approaching form. D-Drag's wings were wrapped around his crossed arms on his and his legs were closed. His body was in a drill formation. D-Drag continued on hammering through at a fast pace, opening his mouth to spew out an emerald-colored beam of energy that engulfed the white mist and overpowered it. The white dragon opened the palm of his hand and the beam of energy emitted from D-Drag came in contact with it and went to both sides of the dragon. He had effectively just halved it in two. The white dragon then quickly moved to the side to avoid the red bullet that was hurling towards him. A whoosh of air had hit the white dragon as the red dragon went past him, moving too fast to control his speed. D-Drag unfurled his wings and opened his legs, steadying himself in the air as he looked at the white dragon in fury. Issei felt a faint feeling of somebody touching his shoulder and whispering in his ear. That's Yuma's mother. It was at this point that she decided to intervene and take her son back home. It wasn't safe out here. The other dragon and I were leveling mountains every other second. The memory shifted and Issei found himself looking in first-person's view. In front of him was a much larger display of the white dragon, who looked more stunning in person. Then, a blinding white light engulfed Issei's entire vision. What was that? I didn't know at the time, but I learned from my next host that I had been sealed by the Christian God. What happened to the white dragon? He got sealed as well by God. Both of us were sealed into a new class of sacred gears known as the Longinus. The man who pierced Jesus' side with a spear. The very same. Don't think about it too much, it's just a name. I'll tell you more about them later. So what was the point of showing me this? The scene switched back to the original throne room, where Issei was standing in the palm of D-Drag's hand. He only encompassed a small portion of it and the feeling of insignificance brushed across the surface of Issei's mind more times than he was willing to admit. The slits of D-Drag's eyes thinned out of his iris, before his eyes started glowing green. Issei, you aren't my first host, and you won't be the last. Many have come before you and have failed where you now stand. You know Issei, it hurts to have to see every last one of them go. My last two hosts let me down exhaustingly. There is a period of time when one host dies and another one has yet to be born. During this period, I question my existence as I float around in literal nothingness. The space is a very depressing zone of lethargy and what I can only describe as purgatory. Not in the way in which I can't reach heaven or hell, but rather the fact that I am stuck in a solitary prison for all eternity. Can you promise me something, Issei? What do you want me to say? Can I trust you not to die on me? I don't want you to die an early death. I want to care for every last one of my hosts, but it's so damn hard when they disappoint me so much. I used to treat every new host like they were part of my family, and each time they died, I felt a little piece of my soul dying along with them as well. But I can't put forth the same energy as I did back then. I can't remain optimistic that I will somehow be free or have a host that leaned upon me as I leaned upon them. D-Drag's eyes stopped glowing and returned to their normal shade of emerald. The slits of his eyes came back and Issei could see D-Drag's passion. I understand that you're mortal and that you will die, Issei. It's a fact I accepted a long time ago. It's an inevitable product of the cycle of life and death. There is nothing you or I can do to prevent that. D-Drag's voice was straining and it hurt Issei's ears to have someone who he viewed as strong display weakness. It was the fact that D-Drag was willing to display the weakness that Issei found him strong. In fact, I'm jealous of you to a certain extent. Death seems like it just might be the sweet release that I've been looking for the past century or two. The last two hosts I had split my heart in two. But you seem to need my help, and as your partner, I'm inclined to provide assistance. Issei opened his mouth to reply but got cut off by D-Drag once more. Get strong for me, Issei. The world twisted into a spiral of dark crimson flames and Issei felt his feet getting pulled down akin to a gravitational pull. Issei fell deeper down the middle of its increasingly darkening underbelly for what felt like hours on end. The flames kept spiraling to the point where Issei didn't even remember if they were originally traveling up or down. The thought was on the front of Issei's mind as the world finally turned completely pitch black. Issei opened his eyes and groaned. He brought his hand up to rub the back of his head since it hurt. Whether that was from the new information or because of the force of the impact remained to be left unsaid. Issei looked up and saw Rainer standing in front of him, looking down on his body. "I'm surprised you can still stand, Issei. That fall you had must have took a big toll on you." "Sorry about that, by the way," Rainer said unapologetically. "I didn't want to miss the moment when you finally opened your eyes again. I was beginning to worry that you might have actually died on me. It's the weekday, so I'm free and in a good mood, so take as much time as you need. I was actually wondering if you somehow were able to miraculously get up again. You still haven't told me how you managed it the first time around." Rainer just continued to watch him as he got up off the ground and stood up straight. Her eyes followed his back as he turned around and walked a respectable distance away. There wasn't anywhere that he could run where she wouldn't find him anyways. Issei turned again once more to face Rainer, finding his resolve. "Let's finish this, Rainer." Rainer cackled at him. "Oh, I wanted to see how much more times you could come back from the dead." "Oh, well, if you insist." Issei narrowed his eyes and furrowed his brows, looking more determined than he ever felt in his life. "What do you have for me?" Issei's left arm glowed red and Issei felt a gauntlet of some sort form onto his hand. The red energy died down and what was left as a result was a metallic-looking material of crimson rubies that went from the tip of his fingers up to the upper joint of his forearm. The gauntlet covered his entire hand and on the center of his dorsal, there was an emerald gem embedded into the rest of the layer. It looked like a crude imitation of Drag's scales. It seemed more like a toy than anything resembling the heavenly dragon. Whatever, it would have to do for now. Rainer started laughing. "So, you finally awakened your sacred gear. It doesn't matter though, it's nothing special." "I beg to differ, lady," Drag grumbled from the inside Issei's head. "Quiet, Drag. I'm trying to focus," Issei muttered under his breath. Rainer formed a spear of energy in her hand and chucked it at Issei. He didn't know if he was fast enough to dodge it. His sacred gear looked like it was designed for close quarters. He held no chance if she maintained her distance and started shooting spears from afar. Thinking quickly, Issei tried to smack the bolt of energy away somehow with the gauntlet in an attempt to avert its path. It exploded on impact and purple energy fragments blew up from the reaction, looking like a miniature atomic bomb. Rainer watched the cloud of dust, waiting to see if Issei would come out of it. Rainer flapped her wings as the sheer momentum of it created a gust of wind and blew the smoke that obscured her vision of Issei. It proved effective as it finally settled, and Rainer was able to see the much larger crater she created from the explosion. But Issei was nowhere in sight. Now, where did he go? She knew he had to be around here somewhere and flapped her wings down, approaching close to ground level. She steadied her wings and prepared to search for him. The wind blew against her hair, and she moved her eyes left to right, seeing if she could spot him. "Oh, Issei, where are you?" Rainer called out as she flew around the trees, knowing that Issei wouldn't disintegrate from a blast like that. Or at least, she really hoped not. She was just getting started, and could feel her sadist kinks intoxicate her as they increased in inflammation. She hadn't felt this way in a long time. She had fought many foes stronger, taller, and ear than Issei, but Issei somehow managed to worm his way into her heart. He held a special place there and planted his feet down so firmly that even she couldn't wrench him out of it. It was exhilarating. Issei, hidden behind a tree, coughed in his hand, trying to mask his sound as Rainer flew past him. Damn, some smoke got into his lungs and his left arm was bleeding down from the shoulder. This was bad. If only he could somehow get her in range of her with his sacred gear. He didn't know how much power it would take, but Issei was betting everything on ending it in one shot. After running away from the explosion, he knew that his speed hadn't increased much since he had awakened Drag's power. Perhaps not even at all. Rainer started shooting spears of light at every single tree in the clearing, trying to force Issei to come out of his hiding spot. Luckily for Issei, they were all in front of him since Rainer had long passed Issei. Nevertheless, Issei held his with his non-dominant right hand as he limped towards a secondary tree to use as cover. Issei heard a whoosh as a spear of light hit the tree he was just leaning on. Boom went the explosion as it hit the tree, scattering shrapnel of wood all over the ground and the air. Taking his right hand off his beating to palm the tree, Issei twisted his body to see if he could spot Rainer. Suddenly, Issei took his palm off the tree as he felt a sudden urge to gain some distance. He backed up as the tree his palm was on got lifted up in the air by its trunk. The roots of the tree snapped and creaked under the pressure of the tree being suddenly moved by force. Issei couldn't see behind the tree to see who was lifting it, but deductive reasoning told him that it may or may not be someone with black wings and purple eyes. Guessing approximately where Rainer was lifting up the tree from, he triangulated the center of mass of the tree she most likely was behind, charged forward and jumped in the air with an outstretched crimson gauntlet. Boost! His sacred gear pierced through the tree like butter and he felt his hand come in contact with something as the rest of the tree incinerated from the flames that erupted when Issei punched through it. Whatever Issei had in his hand and he both gravitated to the ground since Issei couldn't stay afloat in the air due to the absence of flight. The flames of the gauntlet died down as the emerald gem in the center glowed jade for a second then turned back to its usual hollow dull shade of green. Issei held Rainer's throat gripped in his hand who had flushed pink-colored flesh around where the of her throat stopped circulating. Issei was surprised that her skin wasn't burnt from the flames of DxD. Whatever race she belonged to was certainly durable if nothing else. He slammed her against a nearby tree and started choking her harder. He choked her so hard, she started to shrink in his hand and turned back into the physique of Yuma. Except, she looked debauched in the black leather that adorned Rainier when she transformed. The look just didn't suit the innocent personality she was aiming for. It's a shame. I liked you better in your true form. I think you looked beautiful. Issei choked her out, and she opened her mouth, trying desperately to breathe some air. Her wings flailed out violently. It didn't seem like Rainier could currently control them, and they were instinctively moving out on their own. Issei used his right hand to smack them away. They were actually surprisingly light. It seemed that the rules of aerodynamics still applied to Rainier's wings as well. They cringed under Issei's light shove and bent down, lying down at her side. Rainier's eyes rolled to the top of her head as she passed out due to asphyxiation. Her knees collapsed under her weight, and she buckled under the tree she was pinned up against. A rustling of leaves made Issei look to the left and saw leaves falling down from the crown of its tree. Issei quickly turned his head towards the source, not expecting another presence nearby. Issei looked at the nearby tree, which was still rustling, and the ground shook under his feet, leaves falling down the tree until the miniature earthquake stopped. All but one leaf had already hit the ground, with the only leaf left descending slowly to the ground with grace and fervor. Issei waited patiently as a burst of black energy with a silver outline quickly spread across the forest and unveiled a completely different image underneath. Issei's eyes kept on the leaf falling slowly, not wanting to see the moment when it hit the ground. It now turned into a pink sakura sweeping beautifully down the air, the vibrant pink color suiting its elegance much more than the original lush shade of the leaf. Issei turned around him and saw the source of the sakura. The dark verdant trees turned into cherry blossoms, and the dark gleam of twilight had transformed into a white background. Even the ground Issei was standing on was white, with no indication of the crater that used to be right behind him. Issei turned his eye back to the sakura, which was now settled down on the white floor. Damn, he had missed it. Beautiful, is it not? A feminine voice came from atop the tree where the sakura fell from, with no doubt in Issei's mind that she was the source of the rustling noise. Issei looked up and saw a beautiful girl with long luscious crimson hair and ocean eyes, leaning on the thigh of her outstretched leg which rested on top of a cherry blossom branch. The only imperfection to her appearance was one small ahoge sticking up stubbornly along the roots of her hair. She wore a white blouse tied underneath a black corset by a ribbon. Her skirt was short and showed off her creamy white legs. It was the female Kyo Academy uniform. Issei didn't think he had ever seen or would ever see anyone look this good in it. Issei felt a breeze of air coming from his left and saw the girl's bangs move left along with his own, both succumbing to the wind. Her black shoulder cape blew along her shoulders as well as her skirt which fluttered across her waist. Issei felt the sleeves of his own shirt cling to edges his skin. How was there still wind? Issei didn't see a source where the air could be coming from. The black and silver outline came again, this time from somewhere outside the white background, and started closing in on them. It went through the girl harmlessly, and as Issei saw it appear in his peripheral, he knew it went through him as well. Once the circle had closed in, it dissipated into thin air. The clearing was back to its original look, and Issei clearly saw the crater in the side of his eye. He looked back at the girl and asked her, "Who are you?" The girl didn't respond and disappeared with a whoosh. Oh no, not this shit again. Issei felt himself get hugged from behind and saw a red circle appear under his feet. Issei struggled against the grasp of whoever was holding him, but the world turned white. His vision returned and he immediately turned around, backhanding the person who embraced him. He felt the arms let go and the punch of his sacred gear was absorbed by a crimson circle that appeared out of nowhere. The red circle had engravings on it, the same engravings that were on the circle that appeared under him. The force of Issei's punch blew a gust of wind in the direction it was thrown. The person who conjured the circle's hair blew back. Oh, it was the girl. Both of her hands were in front of her, no doubt to maintain the circle that Issei now knew belonged to her. Why did you do that? Issei didn't know if the girl in front of him was an ally or not. It seemed like she was waiting for his and Rainier's battle to finish, so it was unlikely that she was on Rainier's side. However, she didn't help Issei either and left him to fend for himself, so she probably worked as an independent third party. The girl put her hands down and smiled while saying it was more fun that way. She had a demeanor to her that for some reason, Issei couldn't get mad at. He expended all his emotion fighting Rainier and now all that was left was just emptiness. Issei sighed and put his hands down as well. He already had enough magical females for one night. It seemed that none of them were all right in the head. Ah, you're no fun. Okay, I'll bite. I'm the woman that saved you when you were dying. That's probably why she looked and sounded familiar. Crimson hair and blue eyes, her features weren't all that prevalent in Japan and she didn't have a discernible appearance of any one race. Issei didn't really know any other females that matched her description. Or females in general for that matter. I remembered her looking a lot better. Issei thought out loud. The girl pouted. You're evil. Issei smiled back at her, purposely pretending to say it unknowingly to gauge her reaction. She seemed friendly enough. He supposed he could humor her for the time being. You shouldn't talk that way to your master, my adorable servant. Issei mumbled, my name is Issei, under his breath. That's what I said, isn't it? Issei looked incredulously at the girl in front of him who donned an innocent look on her face. She dropped the look of obliviousness and started giggling in her hand, smiling at Issei while doing so. She then stopped her giggles and said, "Nice to meet you, Issei. My name is Gremory Rias." She outstretched her right hand out for a handshake. Issei looked at her questioningly and looked down to his gauntlet, which was still on his left arm, and then back up to her. She laughed again, this time with actual euphonious laughter, and exchanged her right hand for her left. Issei sighed and shook her hand with the hand that didn't hold his sacred gear. She had a firm grip and a really nice handshake. That, and her skin felt extremely soft. So, this was this infamous Rias Gremory that Mohama and Matsuda kept telling him about. She wasn't exactly who he imagined. He imagined a pretentious girl who shoved her beauty down everyone else's throat. Mohama said she was too out of league and settled instead for his aim to marry the female pop idol, claiming that it was a much more realistic goal. Wait, what about Rainier and Mohama? Issei wondered about both his friend and Rainier. Well, not for Rainier, he could give less of a about her. He just didn't know if she was dead. Did she even have the same anatomy as a human? Hair might not be a necessity for her, unlike with humans. The thought of Rainier still living to see another day made him sick. Don't worry, Akino is dealing with her as we speak. I'm pretty sure you killed her, but my vice president is going to lay waste to her body. Soon she shall be gone, reduced to atoms. Issei heard a clap of thunder in the background that was a bit too quiet to be caused by natural forces. Akino was probably Himejama Akino. It didn't seem like it was a coincidence that the two prettiest girls in the school both wielded magic. Vice president, how the occult research club housed two magic users that Issei knew of. He wouldn't be surprised if Akino and the rest of the club were all the same race as Rias. Was she even human? Could humans even wield magic? Mohama would love to be in his position right now. Still feeling the cold breeze of the air, Issei guessed that there might be a window open and went to go look outside. Leaving his back exposed to Rias wasn't the smartest idea, but Issei highly doubted he had enough juice to go for another run tonight. His shoulder no longer bled, and unblemished flesh was in the place his wound used to be. Did Rias somehow heal it by touching him? Looking back at Rias curiously, he saw her pull down the white long sleeves of the female Kyo Academy uniform. He didn't even notice that they were rolled up previously, leaving her forearms exposed. Issei heard the sound of thunder again, and it more or less confirmed his hypothesis from earlier. There had to be an open window somewhere for him to hear its proximity. He looked around the room and saw an open windowsill that was blowing cold air onto his shirtless. Bangs flowing in the wind, Issei approached the windowsill and looked out of it. He saw a yellow bolt of lightning coming from the air around where he assumed Mohama's house was. This window could see practically the whole courtyard, Issei mused. It boasted an impressive view of the school, and he could see the building of the Kendo Club from where he was standing. Where are we? Issei knew that they were somewhere in Kyo Academy, but in which building he had no idea. We're currently in the second floor of the old schoolhouse, where the Occult Research Club meetings are held. There was an old schoolhouse. As for your friend, my other servants searched for him but found no trace of him in the school or anywhere else. Issei gripped the smooth wood finish of the window harder in his palms, taking in the new information. He wasn't going to be able to fulfill his promise to Mohama's mom after all. But Rias continued. He could still be alive somewhere out there. Issei tried to find his voice, but it escaped him. After a few attempts and several coughs, Issei croaked out how. Don't get him wrong, this was really nice to hear. Issei just didn't know how he could have survived in his condition if Rainier's words held true. Oh, yeah, I forgot you healed me back to life. I didn't figure magic could do things like that. He supposed that magic could heal any and all wounds inflicted. It would make sense, it was magic after all. It was given its name for a reason. Not exactly, Rias responded, cutting off Issei's musing. Issei wondered back, murmuring through chapped lips. I don't specialize in healing magic. You are in every sense of the word, dead. This was hard to take in. Rias elaborated, you're no longer human. You've been reincarnated as an Akuma, you are now the pawn of the House of Gremory. Devil Issei heard a bleak noise from behind him and turned around. Rias now adorned black wings behind her that must have come from her back since Issei didn't see them on her body earlier. It was an intriguing sight. They didn't look as good as Rainier's wings, Issei noted. Instead of onyx feathered wings, they were black wings with clear veinage. They weren't exactly draconic like Issei saw on D-Drag's body, but they looked okay, he supposed. Rias then turned around and Issei saw where her wings cut through the fabric of her black corset. So, not everyone shredded their clothes when they transformed. That's good. Issei didn't want to go streaking every time he sprouted his own soon. Isis that okay, Rias stammered out, seeming unsure of his reaction. She was worried about his response for the first time in their conversation and fidgeted anxiously in place, extremely unconfident. What was she worried about? Issei wondered. Oh, that's right. To be human isn't something that's bound to the physical world, Rias. Issei started as he turned back around and looked outside the window, staring longingly at the night sky. The full moon was out tonight, shining marvelously on the school grounds. If it were, there would be no drawn line for what we call human. Humans in biology are simply the name of the species that evolved from primates. It's quite fascinating that one of the main antonyms for the word human in its adjective form is robotic. To be considered robotic, it suggests that one lacks any resemblance of feelings. From this, we can derive that to be human means that one is able to feel, by contrast. Humans in biology are considered different from the other animals because they are aware. They are known for their unparalleled intelligence, but so many other species are not that far behind. Chimpanzees, octopuses, dolphins, dogs, cats. Issei listed off examples of popular breeds of animals which displayed strong levels of intelligence. So what makes a human human? Issei continued. In Christianity, what allows humans to rule over the world is the free will that God had bestowed upon Adam and Eve. Man being made in God's image doesn't suggest physical similarities, but rather the idea of the soul being translated across the mortal realm. To be robotic, one cannot be able to feel emotions or have very little of them. In psychology, the closest thing to these types of people are psychopaths. Some psychopaths aren't able to feel emotion, but a more accurate assessment would be that psychopaths in general just don't understand emotion. The feelings we cherish are hysterical and hilarious. Our own moral code just doesn't make sense to them. To be inhumane doesn't suggest a lack of emotions. It means that one is able to feel emotions and still choose to commit vicious atrocities. What allowed humans to rise to the top of the food chain is their constant strive to rise to the top. Humans aren't the strongest of creatures. They enslave their own kind, domesticate other animals, kill and rape their own brothers and sisters. Humans hate change because the idea that they aren't the pinnacle of evolution burns their mind. However, we still manage to evolve through technology and such and will continue to keep advancing as a society. The difference between those who are complacent and those who wish to evolve is what makes us human. For innovators, they never stop reaching for the sky. To reach outer space was considered unfathomable not too long ago, incomprehensible even. Now, rockets and satellites are being sent up to space to scan for life outside the known borders of our galaxy. In theory, with the right amount of time and effort, humans could accomplish anything they set their mind to. Time travel, teleportation, bending reality. That's what makes us human. The ability to feel, the never-ending dissatisfaction with life, the continuous search for the unreachable, the unachievable. It's not a surprise that humans usually only feel satisfaction at the end of their life. Jealousy, hatred, lust. These are all biological human emotions that are also shared by lions, wolves, and tigers. What makes humans different is the ability to feel more than just negative emotions, to have a conscience. The idea of morality revolves around the concept of what's considered right and wrong. To judge someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that the judge or the jury believes that they're greater than the defendant, stronger than them, a better person than them. If we call judgment from God divine judgment, why don't we call the punishment we exact on other people human judgment? It's because you don't need to be able to be a god to tell what's right and wrong. It's the disregard for these types of feelings that make people inhumane. Rias followed Issei's trail of thoughts and filled in the blanks. Sociopaths. She realized what he was alluding to. Indeed, Issei hummed. Sociopathy is the understanding of emotions and the disregard of it. It's something that simply isn't valuable to them. They are manipulative, but are still fueled by whatever ambition they choose to have. Whether that be power, dominance, or even status, they are still fueled by the human goal to grow and to shape the world and still feel the same jealousy, anger, and lust as the rest of us. However, because of their disregard for all the positive emotions, they are still considered human in a sense, but they only partially so. Unlike psychopaths, they are able to grasp at the strings of morality, the fact that what they're doing is wrong, and yet they still continue to do the things the way they do because they simply don't care. Thus, we consider sociopathic actions inhumane. Sociopaths think that human emotions are worthless, parasitic even. They believe that being controlled by any type of feelings are a sign of humanity's weakness, but I tend to disagree. When a man cries, he is not being weak, but rather strong in that moment. When you go to the ends of the earth for someone you love, you are objectively foolish, but you're also subjectively brave. Helen and Paris, Romeo and Juliet, Antony and Cleopatra. It's in these stories in which humanity shows its vulnerability, its acceptability. To be human is a weakness in and of itself. When a man isn't strong enough to lift a car, we give the excuse that he's only human. However, when pent-up emotions break through the dam people spent tens of years building up, we say the same thing. It doesn't matter if I am a devil, an angel, or the scum of the earth whose only purpose in life is to stick under the sole of somebody's boot. As long as I am able to feel and be motivated by those feelings, I will still be human if I choose to be. I wish to stay human, Rias. What's the point of power if you can no longer feel anything anymore? To be ambitious, to be curious, to wonder about the inconceivable. Lately, I admit I have been extremely apathetic. That's why I've considered myself dead. Rias couldn't find the problem. So just stop being sad then. Issei chuckled darkly at her confusion. I'm not sad, I'm depressed. Sadness and depression are synonymous, but they don't have identical meanings. Depression is, in the simplest of terms, the inability to feel happiness. If sadness is considered the opposite of happiness, to be unable to feel happiness doesn't automatically mean that one is on the other side of the spectrum. I'm not sad, I'm numb. You said you didn't have anything to live for, Rias asked out loud, remembering what Issei said from earlier. Indeed I did, Issei responded. Not his exact wording, but it along the lines of what he meant. Live for me. Rias said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. She sounded so sure of herself that Issei automatically wanted to agree with her and say yes. He turned around and saw Rias smiling back at him. It was infectious. Just like that, Issei asked. Just like that, Rias affirmed. Issei didn't laugh at her. He didn't scorn her. He didn't scoff at her statement. He simply turned around and leaned out the window once more. It's not that easy, Issei responded. Can I make it easy? Rias asked, wanting to help. Go ahead. Issei wondered if she actually had an answer or she was being rhetoric. I'm your master, you are my adorable servant. I order you to live. She sounded so childish, it was quite endearing. Rias, do you know why suicides occur the most in the spring? Issei didn't expect an answer. There is a positive correlation of increasing suicides in first world countries compared to third worlds. Suicide is the privilege of the rich, one could say. The poor quite literally cannot afford to give up. They have to keep on working for their family. They must get out of the ghetto. The number one coping mechanism for depression is to distract yourself. The poor have a clear and defined goal. They get rich, they support their family, they travel around the world. There is a saying, poor people don't know how to be rich. A homeless man wins the lottery, spends it on gambling, and becomes homeless once more. If all your life you are trying to get rich, then money is just a means to an end. What happens after that? If you can't answer that simple question, then that end is simply the end of your life. Whether that be literally or figuratively, they have reached the pinnacle of their life, and all their effort henceforth had gone to this one and only goal. There is simply nothing left. The idea that money can buy happiness goes through every poor person's mind. Poor people are able to become rich. Their life gets better, they wear tuxedos, they dine at the fanciest restaurants, have with the most beautiful of girls. But they still aren't happy, and it makes no sense to them since their life is objectively better. But that's because they're wrong. Their life hasn't become better, just their lifestyle. Money can't buy happiness, but it can make things that make you unhappy go away. Since they are already rich, the inability to feel happiness is a jarring conclusion to reach. No one knows for sure why people kill themselves most in the spring, Rias. But it's always been my personal belief that it's because people come to the realization that they can't be happy. School ends, summer starts, distractions go away. People kill themselves because they don't think life is worth living in, and more often than not, they feel alone. It doesn't matter if they are the most popular person in high school. It doesn't matter if they have an endless amount of friends and family showing their support, reaching out to them. They know their loved ones care for them. They know that they're there for them. They know that they love them. They get that, and yet they still manage to feel alone in the end. Summer is when life is supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be good, they're supposed to feel happy. Once that fun is gone, that's when people should start to end it in theory. But in reality, they end it in spring instead of fall, because the happiness never started to begin with. Having fun does not mean that you are happy. You can laugh, you can smile, you can cry. Laughter is a result of humor, not joy. Living for someone else is not a simple solution, nor is it a permanent one. When they're happy, you're happy. When they're sad, you're sad because they are. When they die, you die as well. If your life is hung by the small string that connects you to another person, then that string can get cut by the dullest of plastic knives. If you are romantically interested in someone, you may talk to them in order to get your feelings reciprocated eventually. If your relationship is built upon the fact that you are interested in the other person, when they inevitably say no, you will be devastated. People will always find a way to let each other down. Disappointment is inevitable. But the relationships you have become brittle if they hinge on the fact of one thing. Because if another person is your love interest first and your friend second, the foundation of your relationship is built on a house of twigs. Life is of a similar fashion, Rias. When you live for another person, the phrase doesn't necessarily have to mean that your heart stops beating when theirs do, but rather it's a figure of speech. That's pretty obvious, is it not? But what we don't realize is that since you live for another person, when that person dies, they take your metaphorical heart with them, your soul. Thinking back to D-Drag and remembering his melancholic face, Issei said, I don't wish to become immortal, Rias. If I cannot die, all that I care about is not infinite along with my lifespan. If what I care about is people, and I live for them, then watching them die while I live on is not a happy thought. I won't live for someone else, no matter how temporary it may be. That's why I can't live for you, Rias. If I live for you, then I won't even be considered living. I'd be a husk of a human being, a hollow shell, a carcass. I won't be necessarily inhumane, but rather simply just not human, robotic if you will. A life of servitude for someone isn't exactly the most ideal. I'd rather curl up and sit in the corner while crying for my mom. I will always and forever will be eternally grateful for you saving my life, but I am Hayao Issei first, pawn of Rias Gremory second. Once my service is over, if I were to stick around, it won't be because you were my old master, it will because you're Rias. Oh, Rias let out. It sounded like she was sad but pleased to hear that at the same time. Rias considered herself an above-average master in terms of caring for her servants, and ordering Issei around was never her intention. But still, his words managed to reach all the way to the deepest parts of her heart. It made her feel guilty for the crimes she hadn't committed and made her forget about the ones she already had. Everyone thinks differently and no one has the same thought process, but hearing Issei's perspective made her smile. It wasn't the matter of whether or not she agreed with him, it was the manner in which he said it, and that made Rias so interested in him. His passion for what he thought was right was extremely admirable in her opinion. Staring at his lowered head, Rias wondered what to say to him before he continued on once more. People often dedicate their lives to someone, whether that be a political figure or a religious one. They are ready to lay their lives down at a moment's notice. But the difference between a soldier and a veteran is what exactly they're fighting for. A soldier fights for a name, a veteran fights for an idea. Nationalism is much more complex than attributing it to fighting for a country simply because it has nation in its name. You don't need to fight for something that's established. You don't even need to fight for the place you call home. You simply need to fight for the qualities you value in life. That's your true home. Presidents have terms, countries can switch allegiances. But it's only when nations forget what they originally fought for that soldiers stop to think for a second and reconsider. The people that died so they can be where they are at now, the people that sweat and tears for an idea they valued, the people that believed in something so strongly that they set out to accomplish their goal even at the cost of their own life. A country is just a name, Rias. Similarly, God in Christianity is just a name capitalized to signify his importance. It's much more than just worshiping your Creator because of the fact he created you that makes one kneel down. Rather, it's what he represents that makes you grateful. You want to protect those ideals, you want to fight for it. The modern-day view of God in Christianity being a merciful God is an extremely recent development in religious history. One of the main attributes in Christianity is fear of the Lord. The fact that perception of God can change suggests that perhaps the blind faith that people put into him is a bit more than just dedication to a name that belongs to a person they don't truly know. Faith is something that describes the continuous worship of something you can't see, something you can't touch, taste, smell, or feel. Someone you don't even know is a whole different story. Nobody expects to be able to understand God, but they should at least be able to have a decent understanding on how he operates. The why is a question in which everyone has their own each individual answers. If there exists different subfactions and denominations of the church, which God stays most faithful to the original, which Bible holds gospel, and which one holds blasphemy? The three Abrahamic gods worshipped in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are one and the same. They all originate from the same God, but they each believe their own interpretations of him and what he represents. Christians believe that the Messiah will return someday, while Jews believe he is yet to come. Islam believes a similar notion and denounces the legitimacy of Christ. Who's to say which is right and which is wrong? People go to God to ask for his guidance, but whichever church they pray in first is the one that they will stay in. Whatever book that they open first is the one that they will believe in. It is not uncommon for people to want to switch their religious beliefs, and not all of them do it because they found indisputable evidence that proves that the other is real. To forsake your original religion, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop believing in what your religion teaches, but rather, it's how they treat people in certain aspects of life that makes people renounce one's faith. It suggests that perhaps it's what the religion represents and not who it's about or how the religion functions. Atheists baptize themselves into Christianity because the idea of a merciful God secures their afterlife. Muslims choose to desert from Allah because their people are forcing their Socratic beliefs onto others. Jewish people convert to Buddhism because they want to reach nirvana. They don't need to believe in Buddha, just as atheists don't have to think that God is scientifically real. They just have to believe in their representation as an intrinsic value. The Crusaders and the Muslims both slaughtered people in God's name, and it's ironic because they didn't slaughter all the infidels for God's name, but rather because of it. Religion represents a reason to fight, a motivation to go on, an idea to believe in. And it's strong, Rias. It's strong. I don't want to be like them, Rias. If I live for an ideal, I need to accept that I'm selfish. If I live for a person, I need to accept that I'm worthless. Answer me this, Rias. You've been watching me for quite some time, haven't you? Rias had expected this, but definitely not so soon. Is it a problem? Issei thought for a second before answering back. No. Pondering more, Issei continued, you could have saved me or intervened whenever you liked. There was no real reason that I had to die, was there? A heavy silence filled the air as Issei knew his words hit true. Or at least true enough for Rias to take a moment to consider her response. It had to be somewhere in the park of half-true and entirely. Do you mind? Issei knew that while she likely may or not have held a role in his death, she still allowed him to die. By affiliation, she most likely was able to save Mohama as well. Even if her servants weren't on surveillance 24/7, it still fell under her duty to watch over the students of the school she resided in. Whether or not her responsibility was to protect them was something that Issei couldn't provide an answer for. He wasn't someone to hold a grudge anyways. No, Issei finally responded. Mohama's death was as much of his fault that it was Rias. He knew Mohama wouldn't want him to blame himself nor her, and he knew that shifting blame around the circle of those guilty is simple madness. Issei hoisted himself up off the window and stood up straight. Ria's eyes traced the scarred skin on his back, which had recently reopened in his and Rainier's battle. It bled in the moonlight, dripping down the middle of Issei's back. It was ugliness incarnate, a disgrace, an imperfection. I can heal that if you'd like, Rias offered. She wasn't good at healing, but it was still a fresh wound that wouldn't require too much expertise to seal. Issei waved her off. Leave it. It's a reminder of my failure, and it needs to be something I'll never forget. If I ever do become strong, this scar will remind me of the people I had lost because I wasn't. Becoming strong was one of Issei's goals. He didn't want to do it because D-Drag asked him to, he wished to do it out of his own fruition. Magic was an interest that would never cease to amaze Issei, especially now when he had no clue on how it functioned. He wasn't going to lie to himself and say that his motivation was to protect his friends or his family. He still cared for Mohama and his mother and loved them both deeply, but he was doing this on his own. He was selfish. So you think that the world isn't worth living in anymore. He turned around to face Rias with a Cheshire grin on his face. His smirk reached the ends of his cheeks and his irises glowed brightly green. The emerald color of his eyes were mesmerizing. They went exquisitely well with his white sclere. Rias found that she liked his smile and wanted to see more of it. Issei should definitely smile more often. I think that the world as I know it just got a little bit more interesting. Just a little, Rias intoned. Just a little. Issei repeated. He was going to live for himself. Issei was freezing. He twisted and turned in bed as he felt the breeze on his bare back. He hissed as the scar on his back burnt, clearly not yet healed from yesterday's events. His thighs pressed together as he curled up in a, skin contacting against skin. His naked calves cringed and his toes curled in a shiver from the cold. Weight naked, Issei shot up out of bed and he felt it crease under him. This was not a bed, this was a couch. Issei turned his body in the direction of the floor and brought his legs off the couch, feeling suddenly claustrophobic. His anxiety only increased in intensity as he found someone equally naked sleeping right beside him. Laid there on the couch right beside him was a young woman with crimson hair curled up in a. The remnants of the moonlight shone on her skin, illuminating her creamy white complexion even further. Issei sighed. Rias looked so peaceful in her sleep, nothing at all like what normal people would assume devils looked like. Issei got up and walked over to the window that had claw markings from where he gripped it last night. Looking back at his left arm, Issei found unblemished flesh with no signs of his sacred gear in sight. Massaging his left arm, it felt perfectly normal to him. That was good. He had hoped that his nerves wouldn't have to get used to reverting back to his original form. It was a gauntlet after all, not a transfiguration. Issei saw the sun start to appear from the east and knew that it had to be approximately 6 in the morning. Hyo didn't really have dark winters and Issei had never seen a snowflake in his life. It did, however, have extremely windy weather for practically the entire year and frequent rain showers and thunderstorms. Issei walked right next to the window, having the sun warm his body but still feeling the breath of the air on his skin. He reached behind the window and patted the left and right sides of the outside panel. Finding a proper grip, he brought them in, securely closing the window. Stepping away from his finished work, the beam of the sun still pierced through the glass panels. The sun had completely risen. Checking to see if the noise of the window had awoken Rias, Issei turned the other way around to find out if he needed to interrogate her yet. The sun didn't shine on the couch she was sleeping on, but it did bring light to a table nearby a couch and their couch. It was located directly in the middle, and there was a clear separate couch that Rias could easily have slept on. She better have a good explanation for this. On the table were 2 fresh pairs of school uniforms, one Kyo Academy female and one male. Assuming they were for both the undressed people in the room, Issei grabbed his designated clothes and started putting them on. Seeing white socks and men's shoes underneath the transparent coffee table, Issei bent down to pick them up. It was even his shoe size as well. How long had she been stalking Issei for? Shaking his head, Issei tied his shoelaces into matching pairs of bunny ears and subsequently heard a yawn from beside him. Rias had awoken, it seemed. Extending her arms into the air, Rias stretched her arms upward and flexed them back down to start rubbing her eyes furiously. Taking her hands off her eyes, she stared at Issei and blinked twice before saying, "Oh, hi, Issei. Good morning." She at least had the decency to blush at her embarrassment for what she did. "Rias," Issei said sternly. Wait, Rias shaked her open palms at Issei hurriedly. "Before you get mad at me, let me explain. To heal you, we both needed to naked so I could bathe you in magic." Issei didn't suppose there was a backstory to go along with this strange ritual. Then why do I still feel like shit? Mental fatigue was one thing. Issei could understand if he had a migraine right now and in desperate need of some aspirin. However, his whole body felt like it was still holding the weight he had lifted up off his after last night's talk. Rias put her hand behind her head and rubbed her neck sheepishly. I'd have forgotten to start the healing process." Issei deadpanned. This was the person that was supposed to be his master. You play too much. Rias took her hand off of her neck and gained back that confidence he so heavily associated with her. She smiled at him with a dazzling smile, not even needing to open her mouth to show her pearly white teeth. "And you play too little." Issei sighed. He couldn't get mad at this woman. "Bye, Rias." He turned and started to walk away in the direction of the double doors. He still had time before school started. Perhaps he could sleep on the bench while waiting for the bell to ring. "Wait," he heard Rias cry out and he felt her grasp his hand from behind. He could feel her soft fingertips grazing against his own, but felt a solid surface in the palm of his hand. Something was placed in the middle of them. She was giving him something. Stopping and turning around to face Rias, he saw her still leaning forward to catch his hand before stopping and leaving whatever she handed to him behind. "I took this off your person on Friday night when I healed you. I didn't want to disintegrate your phone along with your clothes." Issei opened his palm to see what she had given him. It was a flip phone with no stickers or labels on it, but Issei knew it belonged to him. No other phone looked this ordinary and dull. Issei still remembered buying it from a retail store as a second-hand good. Issei flipped open his phone and saw that he had one new message. Pressing the buttons on the number pad, Issei was able to navigate to his text conversations. An exclamation mark was next to a phone number on the top of the list, sorted by most recent messages. It was Matsuda's number, and underneath it, Issei saw Mohama's number, who still was grayed out from inactivity. Breath stuck in his throat, Issei's fingers trembled as he opened up Matsuda's and his conversation for the first time in a long while. Reading the black text on the white background, Issei's eyes shot up to the first line and started straying down the screen. Hey, Issei, I know that we don't really talk that much, even though I continue to hope that you will eventually respond to me. I still reach out to you from time to time, but I've given up on that hope a long time ago. Anyways, I'm not going to be talking about our weird and complicated friendship, but I was going to ask you to deliver a message for me. Matsuda's text had a caption inscribed to the side of it. 4:19 a.m. He must have been up all night. How important could the message be? See, I know you will see Mohama before I do. You always manage to know what he's doing at all times somehow. Anyways, I would just like to ask if you can tell Mohama I said, hope you get better, me and Issei miss you. I was originally planning to ask if you could just say me instead of the both of us, but I know you miss Mohama as much as I do, perhaps even more. You can't fool me. The fact that the text was so unimportant hurt more than if it were urgent. Matsuda was still convinced of the normality of the situation. It pained Issei to continue reading, but he persevered onwards. Why am I still continuing on writing this message? I don't know. I guess I just got a little worried and carried away, that's all. I don't know why I'm even freaking out. Everything will probably turn out just fine. I guess I'll see you tomorrow, Issei. Hopefully Mohama feels better then, and if not, I'll be waiting for him. I'm sure you'll be waiting for him with me as well. Mohama means the world to the both of us. Talk to you later, Issei. Matsuda must have been so tired he forgot tomorrow was today. Issei felt ready to hurl, and his body felt like it was ready to collapse at any minute. Someone could lightly tap him with the utmost tip of their finger and he would probably fall down. The phone shaked away in Issei's hand, and it nearly fell out of it multiple times. Feeling the need to respond to Matsuda, Issei composed himself and started pressing the buttons on his phone once more. He was all that Issei managed to get out before he hit another roadblock. What was he going to tell Matsuda? Was it going to be the truth? Issei knew he wasn't going to tell Matsuda about the mystical world, but was he going to let him know that Mohama died? He deserved to know. Right before Issei knew it, he was looking at his own sent message. He transferred to a different school. He told me he's been thinking about moving to a different city for a while now. I don't know if you'll be able to see him before he leaves, but I'll make sure to give him your regards. He didn't even see his fingers move or feel his fingertips pressing the buttons. He had to tell Matsuda later on today. He needed to fix his mistake. It was too late now, but Issei knew he would see him at lunch. No, that's not right. They had different lunches today. After school, then. Issei heard the clasp of a bra being snapped into place. He looked up from the phone to look at Rias, forgetting about her presence in his deliberation. She was currently in the middle of pulling her button corset around her waist. She met his eye and looked a bit worried. Are you okay, Issei? Issei calmed down, trying not to look devastated in front of Rias. Of course he was not okay. I'm fine, Rias. He sounded a lot more composed than he truly was on the inside. Looking back to his phone, he saw Matsuda's response to his message. Oh, that's really disappointing. I don't truly understand his motives, but I'm sure you'll explain them to an idiot like me. After school at the Kendo Club building today, right, it had seemed that this was the way things were going to go. Placing his fingers back on the number pad to type again, Issei responded the only way he knew how. Yeah. His fingers lingered on the keys even after he had already pressed the enter button. Turning around once more, Issei pushed the double doors open with his hand. Still looking down at the screen of the phone, Issei walked down the stairs that led to the first floor of the old school building. Pocketing his phone, Issei opened up the door of the first floor and was greeted immediately by the sunlight of the morning. Putting his hand up to shield his eyes, Issei turned around to close the door behind him. Lowering his hand, Issei turned around and walked to the courtyard. The sun shined on Issei's bangs, the dark pigment of his hair not being remotely helpful in reflecting the sunlight but rather being counterproductive by absorbing it instead. He put his hands in his pockets and started to walk, realizing two things. 1, he had forgotten his backpack at Mohama's mom's house, and 2, he had forgotten to say goodbye to Rias. Today just wasn't his day, it had seemed. Continuing his walk to class, Issei bumped into someone, but they were too light to make Issei fall back, instead sucking under his weight and tripping Issei in the process. Issei placed his hands on the ground on each side of the other person's head, steadying himself in the air so that he wouldn't collide with them. "Oi," he heard a light feminine voice say as he brought himself up off the ground. Issei chastised himself as he dusted off his school uniform with his hands. This never really happened to him. He always managed to be aware of his surroundings. Looking back down at the girl, he saw a petite white female with blonde hair that fell under a white veil. She was shorter than Rainier was when she donned the Yuma physique. She wore a teal tunic that had sleeves, which went all the way to her ends of her wrist, tied over a dark teal dress that went down just above her ankles. The only color besides teal on her outfit were the white tips of her sleeve with golden outlines along the edges and the white collar of her tunic with light blue highlights on it. The white veil flew away from her head, revealing long straight blonde hair with split curves on her forehead. The girl cried out something unintelligible while throwing her hands up in hopes of catching her veil, which was carried by the wind a close few feet away from them. With her veil gone, Issei could see she had a white blindfold wrapped so tightly around her eyes that Issei could see the indents of her topographic shifts along her face. He turned around to see if the white veil she adorned had flown away once more, but it was still laying on the ground next to them. Going to pick it up, he passed by the girl and felt a spark in his body, which almost halted him in his path. Kneeling on one knee, Issei bent down and retrieved her white veil, and as it was in his hands, he realized that there were light blue highlights on it of the same shade as her collar. Going back to the girl, he saw that she had stood up off the ground, and Issei revised his earlier assessment of her. She was shorter than Yuma, that was for sure, but only by about half an inch or an inch. She was similar to Mohama in the way that he looked taller than he actually was because he was skinny, and she looked shorter than she actually was because she was petite. She had a very lithe body to her, but she didn't seem to be underdeveloped, as there were clear indications of S. They were not big by any means, but they weren't exactly small either. Malnourished then, Issei handed the white veil in front of her, but felt stupid as she wasn't able to see what was in front of her. Then, she surprised him by reaching out to him and taking the veil from his hands. It wasn't like a blind person walking with their hands in front of them until they made contact. It was clear, precise movement that held no extra motions to it. Crazy, he heard the girl say, actually being able to understand her this time. She spoke Italian with a very harsh accent that Issei could only attribute to her being a tourist in Kuo. Issei felt the same spark alighting a flame once more as his proximity to the girl was within reach again. "You're tired," she said in fluent Italian. "And hurt," she continued. "Let me help you." She put her hands in front of her and green energy started emitting from her hands. Issei's eyes widened as he quickly closed the gap between her and firmly grabbed her hands in an attempt to prevent her from doing whatever she was doing. Once his palm met her bare wrist, Issei felt a surge of electricity, with a much higher magnitude than the spark, as his vision went blurry and the events of the past week came flying back to him. Sleeping in class, hanging out with Mohama and Matsuda, meeting Rainer as Yuma, going on a date with her, dying. It shocked him to the core and he let go of her immediately, avoiding her like the plague. Backing up with tender hands, Issei stuttered out, what was teeth at, taking a deep breath in. He felt foolish, realizing that not only was he stuttering but was also speaking in an entirely different language than the girl. The girl approached him once more with glowing hands, saying, "Let me help you." Issei, in a moment of desperation, finally found the means to form words and cried out, "Aspetta un momento." His Italian must have sounded so offensive to her, but it did its job apparently, and she stopped in her tracks. "You can speak Italian?" she asked him, surprised. Issei could understand it, but speaking it was a lot harder in actuality than in practice or in writing. He was going to tell her no, before Drake interrupted him, apparently awoke. "Let me take over, partner." Drake's relaxing voice came, calming Issei down a bit. Take over what? Issei asked in his mind. "Do you trust me?" Issei Drake asked, not helping out by sharing any details with him. As the girl got over her confusion and started approaching him again, Issei thought immediately, "Yes, I trust you, Drake. Do whatever you please." Drake was very high up on the list of Issei's most trusted people in the world, but then again that list can be counted on one hand. He had only met Drake yesterday, but he felt a strong connection with the one who shared his soul. He would lean on Drake's power as Drake trusted Issei to not let him down. Issei relaxed as much as he could in the current situation and surrendered his body to Drake. Issei felt sleepy as his eyes closed. When he opened them once more, he was seeing through his eyes, but the feeling felt faint and fuzzy. His vision was a lot sharper, and Issei swore he could see a couple more colors than he usually could. The girl saw Issei's eyes go sunken as his irises condensed into slits and changed to a more regent color of green. He blinked his eyes, before steadying himself and talked to her with a deeper voice. "Hello there, child, what's your name?" Issei's eyes widened as he heard his voice speak Italian. It didn't sound like there were marbles warbling in his throat and sounded extremely clean, except maybe a little archaic. The girl smiled at him and said, "My name is Asia Argento, nice to meet you." Like the continent, Asia, Issei thought aloud, before realizing he actually spoke it into existence. He could still control his mouth even though Drake had taken over. He butchered the pronunciation of her name and her smile fell as her eyes widened. He said it more like Azia than Aish. Issei was going to apologize, but her face lit up as she asked him, "Can you say my name again?" I really liked how it sounded. She liked the way it sounded. Issei didn't think it sounded all that special when it came out of his mouth. "Asia," Drake repeated, causing Asia to smile brightly. She gained a dreamy look on her face, and while Issei couldn't see her eyes, her tilted head and her beaming smile said enough. "You seem lost. How can I help you?" Asia's head snapped back into place, as her smile dropped again and she pushed her index fingers against one other in her hand. That's because I am. Can you point me in the direction of this town's church, Mr. Dragon?" Issei was shocked, but his body's eyes didn't widen since Drake seemed to be relatively unfazed by her comment. He let out a deep chuckle and said, I suppose it would be really rude if you gave us your name and we didn't give you ours. My name is DxD, and the idiot that inhabits this body, who calls himself my host, is named Issei. Asia clasped her hands together in sheer excitement and said, his name is Issei. I've never heard a name like that before. It sounds so wonderful. She was ecstatic and seemed so happy about Issei's name. DxD started chuckling in Issei's head as Issei audibly let out an A in his mind, to DxD's amusement. DxD saved Issei's body the appearance of his confusion and said, I'm sure Issei would be delighted to hear that, Asia. While smiling fondly at Asia, Issei, let me access your memories of the church. Issei didn't know how he could allow DxD to do that, but he thought of the only church he had ever known this town to have and placed his memory in the front of his mind. Tuo only has one church, Asia. Issei used to visit there all the time with an old family friend when he was young. He pointed to a church, located on top of a hill far away from where they were standing. Sadly, the church has been abandoned for a long time. Sorry if I couldn't help, we don't know of any other churches in this town. DxD sounded apologetic as he was truly trying to help Asia out. Asia's face lit up in recognition and said, it's okay. That is actually the church I'm looking for, thank you so much. The person I was with teleported us somewhere away from there, but I seem to have lost him, so I didn't know how to get back. Issei suddenly felt very cautious towards Asia, who had been nothing but nice for the entirety of the conversation prior to this moment. She was lying, or at least telling the partial truth. Glad we could provide any means of assistance. Well, we'll be on our way while you'll go on yours. Farewell, young nun. I hope you find your way. DxD bid farewell, sounding like he meant a lot more than just helping her find the direction of the church. Thank you for all your help, DxD. And tell Issei I said thank you to him as well when you get the chance. I hope we meet again someday. She turned into the direction of the church and walked away, causing Issei to come to the realization that she was walking with her blindfold still on. She was already gone before Issei could offer to show her the way. Issei didn't quite know what to think about her, so he talked to DxD. Those aren't nun colors, Issei said to him. The idea of Asia being a nun didn't pop into his head until he noticed a wooden cross tied into a necklace on her. The cross wasn't a crucifix, there was no sign of Jesus being nailed to the cross. I know, DxD responded, apparently aware of all Issei's thoughts. Issei knew he could hear all of them, but he still wished to converse with DxD regardless. Her veil was white, Issei said, referencing the fact that she had no black habit wrapped on top of her head to secure her veil in place under it. I know, DxD repeated. DxD himself was also thinking about the girl, wondering what she could be doing in this town. Wishing to change the mellow tone of the subject, DxD said, can I be in control for a little while longer? Issei, I'm getting the feeling of wanting to stretch my legs. He put his hands behind his head and started walking in the direction of school. Sure, Issei agreed. He had no qualms about DxD finally being allowed fresh air after Issei didn't know how long. It wasn't anything to mind. Issei did have one question though. How does my body feel? Still walking calmly with his hands behind his head, DxD responded, it feels a little off. It's a bit different than my dragon form. And to answer your question, this is the first time I've ever been able to have access to a physical body. DxD was still talking out loud in Issei's body, apparently not caring that he wasn't silent at the moment. Don't worry, I'm not that stupid. I'll talk in your head when necessary, but as of right now, nobody's around to hear us, I checked. Let's just enjoy the moment while it lasts, Issei. That question now gone from his mind, Issei had another one though. What are we going to do about my eyes? I can't go to school looking like I'm ready to shoot the whole thing up. DxD laughed and said, don't worry about that. I've got it covered. It did nothing to calm him down, but Issei definitely knew that DxD wouldn't tell him that if he didn't already have a backup plan. DxD took his hands off his head and waved his left hand over Issei's face, covering it for a split second. When his hand was gone, Issei's eyes were back to normal and no one would be able to tell the difference that they weren't talking to Issei. See, all good now. You really gotta learn to put more faith in me, partner. He joked to Issei. He put his hands in his pockets instead of at the back of his head and continued to walk along the pathway. Ignoring DxD's jest, Issei brought up his thoughts again from earlier. If you could describe my body in one word, what would it be? Issei was truly curious about what DxD would say. Would he call it weak, fragile, skinny? He truly didn't know, and Issei couldn't wait to find out. DxD surprised him once more by simply saying, limiting. While laughing hysterically, Issei found the humor in it as well and laughed along with him. Once they arrived in first period, Issei expected DxD to go full troublemaker mode and start flirting with girls or mocking the teachers, but he didn't. He was simply quiet and donned a tired look on his face while sluggish moving across the hallways. He didn't grant teachers more than one word of a response and even was able to mimic Issei's half-lidded eyes. Damn, he got Issei's personality down to a T. When lunch finally came, DxD didn't go to any lunch tables but instead headed to a nearby tree and sat down in the shade. He slumped his back against the tree and tilted his head up before closing his eyes. Issei, still looking through his eyes, found that his vision went black as well. A red flame spiraled in the middle of Issei's vision as it warped into the throne room of Zangai no Metsu. Expecting to see DxD lazily lying down on his throne like the first time he talked to DxD here, he was surprised once more. Not only had the layout of the throne changed by shifting into a much more smaller throne with actual chair-like properties, but the fact DxD wasn't actually in his dragon form. In front of him, sitting on the throne, was a man dressed in crimson armor with shoulder pauldrons that had a dragon symbol engraved into its metal. A red cape was hugging the seat of the throne as it was tucked in behind the man's legs, getting wrinkled as a result. The man's helmet was an intimidating vermilion piece with horn-like metal coming from the sides of the helmet and bending upwards. His eye slits were shadowed, but Issei saw a green glow emitting from the inside of the helmet. The man brought his hand up to his head and took off his helmet, revealing a carbon copy of Issei's face with vibrant colored green eyes. "How do I look?" DxD asked. Knowing that DxD was able to hear his thoughts, Issei tried to form words to articulate his meaning in a better way somehow. "Ethereal, royal, terrifying." DxD started laughing in the same deeper pitch of Issei's voice, before smirking at him and responding. "I decided to attempt to make a form similar to yours, so I can get accustomed to this weird body." That reminded Issei. About that, how exactly does that even work? He was truly curious on how the mechanics of DxD being able to take control actually worked. "Well, I said that this was the first time I was actually able to access a physical body, right? That wasn't a lie. I tried to take control over my first few hosts after I realized I couldn't separate our souls. It turns out that God had foreseen this happening, and when he was sealing me away, he thought of all the possibilities of me breaking the seal. He must have come to the same conclusions I did and took precautionary measures to make sure that I couldn't take over. I believe that the only reason I was able to take control was because you permitted me to." That was interesting to say the least. "I'm gonna be honest with you, Issei. I wasn't the nicest of dragons. There's a reason why people feared me and I enjoyed their fear. I've mellowed out throughout the centuries, Issei, but I wasn't always this way. The reason why me and the white dragon were fighting to begin with was an extremely petty one. I will share it with you if you so wish to hear it. You deserve the need to know why I have been bestowed upon you." Issei walked around the red carpet of the throne room with his chin in his hand, deciding on a response. The reason doesn't matter. Continuing to pace around the room, Issei continued to formulate an explanation. Oh, DxD was surprised. Issei didn't want to know. "I don't care if you murdered millions of people, DxD. Even if the reasons are because you wanted them to kneel down to you and they said no. What you did was definitely wrong, but I'm not going to judge you for that. There are countless amounts of serial killers, pedophiles, misogynists, and other inhumane people in the world. Inhumane humans at that. What makes me have the need to judge you on what you did when they are able to get a free pass? Is it because you killed more people than they did that you should be judged and they should be ignored?" The obvious response would be that everyone is equally guilty. But the solution is so obvious that a child can reach the same conclusion as well. It's an immature thought, DxD. Either everything is okay or nothing is okay. If you don't judge everyone, including yourself, your approach to the theoretical solution is a double standard, hypocritical even. The only ones that should kill are those who are prepared to be killed. I wish to stay humane, DxD. But that doesn't mean that I will slaughter everyone that is inhumane with the sharp razor tips of my claws and hack and slash at them until they bleed to death. It doesn't mean I will keep my chin up and look down at everyone else from a moral high ground. It doesn't mean that I won't interact with bad people simply because they don't follow the same rules I hold myself to. If you seek to create a utopia in which there is no more crime, then you must be prepared to end your life right after because you are guilty of crime as well. Being prepared to be killed doesn't mean that you will thrust your into a blade when it is pointed in your direction, put your mouth over the barrel of a gun when it is in your line of sight. It doesn't mean that you leave your family behind and die the moment that you kill the very last person. It means that if Judgment Day comes, you will be prepared to go to hell for the things you have done when you were alive. You will be prepared to rot in eternity, forever punished, without any resistance. No questions asked, because you already know all the answers. It's a multiple choice test and the answers are all of the above. Answer me this, DxD. Do you believe that I should die? DxD thought for a second, before answering. No, if you truly believe in what you're saying, then there is no reason that you should die as well. At least, not for your crimes. Not everyone deserves a second chance, DxD. But because your second chance was given by someone else before I met you, I can only see the DxD that's standing in front of me right now. If I had met you before you were sealed, I would have had a different mindset. If you had slaughtered my mother in front of me in cold, I would have reaved for vengeance. That doesn't make me hypocritical, DxD. I am not ignoring what you did or saying what you did was right. What's the point of me telling you what you did was wrong when you already know it's wrong? I didn't kill Rainier because she was a killer, I killed her because she killed my friend. I'm not saying what I did was right and what she was doing was wrong. I'm a selfish person, DxD. She probably had friends and family that loved her, just like the rest of us. And I took her away from them, just like she took Mohama away from me. You chose to do what you did, because you believed it was right at the time. Rainier chose to do it because she was told to, and she agreed. You were able to change your mindset, and one could argue that it is only because you had gotten sealed. But the only way she was able to change hers is if the person she was working under had changed theirs or she had a sudden change of heart and decided to leave her post. I didn't kill her because she was doing her job. I killed her because I acted on those orders and chose to obey them. I'm not saying that Rainier wouldn't have been able to change eventually. I don't know her. I don't know how she grew up. I don't know what she thinks. I don't know what goes through her head. But I didn't want to give her a second chance, and I'm selfish for that. It was a wrong thing to do and it was inhumane, but I will take that in stride because I don't want to see her living ever again. I'm prepared to take any repercussions that might follow, even if it means sacrificing my humanity, but I'm going to try to hold on to it for as long as I can. If you choose to stop someone by ending their life before they get a chance to kill other people, then that's the idiotic reason. If you wish to do that, you need to end the life of a baby as soon as it's born. Even before that, actually. You should just end it when they are still in their mother's womb. That way you won't have to worry about it later on. Because everybody has the potential to kill, just as everyone has the potential to do good. It's not that I don't think that you should be judged, I just don't think I'm the correct person to judge you. From a legal standpoint, judges are necessary in order to keep the visage of peace. They spend their entire lives trying to be as fair and as unbiased as possible. I don't even think there is a correct person, but regardless, that life isn't for me. The difference is, you have been judged. Your punishment has been for you to live and wallow in your guilt for eternity. But I believe that you've already served your sentence and are long overdue for forgiveness. Ending somebody else's life does not necessarily have to mean that you value your life over theirs. It just means that you value your life. Or at least value the life of whatever thing the other person is threatening. Killing is instinct-based, DxD. If a woman is getting D and she stabs her rapist with a knife, that was out of desperation and fear. She wouldn't have killed him if he hadn't touched her. If she saw him walking on the street, she would just think he's a random guy and simply pass by normally. If a soldier sees an enemy on the battlefield, they won't hesitate to pull the trigger. They want to fight for their country, but their wish of coming back home to see their family outweighs their loyalty. It's only when it gets personal that you are able to muster up the courage to end another person's life. I didn't kill Rainier to prevent her from killing other people. I killed her because she acted upon those decisions to kill the people that I loved, that I cared about. It's not that my willpower was stronger than hers, it's that both of us wanted to go home and I just ended up being the one on top. If she won, she would have killed me. She did kill me. Sometimes killing is a necessity, DxD. It's either kill or be killed. If you are getting D, you kill because they might not necessarily kill you, but they will take your life away. That's why everyone who should kill are those that are prepared to be killed, DxD. Not must. Killing in self-defense is considered an exception, but I'm not going to stand here and argue that Rainier died because I had no other option. I'm not saying that soldiers are idiotic for obeying orders or fighting for the peace that they wish to accomplish. I'm just saying that life isn't for me. A sense of justice is admirable, but you have to become a beacon of justice to exact punishment on other people. It's not a righteous decision or power given to you by a higher force, it is because you have the selfish desire to erase all the wrong from the world. This isn't an out-of-sight, out-of-mind perspective, DxD. This is me saying that if you choose to judge, then you must commit to your judgments. To be able to selectively choose who you judge in the narrow limits of your vision, while ignoring the rest of the world you aren't able to see, is a true out-of-sight, out-of-mind mindset. You might think that eliminating all that's wrong makes you selfless, but that wrong was connected to somebody that cared for them, somebody that loved them. When their wife or children are holding their father's bleeding corpse with your sword still stuck in their heart, I don't think you would seem very heroic in their eyes. A true justice system doesn't work because justice isn't an obsolete idea. If justice is based off of a system of morality, then everyone has a different idea of what justice truly is. Justice is different from retribution. Retribution would imply that a person is punished for their actions as deemed by a lawful system or a religious one. Justice as a whole cannot be bound by physical names or words on a paper. Death is inevitable, DxD. If I am going to live my life, I'm not going to waste it trying to eliminate an unfathomable goal I can't do by myself. You most likely were viewed as a menace to everyone. A monster that needed to be stopped. To kill someone, that doesn't necessarily make you a killer. But being a cold-blooded killer might have been the case for you, because I don't know your reasons, and neither did the people that were afraid of you apparently. They continued to think that you were a monster, and I can't help but agree with them. The difference is, you were stopped. You are no longer a monster. I do not believe for a second that if you were free right now that you would kill unnecessarily unless it was required. Tell me this, DxD. When I died as a human, before I reincarnated to a devil, there was a moment where you were drifting in limbo, correct? DxD's glowing eyes widened. Yes, he admitted. Our souls separated once your body died, but when your body and your soul came back, my soul went to yours because it felt an affinity with yours. They had already been acclimated for almost 18 years at this point. That would make sense. Issei had guessed that this was the case, but if so, when were you going to tell me? DxD was honest. Never. You didn't need to know. Issei chuckled, before bursting out in rapturous laughter. DxD was confused, and Issei could see why Rainier found so much delight in seeing that expression on his face. Is something funny, Issei? Issei stopped laughing and caught his breath, wheezing out while clutching his sides. Nothing. It's just that Issei's own eyes gleamed the emerald color of DxD's before finishing. You sound exactly like me. And I hate myself. I think you're a fine person, Issei. DxD said to him. Then how can I hate you if I'm fine and you're just like me, DxD? Just the fact that you were worried about my reaction proves to me that you are indeed a changed person. DxD's eyes widened before getting up off his throne and walked to Issei and embracing him in a firm hug. It was sorta weird hugging someone who looked like a duplicate of you, but Issei suspended his cynicism just for this moment. Issei hugged him back, but the moment was ruined when Dedrag whispered into his ear, "Somebody seems to be looking for you, Issei." Issei let Dedrag go as he closed his eyes, saying, "I'll talk to you later then, Dedrag." The world shifted back to normal, and Issei could feel his body give him back full control. It was a weird feeling, he would have to get used to it. Rising his head up from against the tree to look at his surroundings, the first thought Issei had was, holy shit. That actually worked. He didn't expect to be able to travel out of Zangai no Metsu without the assistance of Dedrag. His second thought was, oh, a white boy. In front of him was a blonde-haired white young man with blue eyes who was about 5'8". He had a lean frame and was looking down at Issei while smiling at him. Once he noticed Issei had awoken, his eyes squinted as his cheeks widened into a smile, showing off a dimple on each side. The girls at Kyo Academy would probably find this man really attractive, even for the simplest fact that he was different looking than the rest of the male students. He outstretched his hand to Issei and said, "Nice to meet you, Hayata-san. May I call you Issei?" Issei took the outstretched hand and gripped the boy as he pulled Issei up from the ground. Once he was finally upright, he let go of the boy's hand and settled for putting his own at his sides. "Your Japanese is terrible. And sure, I don't mind." The boy opened his eyes with an interested look on his face and said a bit creepily, "You're every bit the crude boy Rias-senpai described you as." What a nice way to start a conversation. "Rias sent you to come look for me. What does she want?" Issei was planning to talk to her later on today, but he didn't expect her to come looking for him. "Actually, I came by my own decision. I wanted to meet you personally before you were going to be introduced to the House of Gremory." That was nice of him, Issei supposed. "So what do you want to know about me? My favorite food, color, hobbies?" The boy's eyes squinted again as Issei felt a bit weirded out by him. "How did it feel to kill for your first time?" the boy asked Issei calmly. Issei's eyes widened for a split second, before turning back to normal. "I don't know what you're talking about. Akino killed Rainer, not me," Issei said back, equally as calm, to the boy who he still didn't know the name of. His eyes opened once more and said eerily, "We both know that's not true." Issei turned serious before relenting. "Yes, I was simply testing you. Congratulations, you passed," he said dryly. "It was as simple as she wanted to kill me, and I didn't want to die." The boy remained with a smile on his face while saying, "There's more to the story than that, Issei-san." He still was able to sound cheerful while talking about grave matters. It was quite unpleasant. "I'm not going to say anything to someone I don't even know." Issei didn't care if he was Ria's son or her brother or anything like that. He wasn't about to share any information about himself, without getting any in return. "My name is Kiba Yuyuto. Nice to meet you." He outstretched his hand once more, this time for a handshake. Issei looked down at the offered hand, before ignoring it and looking back up at Kiba. He narrowed his eyes. Kiba wasn't a white family name. Kiba seemed to notice Issei denying his handshake and brought his hand back to himself. "Well then, Kiba, tell me about your first kill. I'm curious about your thoughts on killing in general." "Don't worry, I won't judge." He tested Kiba once more, wanting to see if he would rise to take the bait. Both of them lingered in silence for a minute, before Issei continued. "It seems that we both have our own secrets to tell, Kiba." It was extremely satisfying to see Kiba drop his smile and turn serious for once. Kiba smiled again and proceeded to finally find his voice once more. "You're an interesting man, Issei. I can see why Rias chose you to be part of her peerage. I didn't come here on her orders, but you should probably check on her soon. She seemed a bit worried about you this morning." Kiba turned around and waved behind him. "Yarni, Issei." Issei watched him walk away, sighing as he dropped his serious expression. Issei wasn't trying to come off as rude, but that was a horrible way to start off a conversation. He was completely caught off guard with Kiba's bluntness. Checking his phone, Issei found that it was time to go back to class but didn't feel like it at the time. Instead, Issei chose to skip and walk straight to the old school building where Rias said the Occult Research Club's meetings were held. He had no idea on whether or not she would actually be there at this time, but it was the only place he knew she frequented, so it wouldn't hurt to find out. Opening the front door to the building, Issei walked up the spiral staircase, contemplating on what he would say to Rias. Was he going to apologize for just leaving abruptly this morning? Did she even mind his questions were left unanswered as he opened up the double doors that led into the main meeting room? Inside he was greeted by not only Rias and Kiba, but two small girls with short hair and another woman similar to Rias' height with black hair and purple eyes. On the couch Issei and Rias were sleeping on earlier today, there was a petite girl with short white hair and a black cat-shaped hair clip on the side of her hair. On the other couch was a girl with short platinum blonde hair that covered her forehead. She had pink eyes, but the color was in her irises, not her sclere. It seemed that they weren't actually due to an allergic reaction of some sort, even though the girl looked like she was on the verge of crying. Both of the girls were sitting down, but Issei could tell for a fact that they were shorter than both Rainer as Yuma and Asia. Asia, Yuma, and the platinum blonde girl were all similar in height at around 5 feet tall, but the white-haired girl was shorter than the blonde one by a considerable margin. Rias was standing behind a wooden desk with paperwork on top of it. Kiba was leaning on the edge of the desk with his arms crossed, smiling at Issei with fully open eyes. So, this was the Gremory house? Issei didn't know what he'd expected, but it was certainly not this. They looked extremely unorganized. It seemed as if they were more of a group of rallied teenagers, not anything Issei would associate with a clan or a guild. Which one of you is Akino? Issei asked out loud to no one in particular. That would be me. He heard a feminine voice from his right. Oh, he forgot about the black-haired girl. Giving her a one-over, he realized it should have been obvious right from the start. She was extremely beautiful, but had a very unique aesthetic look to her. She had spiky bangs that went over her forehead while the length of her hair was tied into a ponytail by a ribbon that rested on the back of her head. Her cascade of hair flowed all the way down to the back of her calves, not yet touching the ground but coming very close. That can't be effective in battle, Issei mused. Unlike Rias, she had an indistinguishably Japanese look to her and looked like a royal princess. The only thing missing was a kimono, and the Kyo Academy uniform didn't exactly fit the most prim standards a princess could be wearing. He supposed he could see where Mohama was coming from. She was the only other girl in the school he saw so far that could compete with Rias if they were talking about raw beauty. I would like to thank you for killing Rainier. I was going to finish her off, but Rias decided it would be better to whisk me away. Issei gave her his appreciation. She put her hand over her mouth and giggled. Thanking me for murdering a person, she took her hand off her mouth and locked eyes with Issei with a sultry look on her face. You sure know how to flatter a lady, Issei-kun. Issei's eyes narrowed. She was extremely similar to someone he wanted nothing to do with. The only difference between her and Rainier was that Rainier was for the most part openly aggressive. This Akino lady irked Issei with her passive aggressiveness. Not in the moment, but Issei could tell that she seemed like the person that would stab him in the back. Her attitude just screamed fake, and it was overwhelming. Not knowing how to respond, Rias saved him the trouble by interrupting his chain of thoughts as she introduced him to everyone. Everyone, this is Issei. Issei, this is everyone. You already met Akino, but the cute girl with white hair is Konkachan. Issei looked at the girl quietly nibbling on a cookie. Cute, Issei repeated to himself in his head. What a condescending adjective. Rias continued onward, not aware of Issei's distaste for the word she used. A shy boy dressed in the schoolgirl's uniform is Gasper-kun. It was a boy wanting to look a little bit closer. Issei stared at Gasper with a more critical eye, but he hid his face behind his hands. Don't look at me, Issei-senpai, a girlish voice cried out loud. Choosing to abide by the obviously embarrassed boy's request, Issei stared back at Rias. And this man right next to me is Yuta-san. Calling Kiba by his birth name. Actually, Rias. Me and Kiba already met. Issei corrected her. Her eyes blinked in surprise before questioning. Oh, is it so? How long have you two known each other? Rias didn't know if Kiba had known him prior to right now. Their relationship must not be that close if information hadn't been exchanged between master and servant. We just met about a half an hour ago during lunch. He came up to me to say hi. Issei elaborated. Rias smiled at Issei, apparently finding this new knowledge to her liking. That's great, don't worry about if you just met him today. I'm sure he and the rest of my peerage will get along with you splendidly. She clasped her hands together, optimistically. Yeah, Issei thought, supreme doubt forming in his head as he looked at Kiba's smiling, squinted-eyed face. An alarm ticked off on Rias's deck. It was a twin bell clock and was quite loud. Oh, it's time for the last period of the day. Bye, Gasper-kun and Konkachan. Rias waved at them as they walked outside the double doors and left them open behind them. Akino started walking away and said, I'll leave you alone with the boys, Rias. Talk to you later. She walked out of the double doors. Issei stared at the last remaining Gremory house member besides Rias, but he seemed to be looking in a different direction. Rias looked towards Kiba and asked him, Yuta-san, I don't mean to be rude, but can you leave us please? Kiba's attention snapped back to his master and said, Hi, Rias-sama, before walking out the double doors and closing them behind him. Issei started at Rias with a blank look on his face. Rias-sama, the only thing missing from Kiba was a salute to signify his loyalty. Rias had a stern expression on her face and calmly replied, I tried to get him to call me Rias, but he insisted on adding the suffix. After many failed attempts, I just let him be. That wasn't like the Rias he had come to know. She was persistent if nothing else, but then again Issei didn't spend a sufficient amount of time with her to properly gauge and hold her to any lasting personality traits. Seeing as Rias felt the need to be serious for once, Issei didn't push the issue and instead asked the question that had bugged his mind for the past minute. You called the members of the house your peerage, Issei reminded her. Sotsu. Rias waved her hand over her desk and the paperwork disappeared. In replacement of it was a crimson board game seemingly made out of energy. She picked up a piece in her hand and asked him, What do you know about chess, Issei? Not much, Issei answered honestly. I know the basic principles, but the last time I played it was when I was a child. It was just something to pass the time, as the kids played it when their parents were praying in the church. Rias fondled the small piece in her hand, turning it around with her fingers. It was a pawn. Devils call chess the game of kings. The chess system is a recent adaptation made by one of the four great Satans, a man by the name of Ajuka Beelzebub. He was impressed by the game created by humans and chose to utilize its concept. He developed magical objects called evil pieces and issued them out to a number of high-class devils, including the Gremory house. The crimson board and the pawn in her hand dissipated and Rias extended her arm to the right, conjuring a crimson engraved circle. She reached her hand into the circle and pulled out 2 chess pieces. It was a rook, a bishop, and a knight. She held them openly in her palm so Issei could see them. These are the only evil pieces I have left. Akino is my queen, Kaneko is my rook, Gasper is my bishop, and Yuudo is my knight. She opened the circle once more and put the evil pieces back into wherever the circle led. She stared at Issei with a smile and finished. You took all 8 of my pawn pieces to save, Issei. Your body resisted the evil pieces even when they were up to 7 pawns. How do the evil pieces work? Issei asked Rias. Sama implemented this system in order to repopulate the devils after the Great War. He gave these pieces to us so that registered kings could reincarnate humans into devils in order to increase the number of devils in the underworld. That sounded a lot better on paper. So, subjugation then, Issei said outright. Rias cringed at his response. Not exactly. She tried to defend herself. What happens to the peerage that decides to resist? If she could answer that question, then perhaps it wasn't entirely like what Issei described it as. Silence. I guess you could call it that, but I would never force reincarnation on anyone. Issei didn't really give consent when she reincarnated him, did he? Don't worry, I don't blame you, Rias. I'm not judging you, I just want to understand. Issei responded. It didn't matter, he had much more things to do in life anyways. Rias fidgeted behind her desk, but with no chess piece for her hands to twiddle with, she started drumming her fingers on the desk softly. She clearly had something on her mind. Issei was going to ask if she wanted to share it with him, before she abruptly spoke up. Issei out with earlier this morning. Rias blurted out. She blushed and took a breath, before repeating herself. I saw you with a nun earlier this morning, Issei. She said a lot more clearly. Issei's eyes widened. Dedrag, he asked in his head. Didn't Dedrag tell him that no one was watching? Dedrag didn't answer and Rias continued. Well, not exactly me, but my familiar. She couldn't hear your conversation, but was able to see you from afar and reported it to me. Rias snapped and a bat poofed out of thin air, with a cloud of dust around it. It was a rather chubby-looking bat that looked relatively negligible. She patted its fur with her hand and the bat smiled toothily at the affection. I didn't believe it to be any threat, Issei. I sensed the bat, but I ignored it since it wasn't an enemy. Dedrag finally talked to Issei in his head. Issei took in this new information as he responded. Did you know it belonged to Rias? He couldn't believe for a second that Dedrag would just let a bat fly around them. Yes, her energy signature is written all over it. Why didn't you tell me? Issei inquired. Not mad, but just a bit hurt. Would it have bothered you enough to switch the topic of the conversation, knowing that you were under surveillance? Yes, Issei admitted. But I would still like to know, Dedrag. Let me make those decisions for myself next time. Noted. Rias, not knowing about Issei and Dedrag's mental conversation, warned him. Anyways, I would just like to let you know that anything that is wholly linked to it is harmful to us devils. Whether that be touching a blessed cross, being prayed about, or coming into contact with a holy sword. You should probably stay away from that girl, Issei. She's not a good company to have around. Issei, no longer worried about Dedrag's slip-up, stared directly at Rias. He turned around and plopped down on the couch horizontally and put his feet up off the soft arms of it. This was going to take some time. Rias, do you know why some nuns wear a black and white cloth over their head and some just wear white? He doubted she actually knew. A devil of any kind shouldn't really be enthusiastically knowledgeable about the opposing religion. He continued on, not allowing Rias to answer his mostly rhetoric question. A white veil indicates a nun who hasn't taken her vows of chastity to God yet. They aren't officially devoted to God as far as the church is concerned. The only difference that separates a nun with a white veil from a regular sister in the church's eyes is the fact that the ones with white veils are in training to become a nun. Those who haven't taken their vows can back out at any time. It is only when they pray to God, asking for His mercy to allow them to serve Him until they die, that they need to ask someone higher up in the hierarchy when they wish to leave. Their superior decides on how they wish to proceed. Every order or diocese has a different approach to allowing the nuns to leave the convent. Her name was Asia, Issei told Rias, continuing to use his pronunciation of her name. He continued, since she had a white veil, she knew that she could back out any time without having to ask someone else. I know that she can back out if she truly wished to, Rias. However, when I looked at her, I saw someone that was lost. It seemed that she couldn't comprehend a life away from the convent, but there are no convents in Kyoto. She speaks exclusively Italian, and she had to ask me where the nearest church was. She's in a town she has no clue about, where people speak a language she can't understand. I felt compelled to assist her, Rias, I still do. I know you're just looking out for me, but I just wanted to let you know that there is a name behind the face. A personality. Rias listened quietly to Issei talking, not interrupting him a single time. She finally spoke up after the silence clearly indicated that he was finished. Are you going to go help her then? Issei, at the end of the day, she could not control him and Issei could do whatever he pleased. Or at least, Rias couldn't bring herself to control him. I don't know. She's gone now, but if I ever see her again, I don't know what I'll say to her. I'm not going to force my help onto her if she doesn't wish for assistance. Right now, she seems trapped, but I don't know if I would save her if I were given the chance. Issei left it at that and got up off the couch, twisting his back and hearing the cracks of his spine. Let's not think about that right now, Rias. You look like you had something more important to tell me earlier. Ria's eyes lit up in recognition as she remembered what she was going to say to him before the topic of Asia had been brought up. Oh, that's right, Issei. One of the other ways that devils grow as a society is through devil contracts. Contracts with the devil. If any of the circulating media was even close to being accurate, those didn't really have the best connotation to them. At Issei's arched eyebrow, Rias continued, don't worry. Devils had long ago abolished the ways of soul contracts. Nowadays, it's just any equal compensation agreed upon by the contractor and the signee. This could be money, a favor, pretty much anything. I usually don't take contracts, but this man offered a ton of money for a pretty trivial favor of house sitting for an hour. He must be one of those aristocratic, wealthy humans with enough money to throw around. She opened her hand, and 2 pieces of paper appeared in her palm. Handing both of them to Issei, he took them graciously and filed through the papers. The one on the top is the contract, while the other pamphlet is to notify the contractor if something went awry or if they were unsatisfied. Since the contractor is me, they understand that I send my peerage to do the work sometimes, but still ask for me when one of my servants messes up. The top paper had writings on the top and the bottom, indicating the price and the reward. In the middle of it was a black seal inked onto the paper. On the bottom pamphlet, there weren't any writings, but it had the same printed seal, just crimson. Additionally, you can use that pamphlet to call me instead. It works for anyone. Since there is your first time fulfilling a contract, I won't be surprised if I ended up having to teleport to your location. You can do them at nighttime or whenever you wish. Just do it sometime in the next 5 hours or so, Rias explained to Issei. Issei checked his phone and saw that there were still 2 more hours until school finished. Deciding that talking to Matsuda and Mohama's mom could wait until after he fulfilled the contract, Issei asked Rias, how do I know where to go? There was no address listed on the contract paper, and checking the other pamphlet Rias gave him, there seemed to be no address there either. You just press your hand on it and it teleports you to their assigned location, Rias explained to him. Placing his hand on the contract seal, Issei found himself being teleported to a new place. Taking his hand off the paper, Issei looked around to find himself in a room of some sort. He heard a manly cry as he looked in front of him and saw an obese man with glasses having a sword pressed up against his neck from behind him. Issei's eyes widened as the man's neck was slit and then suddenly shoved in the direction of Issei. Issei quickly moved to the side to avoid coming into contact with the man's dead corpse, and the man fell down on the floor, bleeding all over the floor of the room. Issei turned his attention back to the person that threw him at Issei, but found himself staring at a sword. It was coming at Issei in a downward slash, ready to slice him into pieces on the spot. Issei barely was able to escape the path of the blade and had locks of brown hair cut off as a result. He hugged the wall of the room with his back and formed his sacred gear on his left arm. He swiftly ducked under a horizontal swipe and recklessly lunged forward to tackle the person wielding the sword. The person dodged Issei's lunge and Issei rolled on the ground before standing up once more. Now, with switched sides, Issei was able to evaluate his opponent. The man had long white hair that went to his shoulders. His irises were an interesting shade of red, but they were so dark it almost looked unremarkably black. Or that could be the lighting of the room. It was dimly lit by the dying wick of a candle on a nearby table. The man was wearing an open black trench coat with golden buttons and highlights over a white cleric uniform. The sword in his hand was just a normal hilt and blue energy emitting from the brown-colored hilt. It might have been wooden or metal. Issei didn't get a good look at it, but there was no crossguard on the sword. The man spun the sword a few cycles in his hand before deciding to speak up. Don't dwell on my sword too much, devil. It will be the last thing you see, but I don't want it to be the last thing you remember. I'm sure you have a lot more important things to worry about. Perhaps important people in your life. He spoke Italian, Issei noted. It wasn't a coincidence that Asia and this guy both spoke the same language. He wanted answers. Who are you? Issei's Italian was still shit, but it seemed that he was able to finally roll his R's now. He supposed he would have to thank Deidre later for apparently having his tongue exhibit muscle memory. The man stopped twirling his sword and looked ready to strike again. Didn't I just tell you, devil, my name doesn't matter. The man charged at Issei once more and Issei twisted but felt his side get grazed by the blade. Backing up to gain some distance, Issei grimaced at the pain but needed to ignore it at the moment. The man's sword barely made contact with Issei's shirt. The blade was extremely sharp. The man lowered his sword for a second, looking like he wanted to say something. I'll let you die slowly actually. You aren't a worthy opponent, so I decided not to grant you a swift death. The man came forward at Issei once more, slicing at him with the same downward slash that he first used when he caught Issei off guard. Issei brought his gauntlet to block it as a defense. The blue blade of the sword suddenly disappeared, and Issei's eyes widened. The hilt of the man's sword was still slashing down at Issei's, and he could see a blue blade forming from the tip of the hilt. Trying to back away from the incoming sword, Issei felt it slice his stomach vertically along where his belly button was. Thankfully, it wasn't deep enough to start spilling out his guts or his stomach acid. "DxD, can you do something about this?" Issei thought in his head. A flame went across his wound and died out quickly after. It seemed that DxD cauterized it, but it still hurt really badly. Holding his breath, Issei charged at the man with a plan in mind. The man dodged Issei once more and Issei skidded on the ground, not wanting to bump headfirst into the wall. "You're a brute, devil," the man said calmly at Issei. "I should kill you where you stand. In fact, I think I'll do just that." Damn, the man was simply just too fast. Thankfully, he didn't slash at Issei and chose to simply dodge instead. Issei hypothesized that the man's sword energy came from the hilt. If he could just get to the hilt, he could maybe twist it out of the man's hand or try to break it with the gauntlet. Boost him, that was convenient. On the other hand, it was much quicker than last time. It only took about a half minute this time, compared to the 2 whole minutes when Issei hid from rain air behind the tree. Issei felt his adrenaline spike, and waited for the man to come to him this time. The man predictably came rushing at Issei with his sword in hand. Issei was about half a foot taller than the man, which meant that he should have the reach to his advantage if not for the sword. The man did the exact same downward slash, and Issei brought his gauntlet up to block it just like last time. He gambled everything on his next move. As the man's blade came down, Issei threw a front kick diagonally upwards towards the man's head. The blade disappeared right before it came into contact with Issei's sacred gear, and Issei's leg managed not to get sliced. The kick landed onto the man's chin and made him stagger back. Issei took the opportunity to try to get a hit in with his gauntlet, but the man quickly recovered and formed his blue blade again and blocked Issei's hit with his sword. It was a really awkward quick decision made by the man, but it was too late for him to back out now. The blade struggled against the metal of Issei's fist, looking ready to shatter extremely soon. Boost! Issei felt his adrenaline spike once more as his strength increased. His fist shattered the blue energy of the sword as he gave the man a good left hook to the cheek, trying to hit him in the chin but missing his destination. The man collapsed and put his hand on the wall, trying to stabilize himself. The man moved his jaw around and massaged his cheek with his hand. He wiped it from the side of his mouth and spit out that was already in his mouth. A red stain was visible on the side of the clean white wall. "Tish," the man scoffed. "It seems that I need to take this fight more seriously. Fine, devil. I will grant you the quick death that you deserve for drawing." The man stood up, and yellow energy started forming from the hilt instead of the original blue. "This is holy energy, devil. You know what that means, right?" He gave a smirk in Issei's direction. His dark eyes glowed red, the color finally becoming visible. The light of the room furred black, but then turned back normal. Issei looked at the candle of the room in the corner of his eye. It was still burning defiantly. A familiar female voice came from the dark side of the room. A girl with a teal tunic came into Issei's sight as she stepped into the candle's light. The man held his sword firmly as he turned to his right. "Stay out of this, Asia." Issei watched as Asia continued to come towards the man with glowing green energy emitting from her hands. She put her hands close to the man's jaw. Issei heard a crack from the area where he had kicked the man's chin. The man groaned as green energy coated the lower part of his face. Asia talked as she worked her magic. "I don't want anyone to fight. Please, let's just ask God for forgiveness, Father." The man shoved Asia away, the girl falling down to the ground. The man glared at Asia with a fierce look. "Don't call me by that damn name, Asia. I'm no longer affiliated with the church in any way." Issei could see Asia's tears escape from under her white blindfold as she cried. But Father, I'm sure that God will forgive you if you just." The man lowered his sword, no longer paying any attention to Issei anymore. "I don't care about God, Asia. Do you know who that man right there in front of us is?" He pointed the yellow blade at Issei. "We were ordered to kill him, Asia." Asia looked in Issei's direction for a second, before telling the man, "No one has to die today, Father. God would not approve of this." The man's blade swiped to his side in anger. "Stop saying his name, Asia. How do you still manage to cling on to the idiotic belief that God still cares about you? Do you know what he did to me, to us?" Asia started intensely crying, face in her hands. Issei's heart clenched, seeing her in this condition. He finally spoke up, interrupting the man. "Can you stop yelling? Do you not see that you're making her cry? Dumbass." The man looked at Issei for the first time in a minute that he had been talking to Asia and started laughing uncontrollably. "You think you know Asia? Devil, you think you understand the pain she went through? You know nothing." The man snarled at Issei. "Asia, look at the man you want to save. See for yourself how cruel this world really is." The man brought his sword down onto Asia and Issei's eyes widened as he extended his hand forward. "Stop." He wasn't going to make it. The blade of the sword came upon Asia's face, but it didn't cut her body, only the white blindfold. Underneath the cloth was Asia's violently closed eyes. Issei could see her cheeks rising to accommodate for her eyes pushing down so tightly. The man gripped Asia's arm in his hand and said to her, "Asia, come on. We wouldn't want to be rude to the devil over there. You're giving us a bad look." His tone was condescendingly patronizing. "Open your eyes," he whispered loudly. No. Asia shook her head from side to side harshly. "I won't do as you say." The man cackled and pulled her in front of him so Issei could see her. He held his sword against her throat and said to Issei, "You see, devil. Asia is a very special human that was born with not one sacred gear, but two. Twilight healing and eyes of twilight. The first one is pretty self-explanatory, but it's only when you consider the second one where things really start to get interesting. She's what's known as an oracle. She was gifted with the ability to sense emotions and magic from all around her. With her eyes, her senses become ambient and she is able to see them. Issei had enough of the man talking. Issei went to try to punch the man again, his shock keeping him at bay no longer. The man took his free hand and touched Asia's skin. It's only so fascinating talking about her powers. Why don't you show him, Asia? As Issei was less than a feet away from Asia, the man forcefully opened up one of her eyes and all Issei saw was silver. Boom! An explosion of energy erupted from Asia as Issei was thrown back with such a force that he broke through the wooden door of the house. Groaning, Issei opened his eyes to see the daylight above him. He got up off the wooden shrapnel, back feeling like it was fractured in multiple areas. He slugged back in the house to see the man on the floor as well. Asia now had both eyes open, spewing out random words as her eyes were wide full of shock along with her mouth. She started looking around the room and saw both Issei and the man. She looked back and forwards between them and started backing into the corner of the house that was farthest from the both of them. The man groaned and got up off the floor. Shit, I forgot how it felt to be blasted with your energy, Asia. He snapped his fingers and a white engraved seal opened up next to him. I'll see you another time, devil. I'll make sure to put you to sleep the next time we meet, permanently. His eyes widened and his smirk made him look insane. The man limped towards Asia, with one hand on his and prepared to exit along with her, probably through the seal which was surely a portal of some sort. Oh, no you don't. Issei thought. Issei felt his adrenaline spike one last time and rushed forward to the man and kicked him in the direction of the portal. The last image Issei saw of the man was a look of shock on his face before his body went through the circle and it closed behind him. A shining white light emitted from the teleportation going off successfully, and Issei felt his vision lose focus once more. Once the light had died down, there was no more use for the candle, which had burnt out at this point. The sunlight shone through the broken wooden door that Issei had been forcefully expelled through. It only shone so much though, and the angle of which the sunlight came through didn't reach the corner where Asia was hurtled against. Issei went into the shadow of the corner and saw Asia covering her face with her hands. Issei had no idea how to help her. Asia, it's me, Issei. The man with the sword is gone now. Can you come out and explain to me what's going on? No response. Sighing, Issei came closer to her and to his surprise she reached out with her hand and caught his wrist. Issei's visions were once more filled with the events of the past week, but this time including fighting the man from earlier. Once they had finished, they started repeating over and over again. Fumbling around with his hands, Issei tried to feel for Asia. Once he was able to find her forearm, he pulled it forward and felt her collide against his. He wrenched his wrist out of her hand and embraced her, avoiding touching her skin at all costs. Issei's burned and he brought himself off of Asia, holding her in an arm's distance away with his palms gripping either side of her shoulders. Issei looked down at his and saw that a cross-shaped hole was burned through his clothes and there was a cross-shaped burn mark on his. Issei couldn't feel it, so it must have been a third-degree burn. Damn, looking back at Asia, Issei stared into her eyes, seeing it for the first time. They were a beautiful shade of silver with a black swirl encompassed by a surrounding gloss touch in her irises. It reminded Issei of the moon. They were quite beautiful. Asia's voice didn't have the usual liveliness to it as she stared into Issei's eyes and just said, "Black." Issei was confused. What was black on him besides the QO uniform? There were no features on him that were colored black. Even his eyes were brown. Asia, are you okay? Issei wondered for her sanity. Was she going to turn out fine? Was this state of being she was in a repercussion of her powers? Asia was silent as she brought her hands up and started healing Issei's. A green aura covered both the wound from the man's sword and the burn mark from Asia's cross. Issei didn't feel anything, but watched as his scorched skin turned back to the normal shade of tan and his wound sealed up as well. Thank you, Issei said, not sure of what else to say to Asia. She looked at him once more and said black, like it explained everything. She moved her hands up to Issei's face and Issei instinctively caught her hand, not knowing what she was going to do. He was hit with instant regret as he started seeing visions again. Except this time it wasn't his memories. Issei saw a blurry vision of a baby wrapped in a blanket being baptized, someone with feminine arms wrapping a white blindfold around a girl's head, a wounded boy collapsing on top of white steps, and an image of black feathered wings. Issei's vision came back to normal and he immediately thought of a solution. He let go of Asia's hand, and Asia didn't seem to rise them up to Issei's face when he let go. Looking at his clothes, Issei checked to see if he could make a makeshift blindfold for Asia. His black jacket was too rough, his white dress shirt was too rough as well. Issei grabbed his red undershirt, which was already sliced in half by the man's sword, and tore off a piece of it with his gauntlet. His shirt was already torn anyways. Imagining his left hand as normal skin, the gauntlet proceeded to shine green before disappearing. Not wasting any time taking in his recent accomplishment, Issei took the torn piece of cloth in both hands and pulled on it firmly. Approaching Asia with the tightened makeshift blindfold, he saw her curious silver eyes as she inquired black. She didn't seem to stop Issei though, and he took that as a sign to continue. He covered her eyes with it and wrapped it around her head, tying both sides tightly into a knot. Issei let go of the red blindfold and backed away from Asia. No explosion of energy this time it seemed, Issei noted. He sat on his legs and kneeled down next to Asia, waiting to see her reaction. She started moving again, waving her hands about. Issei wasn't sure if he should touch them or not, so he just spoke up instead. Asia, it's me, Issei. Asia stood up, which prompted Issei to get up off the ground as well. He watched Asia patiently as she no longer moved her hands and was just standing still in silence. Issei, Asia finally asked in her regular voice, but sounding a little scared. Was she not able to sense him? Yes, Asia, I'm right here. Issei patted the pockets of his pants and his sweater, looking for the pamphlet Rias gave him to ask her for help. The only time he wanted Rias to be stalking him, and he had no way of contacting her. Issei sighed. Apologies, I'm just getting used to your signature. My senses just went haywire from opening my eyes. Issei felt sympathetic for her. It must be really draining to sort through mixed senses. He couldn't even imagine what she was going through right now. Asia smiled at him. You're worried about me, aren't you? Don't worry, Issei, I'm fine. He didn't need to be an empath to know that she was currently lying. Sorry about kicking your contact through his portal. It was impulsive. I don't know if it will bite you in the back soon. Issei only now thought about the fact that he might have made things worse for Asia by helping her. He supposed it wouldn't be called helping if that were the case. It's okay, Issei. As long as I have God watching over me, I will be safe. Issei raised his eyebrow at her. Surely she didn't feel that way when she was cowering in the corner. Who was that guy anyways? Was he anyone important? He seemed pretty strong. I don't know if I would have survived if he unleashed his full power. Thinking back to the man's glowing red eyes and his holy sword, Issei needed a way to counter his most obvious weakness as a devil. His name is Fried Selzen. He used to be an exorcist for the Vatican. I call him Father because I consider him a priest. He is no longer loyal to the church, but he strongly believes in what he considers right. That's why he's similar to a preacher for me. Vatican, that would make sense. Vatican City was in Italy, which would explain why both Asia and Selzen spoke Italian. Vatican City. There is an exclusive church that tourists and civilians don't have access to. It's a restricted area underground, so it's a secret that people don't know about. Issei was intrigued. What did you guys do there? I don't know too much about it. I was sheltered from most of the Vatican. Only the higher-ups knew about me. I was taught to utilize my twilight healing to heal all the repentant sinners. Sinners in Christianity didn't equate to a small number of people, so every then. It wasn't a question. Only the ones they considered repentant. If they truly wished to become holy, then they would constitute to be healed by me. A bunch of words, and all Issei got from the statement was that devils weren't allowed to be healed. What role did Selzen have in your line of work? Issei didn't know what to call her healing the people selectively chosen by the higher-ups of the Vatican. Asia smiled sadly. I didn't actually know him in the Vatican. I met him after I had been. Asia stopped her sentence, before gaining a determined look on her face. After I had been exiled from the church. That must have taken her a lot of courage to get out. It seemed she was struggling to come to terms with it herself. Issei chose not to ask her on why Asia had gotten kicked out. I can feel your pity, Issei, Asia said bluntly. She had a frown on her face, and Issei could see her eyebrows narrow and her eye muscles clenching. That wasn't pity, Asia. It was sympathy. Issei didn't look down at Asia for something she couldn't control. What happened had already happened, and there wasn't anything Issei could do about it. He sympathized with her, because the girl in front of him appeared holier than anyone Issei could imagine the higher-ups being. Yet they still chose to forsake her in the name of God, not the other way around. Asia's features softened. Oh, sorry, I'm still getting accustomed to your emotions. You have a lot of them going around you. You must think a lot about things other people say. Issei smiled. Something like that. Asia smiled back at him. I'm not sure what I am going to do now, Issei. I don't want to go back to Fried. You don't have to if you don't want to, Issei told her. There was no way that he was going to let Fried have his hands on Asia, especially if she didn't want him to. Thank you, Issei. You don't know how refreshing it is to be able to sense honesty in another person. I think I'm going to go back to the church to pray. Issei raised his eyebrow. If he remembered correctly, then Asia mentioned that she had been teleported away and got lost. He only shared knowledge of one person that both Asia and Issei knew that could teleport. Isn't that the same place Fried came from? Issei highly doubted that Asia was suicidal. She was an empath, so surely she knew who exactly she hung around with. It's not the people that matter, Issei. They took care of me when no one else would. They gave me a place to pray, and that's more than I could ever ask for. They deserve forgiveness, but it isn't me who judges that. I pray to God every day for them, Issei. You understand, don't you? Issei did, but he was extremely skeptical. If Fried was any indication of how the rest of them conducted themselves, then he didn't think that Asia was safe around them. If you insist, I'll walk with you to the church, Asia. Asia's smile brightened. Really, oh my God, thank you, Issei. She outstretched her hand, and Issei looked at it cautiously. Grudgingly, he took her hand in his. Not seeing visions for the first time, Issei could finally feel how silky her hands were. Asia started walking in the direction of the door. I would like for you to stay honest with me, Issei. When we are touching like this, she swung their entangled hands. Your emotions feel stronger. Hands resting at their sides again, Asia stopped in front of the door. Her hands glowed white, and the broken wood of the door came flying back to the door and reattached to it in the same position it was in before. She then opened the door by the doorknob, like nothing happened. Issei was extremely fascinated. Would that wooden door be of the same durability as the old one? What happens if there are small shrapnel that are extremely small like splints? Does magic just find where they all are? I suppose you imagine the result, and magic chooses to obey. Asia turned her head towards Issei, obviously not expecting her magic to be questioned. I'm not entirely sure. I have used this spell on broken glass, so I suppose that even the smallest of fragments will be swept up by magic. As for your other questions, they are in fact the same durability. I don't actually imagine the result, I just do mortar magic to fix it and it bends to my will. Issei was curious. How exactly would magic be able to bring something back to its original state? Perhaps everything had magic in it and the spell took all the fragments and combined them back together, or perhaps magic existed as a timeless source of energy. Being able to revert something back to the past without the need of knowing how the original looked like was an extremely powerful ability. Would you be able to teach me that spell, Asia? He looked at her, eager to learn. She looked back at him apologetically. Sorry, I'm not really a good teacher. I learned all I know from someone really special to me. She had to leave me eventually though, and all her teachings left with her as well. Asia's sadness remembering her old teacher outweighed Issei's curiosity. Issei bent down to check the obese man's pulse. Feeling his neck, as Issei suspected, he was dead. All that Issei got was a red-covered index and middle finger coated in the man's dry. Are you able to heal this guy? Issei wiped his hand on the wall. This was a murder scene. He wondered what the police would think. Unfortunately not, Issei. I cannot heal the dead as I cannot bring them back to life. I am able to make all the go away though, Asia offered. Issei looked at the on the walls and on the floor, not entirely the obese man's but Fried's as well. He looked on the side of the walls to see if he could find any pictures of the man and his wife and perhaps some children. Seeing only pictures of the man and dozens of gold trophies scattered across the wall, Issei made a decision. A missing persons report would be issued in a day or two. That would give Issei enough time to ask Rias on what to do. He wasn't exactly sure if he should mess with something that wasn't his business. He walked outside the door and Asia was pulled along with him. Asia chastised him. Issei continued at a slow pace so Asia could catch up. I don't know what to do with his body, Asia. I feel sorry that he died, but I don't know what else to do besides leave. He's a complete stranger to us, even though he died because Fried wanted to make me walk into a trap. We could have given him a proper burial or notified his family or something, Asia said, spinning in front of Issei and tugging him along as he stared down at her. I already checked for any sign of family of some kind. I couldn't find anything. I could check his wallet to see his identity and call the police to report the crime. However, I would have to be turned in as a witness and I would have to lie to them saying that I don't know how he died. Or I would have to give them a different lie by giving them an autopsy that wouldn't require the interference of magic. Asia put her other hand on top of Issei's, making Issei softly gasp at her soft warm skin. But still, Issei, we should do something. Issei knew she could sense his emotions. He wasn't ignoring the man's death in the sense that he didn't even consider him an actual person, but he was ignoring him in the fact that he delegated the job to his superior. If we're going to do anything, it would be by searching through the ends of the earth trying to find his killer and giving the man justice. We aren't going to do anything about his body. That responsibility goes to an annoying crimson-haired woman that I know. Asia spun around back to Issei's side and clutched to his arm snugly. Maybe you won't do anything, Issei, but I'll be sure to pray to God for him. Hopefully he safely goes to heaven and isn't stuck in hell or purgatory waiting to be judged. Issei's eyes widened, but he didn't stop walking. You believe in purgatory, Asia? The idea of purgatory was strongly rejected by the Orthodox Church. He shouldn't be surprised because Asia was from Vatican City, but then again he didn't know if she followed the same requirement of being Roman Catholic as a citizen. Asia stared up at Issei from his side. Of course, I believe that everyone deserves a chance for redemption, Issei, as long as they pray to God. It doesn't matter if they weren't religious during their lifetime, they have eternity in purgatory to think about their decision. There was a semi-flawed thought process. So who decides if people go to hell? He expected to hear God or be given silence as a response, but Asia surprised him once more. The people themselves do, Issei. If they choose to live life in sin, then God of course won't force them to comply, but they will suffer in hell. Issei grew much more respect for Asia in this moment. How many devils have you met? Asia stopped in her tracks, causing Issei to stop as well. She didn't extract herself from Issei's arm though, and seemed to be in deep thought. You're the first devil I've come to know, Issei. That would make sense. It aligned with her story of being sheltered in Vatican City. He supposed he couldn't blame her for what she believed in. How could he? So do you believe I should go to hell, Asia? He wondered about her opinion on this. He was actually jealous of her empathic powers currently. He wanted to know what Asia was thinking right now. She continued walking, and Issei walked with her. No, I didn't say devils should go to hell, Issei. Issei's eyes widened and immediately stopped walking. Asia's face tilted up at him, curiously. You don't have to be an angel to be holy, Issei. Many people are sinners, however people that choose to live their life in sin are considered different. If you are a devil, that doesn't automatically make you a sinner. You can be an angel with the brightest of white wings and still be considered a sinner. Issei looked admirably at Asia. She didn't even know the effect of her words on Issei. The extent her words reached was immense. Seeing Issei's shocked face, she asked, Did I say something wrong? I can't get a good read on your shock. Issei continued to walk, shaking his head. She could no doubt get a read on his bleeding admiration at this point, but he decided to voice it. No, you didn't say anything wrong, Asia. In fact, you just said something extremely right. If Asia noticed Issei's admiration for her, she didn't say anything. Alrighty, okay then. Issei, I have a question. Issei looked to see how far they were from the church on the hill. It looked like they were about 10 minutes away. You don't need to ask me for permission, Asia. Ask away. Courtesy was really something Issei disliked. When my eyes were open, did I hurt you so she didn't remember what exactly happened? That was something to jot down. Thinking back to the cross-shaped burn he had on his from Asia, Issei said yes. Asia looked crestfallen and said, oh, quietly, sorry about that. I can heal you if you want. She offered. It seemed like she didn't remember that she healed him either. You already did, Issei said simply, getting an O as a response from Asia. That was good. She didn't over-apologize or dwell on the situation. Why did I have visions of me fighting when I touched your skin? Asia, the thought had been bugging him for a while now. Freed had called Asia an oracle, but was she able to give prophecies or somehow things that are fated to come true by God that might include memories? Issei supposed. Well, that's because it's the strongest emotion I can feel. I had my senses trained, enhanced, and honed so that they were able to lock on that particular emotion. As a healer, I need to be able to identify the emotion all the time. The reason why you see those visions is because I am bringing them back to the front of your thoughts when I come in contact with you. I assume this emotion is pain. Then Issei thought of his memories, and it was the only emotion that was consistent throughout the entirety of them. Yes, Asia admitted. That was a really neat ability, Issei mused. Its combat utilization seemed limitless. How come I'm no longer seeing my memories of pain right now then, Issei asked, referencing the fact that they were currently holding hands. I turned it off, Asia said shyly. It's a two-way street if I can't control myself. I usually have better control over it, but it's constantly been turned on since I left the Vatican. Can you see weaknesses or just pain in general? If pain is centered around a particular limb like a broken leg, would you be able to spot it? Asia looked up at Issei, but didn't seem to judge him on the fact that he was practically asking if she was an X-ray. I can sense the aura of pain around people, but not the specific areas it is centered in. I am not able to sense a person's memories, but I am able to tell if the pain they feel is physical or mental. I have long learned ago how to differentiate between the two. Issei assumed he was only able to see glimpses of her past simply for the fact that she was in a state of distraught. It wouldn't make sense for her to constantly output memories to people on contact. You said that you could tell when I'm being honest. How does that work? Issei was curious if she could tell the truth from lies. I was only able to sense your honesty because it emitted off of you strongly. It's practically an emotion for you. A good liar can easily pass my senses if they convince themselves of the lie. You must value honesty a lot. Issei smiled sadly, thinking about a tall, lengthy man with glasses. Yeah, honesty is one of the most admirable attributes a person can have, in my opinion. Asia clutched Issei's arm tighter. I am inclined to agree with you, Issei. Issei had a question on his mind. Asia, what does black mean? He felt Asia's grip tighten once more as she was silent for a few seconds. I'm not entirely sure. So she knew what he was talking about. She must have had a strong idea of what it meant but didn't seem to be confident enough in her assessment. Or perhaps not confident enough in that side of her in general. Issei let the topic rest as he approached the front of the church. He heard a meow from the side and saw a white cat eating her own fur. Issei looked back at the church. It was a black cathedral that had an extremely eerie atmosphere to it. Are you sure this is the right place, Asia? Asia let go of Issei's hand, and Issei's hand felt hollow and empty at the lack of her presence. Yes, I'm going to go pray inside now, Issei. He knew that it was pretty much guaranteed that this was the place, since there wasn't any other church in Kuo, but still. I'll go with you, Issei decided. Asia smiled at Issei. You mean you'll pray with me too, Issei? Issei smiled back at her. I didn't say that. The blonde girl was optimistic if nothing else. Asia seemed a bit sad. It couldn't hurt to try, though. She seemed ready to skip her way inside, but controlled herself and walked calmly with Issei through the open doors. There seemed to be no one inside, so Issei just watched as Asia walked her way in front of the altar and kneeled down. Issei, I can sense something dark in the church. Issei summoned his sacred gear and looked around. I can't see anything, Didrag. Issei thought back. Underneath then, Issei mused. He wasn't about to punch through the ground of the church though, and Issei just waited anxiously for Asia to finish praying. He tapped his knees and they were constantly shaking in trepidation as he just felt like he was waiting for something, or perhaps something was waiting for him. He felt the need to move his foot and raise it up off the floor of the pews as the ground was punctured and a hand reached out to grab his foot. Issei's eyes widened as the ground under his other foot was broken as well, and he didn't have time to react. He could feel himself get pulled down and his back skid against the floor of the upper level. Surprisingly, the church didn't start collapsing after Issei was dragged across it. It must have had a good infrastructure when it was built that much long ago. It hadn't been in use for over a decade. Issei's leg was still stuck in the person's hand. Whoever it was had a really strong grip. Once Issei could finally see the lower level, he saw the person that grabbed him was a built man with a fedora obscuring Issei's view of his face. He was wearing a pale gray trench coat and Issei could feel the black leather of his gloves on his leg. Reeling in his other leg, Issei kicked the man's face harshly, causing him to let go of Issei. Issei had successfully kicked the man's fedora off, but it didn't accomplish much. He could now see that the man had dark skin with black hair and blue eyes though. His split decision turned to be counterproductive as Issei could feel the rules of gravity apply to him. Both of them fell, but it was only now that Issei saw the man's black feathered wings. Huh, that was convenient. Shit. Issei fell down alone, plummeting to the ground. Fly, 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 fly. Issei chanted in his head. He heard the tear of cloth from his back and was suddenly hit with a new nervous system. Trying to gain control of himself, Issei tried to find the feeling of beating his wings and heard the sound of it as well. Looking down, Issei saw that he was only 1 foot off the ground. Sighing, Issei stopped beating his wings and dropped down to the ground. That was too close. Issei stretched his newfound limbs and flexed them, trying to get used to them. Issei Hayaudu. He heard a feminine voice come from in front of him. Looking in their direction, Issei saw the same man who grabbed him had retrieved his fedora and put it back on his head. On the left of him were 2 more matching black feathered folk. In the middle was a woman with long dark blue navy hair wearing a maroon v-neck long-sleeve formal coat and a burgundy miniskirt. On the left of the blue-haired woman was a small girl with twin-tailed blonde hair girl with blue eyes. She was wearing a black gothic Lolita outfit. DxD, I'm regretting not asking for a history lesson right now. What are these people called again? Fallen angels, DxD responded, before the blue-haired woman started talking. Issei Hayaudu, I was wondering if we needed to lure you in here, but you seem to come out of your own fruition. It doesn't matter though. Her voice was the same feminine voice he remembered hearing at first, and she spoke fluent Italian. She must be the leader of the group. He looked to her sides and saw the man silently having gloved hands tucked in the pockets of his trench coat. On her left, the blonde girl was twirling her curls in her fingers. Yeah, definitely the leader. What is it to you? Issei asked. The woman seemed to lose all cordiality and started raising her voice at Issei. Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about, Issei. You killed my best friend. Oh, so this woman was Rainer's friend. Did it even register to you that maybe she had people who cared about her as you beat her to a pulp? Issei cringed. No, it didn't, but after the fact it definitely hit with an unprecedented candid. She was only doing her job. And Yahoo took her away from me, the woman screamed. It seemed that Rainer truly did have people that loved her. Issei couldn't help to feel sorry for the woman for being put through this treatment, but not sorry enough. Doesn't that remind you of the exact same thing she did to my best friend? I'll never see him again because of her. I didn't kill her because she was following orders, lady. I killed her because she chose to follow those orders. Issei wasn't exactly helping his case, but the woman was being extremely hypocritical at the moment. The woman tilted her head back and started cackling madly, reminding Issei of a certain someone. And what if I tell you that Rainer didn't in fact kill your friend? She shoved her hand to the side and the man went into the shadows and came out with 2 people in his hands. In his right hand, the man was tugging an unveiled Asia by her collar, and in his left was a handcuffed Mohama with a gag in his mouth. He was shirtless with red whip markings scattered across his entire body. His skin was bruised all over and was turned purple in countless areas. Issei's eyes widened. The man dropped both of the people at the woman's feet. The woman turned her attention to Asia and screamed at her instead. Heal him, she demanded. Asia put her hands up and green energy emitted from her hands to start healing Mohama. His skin turned back to a normal healthy color. The woman opened up her hand and a black whip of energy was conjured in her hand. She harshly backhanded the kneeling Mohama, causing his gag to fall out his mouth while he fell to the ground with his hands cuffed behind his back. She brought the heel of her boot down on his back and whipped him with her black whip. Heal him, she roared at Asia again. Asia hurriedly healed Mohama once more before the woman whipped him again. She continued to whip him as Asia tried her best to heal the wounds the moment they were inflicted onto Mohama. It was a disgusting sight. Asia was crying as Mohama just took the punishment in silence, not even granting the woman the pleasure of hearing his voice. His glasses were broken on both sides, his mouth was bleeding, and his lips were busted from where they used to be choking on the gag. Issei saw Mohama's puffy red eyes look directly at him. Issei's body was furiously shaking in pure rage. Boost Issei charged in the direction of the woman only to get intercepted by the man and the girl. They both summoned spears of light, with the man having a blue color and the girl having a red one. Issei's devil wings flapped behind his back in frustration. He could still hear the woman yelling at Asia in the background and he closed his eyes, trying his best to cut her voice out. Deal with him, don't seek. Midult, I'm going to stay over here whipping the life out of the boy's friend. The woman said it with a sinister grin on her face. Issei could make out Asia's tears crying in the background. Yes, Calawarner, ma'am. Both of them responded robotically. Issei growled as his sacred gear was held still by both spears of light pushing against him. I don't have the time for this. He tried to push through the Donosik and Mitlet's weapons. They seemed like amateurs, but they served their purpose of stalling Issei long enough. Boost Issei felt his power spike, but the increase in strength wasn't enough to output the fallen angels in raw power. Enough of this. Issei backed up and flew into the air, having the fallen angels tumble in his direction at the sudden drop of resistance. Issei pointed his gauntlet at them and opened his palm, pouring out all his rage at them. An emerald beam of energy bursted from the center of his sacred gear in their direction. They juked and started hiding behind the cover of the pews. Issei roared a dragon's roar. He went to fly down at them, knowing that if he went for the woman the 2 pests would just try to stop him. He started firing beams of energy at their location and saw them scurry away from one pew to the other. Issei heard a noise from behind him and stopped his venting. He looked behind him to see a crimson engraved seal appear in the ground before it started traveling up in the air, revealing the black silhouette of 4 people. Rias Kiba was everyone from the occult research club but Gasper. Kiba waved his hand at Issei. Yo, Hisashiburata na nega, Issei. We'll handle these 2. Go tend to your friend. The white-haired girl swiftly moved from her spot and picked up one of the church pews. Donasek was hiding behind it and Kaneko smacked him in the air before hurling the wooden object at him. He crashed into the upper part of the church, and Kaneko jumped through the hole she created. Kiba summoned a sword in his hand and charged at Midlet. Issei watched them engage in combat as he turned his attention back to the woman. Flying down to grab her by the throat, she noticed him coming in her direction and swiftly dodged to the side. Issei skidded near the underground altar as he thrust his gauntlet in the direction of the woman. Metal met metal, however, as she brought up a golden double-sided cone-shaped spear to meet his sacred gear. She cackled at him. Oh, is little Issei mad? She swiped at Issei with her spear, pushing him back. This is only a fraction of what I felt. You have no idea what pain is, Issei. Issei panted, a bit spent from firing energy blasts at the other fallen angels. I don't care what you're going through, woman. I don't even know your name, but it doesn't matter. For some reason you hold on to the belief that only you have experienced pain before. I'm sorry to tell you, lady, but you are wrong. Issei punched the woman with a left hook. However, metal met metal once more, regardless of how fast and powerful Issei threw his fist. She laughed at his perseverance. You're right, Issei. It's not just me who feels pain. You don't know me, I don't know you. But it doesn't matter. Since Rainier is dead, no one else matters. Nothing matters. My name is Calawarner, Devil. Say your prayers, because you're soon to be dead just like your friend. She let go, causing Issei to fall forward. She brought the tip of her spear directly down on Issei's head. Issei reflexively brought his gauntlet up to defend from her attack and kicked her away. Her spear dropped in Issei's lap as her back hit the altar roughly. Ugh! She let out a groan. The emerald gem of Issei's gauntlet got shattered, and the entirety of his sacred gear fractured into a million crimson pieces of broken metal. Issei's eyes widened. She was able to shatter D-Drag. Issei was broken out of his thoughts as his left arm glowed emerald. The flesh and bones of his arm started tearing away from his fingertips all the way up to his forearm, but it didn't hurt. A tougher-looking skeleton and muscle of some sort connected to the stub of his left arm and started growing forward, forming a hand. Crimson scales then started filling up his arm, covering the muscle. D-Drag's scales, Issei realized. His arm glowed crimson, and once it died out, Issei looked over his new arm. It was much thinner than his gauntlet and looked like an actual arm attached to his body, not a glaive of some sort. D-Drag, Issei questioned in his mind. Perhaps this was some sort of evolution from his gauntlet. This is the first time I've ever seen this before, Issei. I know as much as you do, D-Drag said unhelpfully. Issei paid his arm no mind and turned back to Calawarner. I'm sorry it had to be this way, Calawarner. But your pain doesn't excuse you for what you did. We all feel pain in life, and I'm going to have to deal with the guilt of killing both you and Rainier. However, that doesn't mean that I value my life over yours. You chose to get in my path because you wanted to share your pain with me by torturing my friend. I cannot forgive that. Issei pointed his new left hand at Calawarner and his palm glue emerald. Farewell, Calawarner. I hope you find consolation if there is an afterlife, but I cannot grant you the solace you so desperately need. A beam of emerald energy blasted at Calawarner and it went through the wall of the church behind her. A dark hole was left of where Calawarner used to be. Issei focused on his left arm, but instead of glowing back to normal, the scales contracted into his skin, revealing human-looking flesh. Issei didn't know how deep his blast dug, but ignored it as he rushed towards Mohama and Asia. Mohama was laying on the ground while Asia tried valiantly to heal him. Mohama was uncuffed, with marks where the cuffs held in place. He was talking to Asia. Don't heal me anymore, Wanasan. I don't wish for you or anyone else to save me. He coughed up all over his shirtless. Mohama was speaking in an entirely different language than Asia understood, and Asia continued to try to heal him. Issei brought his hands behind Asia's back and pulled her away from Mohama by the stomach. Asia screamed at him, waving her hands in the direction of Mohama. She struggled in his grip as Mohama smiled sadly at Issei. Arigato, Issei. Mohama managed to get out, coughing every other second. Come over here. I want to hug you one last time. Issei let Asia go and she hurriedly tried again to start healing him. Issei leaned close to Mohama and listened to what he had to say. Mohama brought his Y hand up to Issei's cheek and cupped his cheek. He brought Issei forward and at his forehead. I'm a broken man, Issei. I don't have much time left, and regardless, I don't wish to live anymore. I wouldn't even be considered living. There is no way that I ever revert back to the Mohama that made you smile. Mohama chuckled, his lungs giving out on him. Oh, it hurts to laugh. I'm just a weight that hasn't been jettisoned off the boat yet. I will just pull you down at this point, Issei. You're strong, I can tell. Stronger than me, stronger than Matsuda. Stronger than anyone I know. Stay strong for me, Issei. Sail that ship, Issei. Lie for yourself. Mohama's eyelids closed and he died in Issei's arms. Asia was still crying on the sidelines with healing energy covering the both of them. Issei felt his physical fatigue go away, but he knew Mohama wasn't coming back to life. And he didn't want Mohama to. It seemed that he died a satisfied death. As selfish as he may be, Issei didn't wish for Mohama to come back to life just so Issei can hold on to him one last time. Asia stopped healing Issei when she realized that it wasn't doing any good. "Why did you stop me, Issei?" she cried. Issei smiled sadly at Asia, the red blindfold that he gave her drenched wet in her tears. "Some people just don't wish to be saved, Asia. You can't force them to be healed. Mohama died bravely and chose not to live anymore. There are some people you simply have to let go, Asia." Issei's mouth grimaced. He truly believed what he was saying, but it hurt in this moment. He felt his cheeks wet as he knew tears were currently streaming down his face, but he didn't cry out loud. He would stay strong for Mohama's sake. Issei could feel eyes looking down at his back, and he knew it was someone from Rias' peerage. They didn't say anything and just silently watched as Issei and Asia cried over the man they couldn't save. Issei got up and hoisted Mohama over his shoulder. "I'm going to walk back home alone, Rias." Rias nodded at him as the rest of her peerage moved to the side to accommodate Issei with enough space. Asia tugged his free arm, and Issei looked down at her. "Don't leave me, Issei. I'm coming along wherever you go." Issei smiled down at her. She obviously didn't understand him when he told Rias that he wanted to go alone. "I guess I can't deny you that, right, Asia?" He expanded his devil wings and flew up through the hole Karniko created, Asia holding onto Issei and Issei holding onto Mohama. Once they reached the upper level, Issei retracted his wings and he and Asia calmly walked in silence. Asia didn't know where they were heading, but they were going to Mohama's house. It took a whole hour of silence until Issei finally saw the yellow exterior of Mohama's home. Issei looked down at Asia and Asia let go of his hand. He rang the doorbell and waited patiently for someone to open it. Coming, he heard a woman's voice from the inside of the house. Her footsteps started approaching, and Issei's anxiety flared intensely. He didn't know what to say to Mohama's mother. The door opened and he heard a gasp. Luckily, Asia had healed Mohama's dead body enough that there were no more spots and the bags under his eyes disappeared. He looked like he was sleeping happily, albeit shirtless. However, one glance at him and Mohama's mom knew that he wasn't in this world anymore. "Oh my God, Issei, is that?" She pointed at Mohama and Issei nodded. She started crying out tears and put her face in her hands. How did he die, she wished to know, so Issei would tell her. "He died because of me," Issei answered truthfully. Mohama's mom bawled harder. "Did he die happy?" Issei couldn't bring himself to even give a false smile. "He died the bravest death possible, ma'am. He was the strongest man I ever knew." Mohama's mom opened the door, letting Issei inside. Issei and Asia both stepped inside, and Issei placed Mohama's body down on the living room couch. Mohama's mom was no longer facing Issei as he and Asia were alone in the living room, while she was in the kitchen. Issei heard the tap of the sink running from the kitchen. The faucet suddenly turned off and Mohama's mom finally spoke up. "I wish to be left alone, Issei-san. This isn't goodbye. You'll see me at the funeral soon. Say some kind words for him, would you, Issei?" "Of course, ma'am. I'm sorry." He turned around and headed out the house. "My despace, signorina," he heard Asia say to Mohama's mom behind him as she came from his back and closed the door behind her. The door said, and Issei collapsed on the steps of Mohama's house. Asia brought her body close to Issei, and Issei outstretched his arm around her to pull her in. "I'm sorry, Issei. Don't apologize, Asia. It wasn't your fault. I don't blame Mohama's death on any individual person, even myself." Mohama wouldn't want Issei to blame anyone. Rias must feel extremely guilty. Issei would make sure to talk to her later on tomorrow. "Why did you tell Mohama's mom that he died because of you?" Asia noted what Issei told Mohama's mother. "Didn't he just say that he didn't blame anyone?" "Because it was the truth. I contributed to his death." She needed to know that. Asia felt Issei's honesty but could feel that he was blaming himself at the moment. He could say whatever he wished, but she knew that it would take time to get over Mohama's death. "Will you attend the funeral?" The funeral service was something that Issei wasn't looking forward to. "I don't know. I have to go, Asia. But I don't know if I'll be able to say anything without crying." He knew that he had a responsibility to attend the funeral, a duty as Mohama's best friend. He would see Mohama's mom there as well as Matsuda. His mom would probably be attending it as well. He would have to buy or rent a suit. "I'll go with you, Issei," Asia told him. It wasn't an offer or a suggestion. She planted her feet firmly on the ground, and Issei knew he couldn't tell her off otherwise. "I guess that makes it seem a little better." Asia being by his side made him feel happier. She alleviated many of his worries. They didn't disappear, but they certainly lessened to a greater degree. "It's what I'm here for, Issei." Issei knew she was talking about more than just her duty as a nun. She wasn't even an official one, but she still chose to follow the life of one. "Your compassion is entrancing. I really liked it about you, Asia." He knew she didn't want to go because it would make him feel better. She wanted to go because she needed to express her own feelings to Mohama before he was lowered down into the ground. Silence filled the moment as Asia didn't respond to Issei's comment. She finally spoke up a few moments after. "You know, Issei," Asia started. "Yeah, Asia." He didn't know, but he wanted to find out. "I am able to feel your emotions. Other people's feelings add to mine as well. I hate it when people are sad, but it happens all the time. I can't prevent that." Issei forgot she was an empath, and feeling sad must make her feel 10 times worse. "I'm sorry, Asia." Issei tried to be less sad for Asia, but wasn't able to become happy on the spot. Didn't you just tell me not to apologize? Issei, you should heed your own advice. The girl was witty. Issei smiled. You're too clever for your own good, Asia. Asia smiled back. There doesn't exist anything as too clever, Issei. I want to do something to give back to you. You've helped me out so much, Asia. She was definitely someone he wanted to keep around. She was too useful, and it looked like both of them could benefit off the relationship. There is something you can do, Issei. Asia answered Issei. There was something she wished for. Anything, Asia. Issei didn't have any money, but he would grant her practically any favor she asked for, short of killing himself or other people. Can you say my name one last time? She still liked it when he said that shitty pronunciation of her name. Issei couldn't imagine liking it if someone called him Eyes, but Asia seemed to really enjoy it when Issei butchered her name. Issei smiled sadly. Asia. He said her name in practically every other sentence, but it still never ceased to make her smile. Issei smiled along with her. The sun set as Asia and Issei sat on Mohama's porch, darkness falling over them both, shadowing them further in the shade.